Far away, inside a towering castle, a summoning ripped open straight from another world, and the whole massive room erupted as steam hissed and swallowed the air. A whole crowd spilled into the middle of the room, confused, terrified, and with no clue how they'd ended up here, while the girl in a school uniform gasped. I was just headed to school, so why am I stuck in this strange place now? For the past few years, the kingdom has been locked in a brutal war with demons scorching every victory and racking up heartbreaking losses. Until now, they're teetering on the edge of a national collapse. So they pulled in people from another world powered up, ready to swing so they could help crush the enemies. And man, did the summoned heroes deliver, answering the king's call. The 18th generation of them, the great heroes themselves. A bunch of strangers are staring like, wait, what's happening? They're not even trying to get it. They just keep yelling about why they're heroes. The kingdom's people are lining up to test their skills. And in the crowd, one girl has a super rare power, divine scythe. When everyone spots those schoolgirl traits on her, they're stunned into silence. And you can tell right away, this skill is a total win. The girl froze when the magician pointed straight at her, and the whole crowd snapped their attention onto her. Then she looked around and realized the others had another rare gift too. They call it the power you receive when you're pulled into a new world. A blessing handed down by the gods. The king roars that no power can be handed out like a gift. Skills are only granted by the gods themselves. And the people standing here, they've been yanked from another world, loaded with divine blessings to serve their will. That's who they are. Heroes. The crowd can't decide what to feel, faces lit with joy while confusion swirls in their eyes because heroes with strange, powerful abilities suddenly get ripped away and thrust into an entirely different world. Lady Momoko tries to speak up and deny it, but before she can, a kingdom resident cuts in and boasts about the divine scythe, a skill that can wipe out higher demons with just one clean swing. The king can't stop smiling between all these people. The skills are top tier, and this time the summoned crew blows him away. So a subordinate rushes up and shouts the good news straight to him. Calling him my lord, the robed man steps up and introduces the summoned Norio Itonami, then flat out claims this hero has 0 abilities. And yeah, when you check the character window, the boy truly has none. Once he spotted the Itinerami, the king didn't say a word, just stared, and the poor young man, stuck in that ridiculous pose, held his breath, waiting to see what his lord would do next. The city's alive and loud crowd streaming through the streets, then slipping down into the metro tunnels, while towering multi-story buildings and offices crowd the skyline, standing shoulder to shoulder like unmovable walls. Itanami Norio lets out a heavy sigh, trapped again in the grind of corporate slavery. Then he watches the subway choke with people so tightly there's no breathing room, steps inside anyway, and thinks, this is not where I'm supposed to be right now. Since the carriage is packed to the brim, he snaps with frustration and jams himself inside, refusing to wait for the next train. Then, boom! His nose collides with something soft. It's a plump man. He scans his surroundings like, where am I? Then the man steps up and tells him, I'm God. All he could think about was his own death. Then God revealed it. This boy had been yanked to another world. And Zeus, the king of the gods, had chosen him. Athena runs the whole system as their administrator, but the other gods throw a fit over how she treats men, so the clueless stuff gets handled by this plump guy instead. Norio fires back the same question about the summoning administrator, but the boy has no clue what's unfolding until the god steps in and introduces himself as Festus, grinning like he's built for this, and hands the boy a seriously unusual skill. This was Hephaestus's first ever time handing out a skill, so he geared up like it was do or die. Meanwhile, Itonami, shaking with nerves, blurted that if it turned out to be something truly amazing, he didn't know if he could even accept it. Hephaestus thrusts out the weapon. Smithing feat, he forged, Master of Excellence, then reaches forward and drops a glittering sphere into his hand, while Norio looks like the divine gift is the last thing he wants. The man warns that the skill is brutally hard to use, but insists the boy will handle it for sure, and those words send his panic through the roof. Hephaestus thrusts the sphere forward and slams it toward the young man's chest, roaring that he poured his heart into forging this Master of Excellence skill. Then the young man grins and demands he use it to the fullest in his brand new world. The boy still remembered every word God said to him the night before he got pulled into another world. And the moment he arrived, chaos erupted because the summoned one had 0 skills the first time that had ever happened. Itanami whirls around to face the king, and the worry hits him without skill. Humans stand no chance, so he's sure he can't fight off the demons. Noriel wanted to ask the king something, so he blared at everyone to shut up, and before anyone could even react, the Melord shout slammed out the answer, saying nobody would ever come back from it. That boy didn't want to ask, but Momoko's panic took over as she blurted out that he couldn't send the words back. Moloid shot back that they could summon heroes to their world, yet sending them home wasn't something they knew how to do. Only the Demon King holds the path back, so the heroes have no choice but to storm the front and crush his army. Utonami swears that without his powers, he can't even step into this war, so what good is he left standing there? Then, Noiri leaned in and asked the king for something huge, just a piece of land. The boy confessed he wanted to flip his life for the better, because right now he felt useless in the kingdom. And that request left the king completely stunned. Once he grabs that land, the distance from the kingdom doesn't matter. He'll vanish and live by himself, far from them all. Since there's no going back, the boy rips himself free from the life of a corporate slave. With a face full of confidence, he's ready to kick off his second life in this world, and the king's men are left staring in shock at the summoned hero's boldness, because he's got zero abilities. Itonami stands there with the guide, staring out over a dead, endless desert, no matter where you look, and from this moment on, every inch of it falls under the boy's control. He swears this was bought by His Highness for Nueri, and that's why his pay came too. Now the young man can live here however he wants. Getting knighted and handed an uncharted territory basically screams, this isn't Kingdom Land. And Itami still can't wrap his head around it, because to him, it's normal for a king to just buy a hero a new world. The guide practically beams and says, this is amazing, because anything beyond the kingdom's borders isn't their territory. And since that place hasn't been mapped by the kingdom, the boy won't have to pay the king a single thing. Itanami can't help but beam. Now he's finally free to farm his heart out. And right after that, the guy drops into a full-on begging pose and demands payment for the trip he just gave the young man. Once the payment hits his hands, the guide strides off and snaps, from here on, the kingdom won't ask me for a thing. Then he pushes the boy away, daring him to do whatever he wants no matter if the kid lives or dies. Nori managed a goodbye to the man, but guilt hit hard because they were shelling out money for someone who just didn't have the skills they desperately needed to survive the war against the demons. Staring out over a valley of abandoned fields, I realized this place was about to teach me what it means to start a whole new life right here, right now. Most heroes set off on a wild adventure, team up to smash every obstacle, and wind up taking down the ultimate boss, then bask in the fame, but this boy couldn't care less about any of that. As Itani kicks off his journey, he sizes up the king and his subjects and calls them desperate, then trudges along the empty boulder-strewn road, telling himself he can finally live in quiet peace, just him and this new world. He doesn't want to cross paths with them again, so he's hunting for the farthest place he can get, miles away from the kingdom. He stands by the sea, letting the salty breeze smack his face, convinced there's nowhere on earth better than right here. He threw his hands up in pure joy, felt freedom hit his chest, and yelled that he'd stay right here and turn this place into his own personal kingdom. Nori decides he's going to secure his own water before this becomes a problem later, so he plops down on the stones right by it, tastes the water himself, and checks if it really is seawater. He scooped a little water into his palm and took a taste on the spot, and it turned out to be fresh lake water. He lit up when he spotted a sea creature's tentacles poking out from under the stones in the water. Then the thought hit him hard. Octopuses don't live in shallow water, and they definitely don't live in fresh water. He's not buying this at all because the big job of figuring out where that octopus is supposed to be in the so-called lake can wait right now. It's all about one thing, food, and they need it fast for what's coming next. He snatched the tentacles, yanking hard to pull the creature out, then his footing betrayed him, and with no grip under his shoes, he slid straight toward the water. Diving under the waves, Atunami blasts back up with his eyes wide open, and that same octopus is still perched on his head. He shot up to his full height, then tasted the water, and damn, it hit him as insanely salty, which totally threw him, but once he thought it through, the moment it really settled in, it was plain, fresh, and completely normal. Itonami shot a quick double check again, then cupped water in his palms to confirm his suspicions. With an octopus perched on his head, he chugged water, then froze again, stunned that it was still perfectly drinkable. Grinning from ear to ear, he blurts that the new world is incredible, then he hauls himself up from the water and realizes this place won't bring him any trouble. He yanks the octopus off his head, and all he can think about now is one thing: food. After tossing the sea creature into the container, Itanami realizes he's got 0 seasonings on hand, so he decides to boil the octopus in plain salt water. Noari is itching to light his very first fire, so he grabs a hunting knife, hacks a hole into a dry wooden stick, and carves a sharp notch to set it all up. He'll jam the stick into the hollow and start grinding until sparks catch and coal-hot embers form from the friction. Then he'll whisk those glowing coals straight onto the brushwood he set aside. Itonami took a trembling breath, hauled every ounce of strength he had, and poured his entire soul into the very first fire he'd ever made. With his mind set on the task, the boy spun the stick between his palms at a blazing speed, pouring every bit of effort into it. Then the flame snapped up on the very first try. And that sudden blaze freaked him out more than he ever expected. Deep underwater, some poor creature sat on a lit pot, furious bubbles boiling over the fire. Then Nori grabbed a plate and chopsticks, and while she crunched an octopus tentacle, all that army in her mind could think about was how fast that fire had finally caught. With a grin blazing across his face, the boy brags about his killer survival skills. Then it hits him. Hephaestus, the god of the hearth, said the young man's gift isn't just good, it's straight up superiority. After mulling over the man's words, Ngwari snapped to action. He marched right up to a huge field packed with plants to verify the truth. He whips his sickle arm through the air and roars to trigger his Master of Supremacy ability. A massive strip tore through the air along his sweeping hand, smashing everything in its path so intense it left him speechless, like he couldn't believe he'd even pulled off something like that. And the facetist never even managed to describe the full power he had just unleashed. And somehow, it clicks. He finally grasps what a good life actually looks like. He grabs a hoe and goes for the same move he used with the sickle. He drives it into the ground and boom, the exact same miracle hits again. Noir's eyes widen in shock, but her smile says she's absolutely thrilled by what he can do. He crouched down to inspect the ground after using his skill, and the soil was crushed and turned so perfectly that the boy didn't have to lift a finger, because he'd already pictured exactly how huge the bed should be. Itonami declares that the masterwork Hephaestus granted him doesn't just stay with the boy, it supercharges every single thing he grabs, multiplying its power with every touch. The young man realized his new ability could launch his farming into the sky, since everything came so easily to him, so he didn't waste a second, kept working like crazy, and in his garden he planted weird seeds he'd snatched from the city. Nori's by his beds, letting out a relieved breath, proud as hell even if he has no clue what he's actually planted, but if it all sprouts and the boy can harvest it, he won't lose sleep over food anymore, because even the worms are already living in the soil. While the plant slowly grew, the young man grabbed his fishing gear because tonight he needed a real catch for dinner. With his feet in the sand, Itanami sits on the shore and fishes like he owns the world, thinking life would drag on forever if he worked for the company. Yet thanks to her facetist, he can literally control the waves. The boy blurts out his gratitude to the facetist for this incredible skill because someday Noire is going to feast on seaweed and rice. Right when he zoned out chasing dreams, his fishing rod suddenly yanked hard and he fought back, hauling the line toward himself with everything he had. From the way the line screamed, he knew the hook had snagged something absolutely gigantic. A long-haired girl burst up out of the water and snatched the bait, caught Itonami completely off guard, like the ocean just threw him a curveball. Stunned by what's unfolding, he yanks the fishing rod harder without even thinking it through. Because he didn't reel in dinner, he hooked a girl. When he spotted her, tangled up in fishing line, he snapped his eyes to her tail and understood, right there, that a real mermaid was standing in front of him. But then he snapped back to reality right as the mermaid called him a peasant in this disgustingly hypocritical tone, furious that he even dared to pull her out like this. The young man didn't dare argue, because the hostility in her voice made it clear he'd get nowhere. The girl shrieks that now he's got her, he's forced to marry her because in this new world, that's the law. Aiden snapped, fed up with that claim because the distance between them vanished to absolute zero in an instant. He just snagged a wife from another world, then the mermaid blows up because she got captured by some hillbilly. And that kind of humiliation hits a Murph Oak resident like her harder than anything now she's been cast out. And the loser hands over his body and heart to the winner. With the hook still clamped in her mouth, she collapses into cries because autonomy finally grabbed her, and it is nothing like what the boy had pictured. With the problem finally gone from her mouth, the mermaid crumpled into tears. She'd been shamed beyond repair, and she knew she'd never go back to the way things were. Noiri tried to object like, the girl was the one who got hooked herself, but she shuts it down fast and won't even listen. Mermaids are proud, and they hate humans and living beings, so the guy has no choice. He's got to handle it any way he can. She shrieks at him, like how in the world did a mermaid, a living fish, get dragged onto shore by someone like him? It wrecks her pride, and now she can't go back to the sea. The mermaid keeps shrieking that this is karma and that she has no choice but to marry him. Like fate's claws won't let go, and from this point on, her autonomy has to be the one calling the shots. For this kid, it's totally not what he's used to. He's been warned that in this world, even marriage between different species comes with a whole lot of trouble. Staring at the girl's tail, he couldn't shake the feeling he'd never end up with her because his worst fear was that her wild thoughts would never come true. She pulled out a bottle packed with a strange, otherworldly liquid and started taking one gulp after another. After the girl swallowed the elixir, a brutal flash of light burst from her side and the boy got blinded on the spot. The mermaid's tail slowly reshapes into human legs. Then the guy freezes in shock, stares, and turns away, mortified, because now she can stand without any clothes covering her lower body. The mermaid stands tall and insists she won't ever be happy on Earth until fate hands her a chance to have a child, and after that, the boy won't dare complain about her anymore. Itunami yells that he gets it all and demands something, anything to cover himself, and the young man realizes he panicked too hard and just accepted it on the spot. Now all he's got is an empty field, while the girl refuses to wear the clothes Noire gave her. He snapped at her, straight up, refused to marry her unless she was willing to wear pants. And when Itanami stands by the flower beds, he tells her he can only sew the clothes the girl truly wants, but right now, he has no home. A young man showed up to plow the field, and the moment he started, they spotted sprouts popping up in no time at all. Tiny sprouts burst up in every bed, and the boy and the woman he'd one day call his wife, standing right there, couldn't believe what they were seeing. He couldn't stop wondering if this was one of the wild abilities he'd been handed back then, because if the boy wasn't wrong, he once swore he'd given him supreme power to use all kinds of tools. That newly married girl couldn't stop wondering what her fresh husband had been planting. She knew he didn't have a clue whether it was fruits or vegetables, so he marched right over to check it out, and the young man goes, "I just want a simple life." The girl snaps at the land's owner as nothing but trouble, and Itonami shoots back that he knows nothing about the fish's way of life then. She calmly says she gets it all. Her husband wants is peace. Noir smirks as she rubs her confidence in your face, then stands proud and solemn, daring you to trust her words. Healing is the mermaid's original power, and this girl can heal with expert level magic too, but the young man just didn't get what they were saying, and that cluelessness made the girl snap with irritation. With a bright grin and full-on pride, she tells him not to be shy, ask her anything he doesn't know. Then she starts pulling off her pants, and Utonami's embarrassment hits like a truck. She bolted toward the water, screaming that she'd grab a few things from the house, then dove in, and bam! She transformed back into a mermaid. He had no choice but to stare, heart pounding, begging to know what the heck just happened. He slipped into the forest, convinced that the mermaid was dead set on making him her husband, when really all he craved was a way to outrun the nonstop chaos of everyday life. With a small hatchet in hand, he figured there was zero promise she'd ever come back, so he didn't waste a second. Itanami started chopping into a tree, planning to build a simple house from scratch. After a bit, the boy beams at his build masterpiece, relishing how simple it is while basking in peaceful, totally alone silence. He's absolutely thrilled. He never imagined he could build a whole house in just an hour. And Noiri's so proud he calls himself a real man. Now he's sprawled out on the bed, catching his breath, because even with everything Hephaestus gave him, that kind of work still wipes him out. Exhausted from the day's fight, Itani finally figured out why he felt so weak, because the mermaid had latched onto him. And when he thought of her again, dread hit hard. She wasn't coming back. While Noiri was knocked out cold on his brand new bed, the girl burst back in, and her shocking look jolted him awake. The mermaid practically dove into his arms again, still dressed only above the waist, because she downed the very same elixir once more. Confused and furious, Autonomy snapped at her to put the trousers back on, but she hated them and didn't want to. He demanded to know where she'd been all day, and worry gnawed at the young man's heart. She just stared back at him, said nothing, and turned away. With arms crossed tight over her chest, the mermaid snaps that this isn't a human problem at all. Commoners like them don't care a bit about what the girl thinks. Right as she was heading out the door, she told him she'd been struggling with cooking, and the second cooking hit his ears. Everything snapped into focus. They stood there, facing a huge shaitan, where an aggregate machine churned out magical medicine. Beaming like she's about to change everything, the girl says that with a pinch of magic power and the right potions, she can brew a magical medicine that does different things, and then she proves it in front of everyone who's never had magic. Itonami pressed her about the cold medicine, and the girl puffed up with pride, saying she'd take care of it later once every last preparation was finished. The mermaid dashed off in a flash for something important, and the young man snapped at her to be careful, because he was already itching to threaten her for lying. But before he could get a word out, she came rushing back, gripping a massive fish in her hands like she'd proved him wrong. That tuna's name is Ba-Ng, and its meat is packed with a ridiculous amount of mana. Nori has zero clue what any of that means, and he's not even shocked. It's magical. He's blown away by how massive the fish is. With one hand, she slices the fish into pieces like her fingers are twin swords, and Itanami can't stop thinking it. Then the mermaid starts cooking, cranking the water up to a boil, tweaking and holding the pressure steady, and finally grinding an ingredient down into powder. Next, the girl whips out that Ban fish fertilizer like a flex, and Wari can't help but eye it with suspicion. Fish fertilizer always feels sketchy. If the boy spread that fertilizer across his farm, he'd rake in a faster harvest, so the mermaid grinned and dove right into the work. Itonami watched, puzzled, because she felt like she wasn't just helping. She really wanted to help him grow those fields. The very next day, every single plant on the land burst into fruit. They both stare in shock at what the fish fertilizer does. Then the young man points the plants into place with those wooden pegs he set up beforehand, grabs a tomato straight off the bush, and dares to take a bite to test it. Aidens can't get enough of the veggie flavor, then he points at the girl and calls her a very unusual mermaid San. Meanwhile, watches the young man's moves with tired, wary eyes. The girl grabbed the tomato from the bush and took a bite, then her whole face went slack in silence. Noiri immediately tried to soothe her, muttering that this kind of food just might not sit right with mermaids. Was wrong because his future wife took one bite and called it delicious. She stared in shock, realizing Earth people munch on stuff like that every single day. The mermaid dug the carrot up, ready to taste it again, and chase that familiar flavor, only this time it hit different. Etonami cut her off and said, there are different kinds of veggies, and that they've got to be cooked before anyone can eat them. So of course the girl groans like it's the biggest hassle ever, being all moody just because she wants more vegetables. Then Noire cranked up the cooking in the seawater, while the mermaids lounged on a nearby rock, keeping watch by the soup vent. He thrust the plate at her with that same veggie dish, daring her to taste each bite side by side and find the flavors. Etonami couldn't shake the fear that she might hate what he cooked, but the moment the mermaid tasted his soup, her face lit up because it was insanely tasty. The young man ladles himself some soup, and you can practically see the joy lighting up his face like, this is how it should feel every single day. The girl, still savoring every bite, turns to her future husband and asks, tell me, do people really get to eat food this insanely good all the time? Then Itanami snaps back, saying it's not that simple, he wants more than a tweak, toss in some real meat, and if they can, whip up a signature spice that makes the whole dish explode with flavor. The mermaid is totally blown away. How could food taste this good and still get even better? Nori grins and says, it's real, all you need is the right seasonings. First things first, he's got to grind up the spices because he's craving miso and soy sauce for the cooking. And yeah, he already has the meat lined up. With a bright grin, the boy says he needs equipment too, and Itanami can't get enough of those veggies, so he dives headfirst into his secret, pleasure-filled world. Suddenly, it hit him. He still had no clue what her name was, the mermaid who turned into a human. Her name was Plati. Ida wanted to blurt out his name, but then it hit him since he was stuck in another world. Maybe he'd have to rewrite it. With a grin lighting up his face, Itanami stepped forward and introduced himself as Kadan, telling her he was genuinely thrilled to meet her. With fierce slurps, Plati tears into her husband's chopped up food and the stairs, and just like that, everyday life with the mermaid kicks off. This is Itonami Nori now. He's called Kidan, and he's been dropped here from another world, and a brand new life starts with a mermaid wife. Meanwhile, the boy sits on the floor, rubbing his back, because that floor made pain hit the moment he woke up. He scanned the bed and realized the Plati was gone, and it hit him that she'd woken up before he ever did. Even if she looks like a regular girl, she's still a mermaid, so when the guy asks if someone like that can actually sleep on a board, he's left totally baffled. Because up close, it looks like a fish is catching Z's on a cutting board. Keaton can't stop worrying the mermaid will hate him for snagging her on the hook, so he shoves the fear aside and decides to ask her straight up. Right before he could even step out to the door, Plati burst into a shrill scream so loud the birds in the whole area bolted. Keaton snaps, "What happened?" And she yells that someone's out in the fields, pointing at a straw scarecrow crow wearing a hat with wooden hands. Breathed desire relief, and he finally said, "It was nothing, just a scarecrow. He'd built it himself. His very first one." Keaton leans in and says it's a fake monster, its arms swing like they're alive, and even its fingertips are fitted with tiny wooden swords. And then he adds, the real reason it's all set to scare off birds that would otherwise wreck the crop fields. She's convinced that Scarecrow is alive, moving around just to spook the birds, but the guy bursts out laughing, shuts her down, and says, the Scarecrow can't move at all. Right in front of this girl, he swore that if they planted him in the field, the birds would mistake him for a man and leave the crops alone. Too bad he never noticed the Scarecrow behind him, waving its wooden swords like it owned the place. And the girl only then told him the truth. He spun around and stared at the chaos of life he'd just unleashed, completely stunned because he never meant to make something like this. He'd only crafted an ordinary scarecrow, built to shoo birds away. Keaton's mouth hangs open as he realizes they're really moving. He's stunned, because the girl thought the scarecrow should move, not something else, and this should not be happening at all then. He stares at his own hand and wonders if it's his strength making it happen. Plati couldn't stop herself as she stared at her palm, and then her brand new husband finally admitted the truth. He'd been yanked here by a god from another world, and he's a complete stranger in this place. Kidding stared at the scarecrow's weird moves and was 100, certain it all came from some power God gave him. Then the girl caught on. She leaned in and asked him, like it was obvious, if he was actually a summoned hero, and when the boy heard that, his eyes went wide, because she knew. Plati crosses her arms like she's proud of herself and goes, of course I knew. Then she leans in and explains that in every era, summoning magic is performed to yank a hero from another world. But she couldn't stop thinking about that boy because heroes don't just exist, they battle demons to save everyone. And right then, the boy with a rosy blush nods along like he totally gets it. Rolling her eyes, she demands to know what a hero is doing here, right where they are now, so she finds a cheerful cat perched by the crops, quietly refusing the whole hero thing because he's just hiding and doesn't want to be one. Even the mermaid finds it weird, but somehow the boy doesn't flinch, just grins while clutching a ripe vegetable, and keeps listening as the girl talks. Plati said it like a punchline. You look like you belong with our tribe, the kind that sticks together, because people from another world are weak, and if you're all alone, a monster snatches you up and kills you on the spot. He didn't brush off what his wife said because she truly thought he was special, but he shook his head, sitting beside the grown bushes, tomato in hand. With that grin on his face, he leaned in and reminded the mermaid of the truth. He might be single, but he's not alone. He's with her. Plati can't stop asking herself, does he look strong or totally weak? She's got zero clue. Meanwhile, right behind her, the guy's straight up savoring his breakfast, munching on a fresh, ripe tomato. Still squatting there, He blurted that he'd spotted her heading out that morning and swore something was off. So when that question hit, Plady froze in shock. The boy had totally thrown her under the bus, and she was so obviously flustered, she didn't even want to give him an answer. She blurts out that she's going to the toilet. Of course, then gasps that regular Earth people are really this nosy, and Keaton only shrugs in awkward embarrassment. Then he blurts out, "Where do you go when you need the bathroom?" And before she can even answer, he realizes it on his own and dashes straight to the sea. After a tense pause, it hit him he had to dig a hole for a temporary toilet, so he dropped to the ground, and in his fight to survive, he totally forgot one crucial thing. People alone are painfully weak creatures. One tiny insect can rattle them. And don't even get started on wild mammals. With a huge sigh of relief, he's lucky enough to live with Plotty now and deep in his chest. That relief hits like pure release. But then the boy snapped back to one thing, what the girl would think about all of this, and about the time they'd spent together. Plotty, freshly headed out for wherever he'd been, thrust a plate forward and flashed the starfish like it was a trophy. Keaton leaned in and asked what was on the plate, and the girl said it was one of the sea monsters. This one gulps up every scrap of organic matter drifting in the ocean, basically acting like a sea cleaner. Plotty also insists those creatures can purify water, yet the boy can't quite wrap his head around what these sea monsters are truly for. She decided to prove the sea cleaner's work and snapped open her own penknife, pressing the blade against her forearm. Then she slashed, poured her blood into a container packed with starfish, and Keaton's stomach dropped at what she was doing. With a smug grin, Plotty orders him to watch as the sea monster, the sea cleaner, goes to work. Cadet yanked the girl's arm and crushed down on the blood vessels in her forearm, then screamed at her like it was all her fault, while she just stared back with a sweet, innocent face and said nothing at all. With a furious face, the boy tells her, "Don't do this anymore." He's freaking out over her, and after the guy finally calms down, he admits shy and clueless, and then he blurts out an apology for what he did, right? Keaton's nerves don't just come from fear. God's power in his hands is making him spiral, always on edge. But when Plety finally faces him, she flashes a smile and straight up says she likes him a lot and shuts down everything he tried to say. Now that she's his wife, she vows to stand by him no matter what, and Keaton freezes, shocked and embarrassed by her words. The mermaid figured he'd never go for it, but nope. She huffed, crossed her arms again, and declared with pride that a wife's job is to stand by her husband. With a grin, he turns to her and blurts out thanks. She doesn't even answer, just turns away with her pride bruised. The toilet's finally done, and another life problem is gone. Breakfast time, Plady reminds her. Deep past the edge of this world's endless sea, a brutal roar crawls out of a rocky cave inside. A demon tangled in the pitch black dark suddenly feels an awful pressure in the air, like something is charging closer. Plotty yanked Kidan over to show off her fresh outfit today. She ditched trousers and whipped a skirt out of fabric. Just yesterday, she wore trousers, and now she's backflipping into a whole new look. She spins in front of him, grinning, and tells him she's been trying to remake the furoshiki she packed in her luggage. He hesitated, words tumbling over his tongue. He tried to say it wasn't worth it, but the girl waved him off, telling him not to worry. Then the mermaid just grinned and said straight up, it's the wife's duty to stay beautiful for her husband. And honestly, nothing about it felt strange at all. The girl clutched her work briefcase and said it was ages ago when she left. Then Kidan just stared, clueless about where she'd gone, and when she perked up with that bright, eager grin, she told him she'd found a dungeon. Then the boy started mulling over what a dungeon really is, somewhere underground where you might dig up treasure, stumble on secret shops, or go toe-to-toe with a brutal evil, with the top floor reserved for the boss's lair. Still, he cornered Plady and demanded to know what dungeon she meant, and she just grinned, said it was way better to see it than to hear it, and shoved him along to move faster. They finally tracked down that brutal, rocky caveway off in some completely different direction from where they were living. Kidan was absolutely wiped out. They'd marched for 2 solid hours just to reach this cave, while Plotty had spotted this dungeon in the middle of working the field. It's a cave dungeon, born where mana runs thick, even though it just looks like a plain old cave. That unsuspecting young guy didn't stand a chance. One brutal gust of wind slammed into him and dragged him straight into the dungeon. Kitten felt like some unseen giant beast was licking every inch of his face, and Plate stared at him like, what on earth? Because his expression was weird, shocking, and completely unexpected. Power surges and loops through the entire world until, in certain places, it gets cut off and piles up like a ticking bomb. This place turns into a dungeon, so mana thickens like a curse and mutates into a monster. Then bam! It's born here, shimmering as it slithers across the ground and even prowls beneath the water. Kadana's body shook with fear, and then hot panic surged through her. This kind of dungeon trip could go sideways fast, but Plady didn't care, because they were already there. Kicking away the sweat slick of the moment, the guy let out a breath of relief because his wife could handle this. Sure, wiping out a whole dungeon takes serious technique, but all she has to do is beat them one by one. And that's why the young man keeps bouncing back, again and again. Stung by what just happened, he didn't even realize he had to shield her because now they were married. He told her to wait. She spun around, shocked, since just a minute ago he hadn't even hinted he'd go with her. Proud and full of sacrifice, Kitten burst toward her and declared, "This is for your husband, we're going together." They stepped into the dungeon and got boxed in by towering brick walls. Not the usual outside stones, then torches roared to life, blazing down every corridor. The boy craned his neck and realized, shocked, this dungeon wasn't dungeon, like at all. It looked straight up like a castle inside. And the girl, she was just as baffled. She froze, spotting a sketchy puff of black smoke creeping in from ahead, so the mermaid stayed on high alert and barked at Keaton to run immediately. But when the smoke cleared, it wasn't just trouble, it was magical beasts and insects charging at them full force. They've busted out of the mess somehow, so the stunned guy freezes behind his wife, who's ready to fight off demons, while the boy's numb with horror from everything he just witnessed, and Pletty screams at her husband to run, all the while digging through her bag like her life depends on it. 3 test tubes sat there, their contents shrouded in mystery, and with a sprint, the girl hurled those potions straight at the beast. The creatures ripped apart in midair like a violent whirlwind, dissolving into tiny sparks until all that's left is a lone shadow. Kitten's jaw drops at what he's seeing. The monster hurtling toward them crumbles into dust right before their eyes, and Platty snaps, "Yeah, but that's not all." There were only 3 test tubes, one that froze their bodies solid, one that shocked a demonic beast until it seized, and the last one was acid that melted away every cell in every inch of the body, leaving only the skeleton standing. Plotty crosses her arms like she owns the room and declares that mermaids can whip up combat magic potions just as easily, and then you realize her husband's still haunted by what he saw because the trauma hits him hard. As the girl charges ahead and smashes the last monsters, Keaton blurts out that she's the deadliest creature alive despite the fact she just saved him. The boy remembered his wife's courage because he couldn't dump this on her, especially since he had 0 tools with him, so he was basically useless in a fight then. Tucked in the corner by the wall, he spotted a glittering weapon, a battle sword. Yanking up the massive 2-handed sword, Kidon grinned like he just won, because his master's lethal skill was going to crank up his damage while the girl kept cheerfully tossing potions left and right, and doubt started gnawing at him. He shouted for his wife to pause, and when he realized he was running on fumes, he insisted, "I already won, I'm heading home soon." She nodded, and he spun back to keep going, then fired another question, "How many monsters did we smash?" The girl darts her eyes around the dungeon, panic buzzing in her chest, everything feels off, and she knows it. The young man leans in, hanging on every word she says. The girl shrugs and says the dungeon's totally fine, but the commander-in-chief monster is ahead, probably lurking deep in the dungeon, waiting. She turns to face Gidon and swaps commander-in-chief monster for boss, because she needs an explanation that won't confuse her husband. She's saying there's a boss in this dungeon, and dungeons like that are ridiculously rare. On top of that, this place is brutally, dangerously extreme. Taking it step by step, the girl leans in and tells Keaton there are only 2 kinds of bosses that can power the main dungeons. One of them is a dragon. Right by the cave entrance, the same brutal surge of magical energy slammed into them again so hard, the guy got blown back a little yet. Plotty didn't flinch one step. She knew exactly where that massive power was flowing from. After all, he's stuck in this dungeon with them, so when that sinister presence starts closing in, the young ones snap to their feet, holding their breath, waiting for that boss to finally show. Kidding acts like he's hunting a dragon and presses Plotty for answers, then his wife snaps to attention, and her eyes say it's not just a dragon, it's way worse. Yeah, this is the boss, the undead king, the king with no life in him. The undead crowd hangs over him like a moonlit shadow, and when he locks eyes on you, there's not a shred of mercy, no sign anyone's getting out of here unharmed. With sweat pouring down his face in pure terror, Kadan blurts out the girl's question, "What is that creature?" And she, all geared up for battle, snaps back that it's either a legendary magician or a high priest. And Immortal King, ruling from the very top of the undead, comes into the world with deadly high magic and razor-sharp intelligence. Facing a terrifying undead king and a dungeon in the same breath can only mean one thing: certain, brutal death. Keaton refuses to let his brand new life ending way too fast get cut short, and he won't back down. The undead king inhales, unleashes a surge of energy, and whispers that something feels off in his veins. Then he vows to turn the boy into a living corpse and claim him as a friend. The girl hucked her potion test tubes at the demon, praying for some kind of miracle. Then they finally slammed into the king's skull, and his bones melted, first only to snap back into place with the crown, showing one brutal truth: her potions can't hurt him. Keaton clocked it right away. The monster was healing itself mid-fight. The girl didn't even blink. She'd already expected that. And the demon, it was immortal. With a lethal enemy bearing down on them, Plenty yells that she's got potions stacked and ready, then snaps, "Run, get out of here, and do it fast." When he hears the words, the young man instantly weighs his chances run and survive. He can still live out his plan, but the boy erupts in a scream. He can't let this happen. Then he reveals the one thing he grabbed on the way to the boss. Realizing potions were useless, he bolted straight at the undead king, sword gripped tight in his hand. Kaiden blared that he was her husband, begging her to save the girl. Then he lunged at that magical thing because one wrong move and it could turn him into a corpse in an instant. The girl's heart lit up at the young man's words, and with the kind of bold courage that feels like gentle hands on a proud soul, he lunged toward him like a hawk going for prey, ready to land a crushing blow until the king snapped, "Stop." He flopped onto the floor and declared, "I'm done." And right then, Kiren and Platis just froze, totally baffled. The king refuses to ever taste pain again, so when that young man swings open the holy sword, he's shocked by the raw, enormous power bursting out of it. The dumbfounded boy thrusts his holy sword up in front of his face, and Plotty just stayed quiet, no stepping in. Then the monster leaned in and demanded, "Where did you get that sword?" Then that monster that looked just like death jolted with a memory. His dungeon's holy sword, Kidan shot out an apology and reached to hand it back. The undead king declared that the sword was his now, and the holy blade didn't just sit there. It had a will, a craving to pick its own master, and it just chose this young man as its new owner. The undead king has been stripped of his treasure, and when that truth hits, relief floods his soul like, finally, the duty binding him to this world is over. He demands to know why he's been forced to face this, dragging this sword over to end the man who's basically immortal through a curse with it. The boy can cleanse the king, but the boy refuses. He even feels like he's not the right person to carry the sword's destiny as its master. He told them he'd come from another world, and back then God handed him power to unleash every tool to its fullest, so yeah, that's probably exactly why Kidan can swing the holy sword. The monster dropped to its knees and roared like it was summoning thunder, then proclaimed it was a gift from the gods straight from the legends, because this kind of insane ability isn't just a skill you can fit into any normal list. Every person who's ever been blessed by God earns the name hero. No question, those are truly holy people. The undead king bowed to the baffled Kidan, then wheeled toward the god-blessed visitors and demanded a little of their precious immunity. He's left completely stunned by what's happening, begging them not to bump him up to a higher rank also. Did Play T really expect her husband to be that cool? The undead king frowns, totally baffled. Why in the world did this young man show up here? Keaton answers, "I've only just moved in nearby." Then the girl cuts in fast, saying monster hunting is the resident's #1 job. Monster fur and bones get ground into the very stuff of magical tools, and some of it's even edible. The girl said it with pure bliss shining on her face. Her husband was sick of how she talked. She'd call the hospitality no big deal, and if a dungeon was nearby, she'd treat it like it was just handy. With pure glee in his eyes, he asked the king for permission to storm the dungeon and go berserk, and the king said yes. At first, the king even planned to tear into those monsters himself, and the young people helped him like crazy. Plot tie beams with pure happiness, pouring gratitude into the undead king for granting permission, and he sees nothing wrong with it. Just two of them, smiling side by side while, behind them, a boy stands frozen in stunned silence. The girl caught on that a friendship had grown between the king and them, so she stepped forward and introduced herself and Kidan too. She said she wanted to meet the evil spirits, and he froze for a second, realizing he'd completely forgotten his own name. Plutty stared at him, baffled, because she never saw the king forgetting his name coming. If he's remembering right, he used to be an archbishop in the church before he was ever born, and the mermaid leans in and listens to her new friend like every word is life itself. For some reason, he got left behind and the church squads tracked him all the way here then in this dungeon. The entity sucked up every last bit of mana it had gathered and unleashed a massive spell that finally tore him apart. He rotted here for hundreds of years, then the possession vanished, but his mind stayed blank, erasing even his own name. The king can't take it and breaks down, a single tear spilling from his eye. The husband and wife lean in with heartfelt pity for the lifeless king, absolutely devastated that a tragedy like this could happen to him. The entity said he was nothing but a worn-out old man who'd already stripped away the simplest will to live, like its meaning had vanished then. Once the children finally arrived, his crushing boredom eased just a bit, and the king had to be thrilled about it. Keaton's smile spread, and Plotty caught it right away. He leaned in and told his new buddy to drop by any time, because they'd be thrilled to welcome him with the veggies Kidan had cooked. Then the kid went on to call the king Sensei. She perked up and demanded to know why her husband had named him that, because the boy knew he'd been an amazing clergyman in life. The words they spoke landed on the lifeless king's body. He'd rotted in a dungeon for hundreds of years after the spell killed him. Even so, he stayed on his knees and thanked them for their kindness, and that's how they ended up with a good neighbor. Rushing toward the exit, Kidan screams at the sensei in pure panic that the sword won't let go. It refuses to leave him. The king bursts out laughing, and the girl freezes, hit with the truth that Blade doesn't just choose anyone, it loves him. And just like that, the guy finally gets the holy sword. Keaton shouted with pure joy, "It's done!" and the young man beamed like he'd just carved his dreams into reality. Pletty quizzed her husband about his brand new building, and he lit up as he showed her the whole thing, then proudly called it a forge furnace. He yanks out his holy sword and stares like it's pure magic. This blade can slice straight through a boulder like it's butter, and the girl finally drops the hint about what the holy sword is truly meant to do. Then the mermaid leaned in, hooked on the mystery, why build a forge furnace? And he shot back a reminder. He'd been handed a gift by the lifeless King Sensei. Platty finally clocked what the guy was talking about. The manor medal the sensei handed the boy as a thank you. That girl just can't stop looking up to him, calling him a magnanimous sensei, and inside the dungeon, the magic is so thick it clumps together into monometal, like the dungeon is handing them one insanely rare resource on a silver platter. Platty can't stop wondering what the boy is about to do next, because now that he's got this precious metal, he'll finally turn it into exactly what he's been craving for ages, and you can see it. He's already itching for what comes next. While Keaton hammers it into shape, the girl can't stop admiring the blade after all. It's made entirely of mana, so this thing just might turn into a real magic sword and reliable magic weapons. Don't come cheap. They start at 10 gold. He shows you what he cooked up, an honest-to-goodness frying pan and a knife with the sharpest blade he could possibly forge. Keaton sprinted out with kitchen utensils and practically beamed like a kid on a sugar rush, while the girl just stared in a daze, her mind stuck on a magic sword, dying to know what it really is. Then the boy finally started talking. He pointed out everything and named it one by one, because showing beats explaining, and right after that, he launched straight into cooking. Kaidian slices the veggies with that kitchen knife, then hurls them into a freshly forged magical frying pan to sizzle into golden fries. He tosses on salt and pepper like a Michelin star chef, making a show of it, while the girl can't wait a second more for him to taste it. The boy whipped up a plate of fried vegetables brand new on his menu, and Pettis practically exploded with joy, praising how sweet everything tasted. As she dug in, she realized something was different. Their dishes had changed, and Caden didn't just craft a frying pan and a knife, he made everyday plates too. The mermaid snapped back to her senses, furious. She can't make sense of why he's wasting mana metal right now, while the boy just stared, amazed at the miracle. The resource light warmed perfectly, never burned, and wiped clean with ease. Not a dream. This is a real fairy tale. With that, the boy's cooking skills level up just a bit, but enough to matter, and as soon as he's uprooted into this new world, a brighter smile finally takes over. Platty jolted like she'd been hit by an electric shock then. When he asked what recipes he wanted to add, he grinned while admiring his new cooking tool and said, "Yeah, of course there are, but it'll take a few more ingredients." The girl snaps, furious, demanding to know what else he needs. Then the young man's mind immediately clicks. He really wants meat. He leans in and says, "Add the meat and this dish will taste totally different." And the girl can't wait a second, so she hurries, invites him somewhere. They push deeper into the forest because Platty's a mermaid, and she's never laid eyes on the mountain monsters she's been dying to munch. He twists his sword in his grip and thinks they'll hunt the old-fashioned human way until the girl pipes up, saying, "Sure, there are monster birds too, maybe even a boar or deer," but she's not buying it. Mountain monsters are what you cook best. Platty grins and says people swear mountain monsters are ridiculously tasty. Then Keaton snaps that those beasts are basically just bargaining chips in this world. Then she turns to her husband and asks straight up what he thinks about caves, like where monsters even come from and how they're supposedly born in the dark. It's a cave dungeon, and this lifeless king, Sensei, wields his powers to wrestle the monsters under control, so they never escape. If mountain monsters really lived here, the entire peak would turn into a dungeon, so the girl pushes toward a solid, logical answer, making sure the young man gets it all and stops firing off questions. They came to a halt, and the boy just couldn't wrap his head around it. There was a real dungeon nearby, but the moment the shock hit, frustration followed fast because there weren't any normal animals around to eat. As they push into the forest thicket, darkness swallows the path ahead, light flashes back in a storm of glowing eyes like something hunting in the shadows. And right in front of them stands an entire pack of boars full-on monsters, totally not looking for peace or friendship. Platty grinned at the jackpot, right as Keaton started sweating with raw terror because no matter what, this new world still wouldn't stop freaking the kid out. He's terrified those boars look like they're itching for a fight, and the girl even names them on the spot. Square boars. Bloody is jumping for joy, yelling that this place is incredible, yet right beside them are two nearby dungeons, and Keaton's left frozen, stunned, and terrified because he can't see why anyone would be celebrating something like this. The moment the girl starts fighting, she grabs her potions and swings into action, and she begs her terrified husband to keep them off her for as long as he can. She swears she'll set everything down fast. Boars surged in one after another, charging the young man, clutching a holy sword. He wasn't ready to fight, but there was no way out, so he clenched his grip and did what had to be done. Brandishing that unstoppable sword, he cut down the boar one by one, and not a single one ever got the chance to lay a hand on him. Behind him sprawls a mountain of carcasses. Keaton grips his weapon and pants hard, barely holding on from exhaustion. Platty burst into cheers, bragging that he crushed it, She didn't even need to burn a single potion. The boy wasn't looking to throw down. He shrugged and said he only won because they kept piling in one after another, and somehow he came out on top at least now. They'll get to eat something besides vegetables because the mermaid can't wait to start cooking. With all that meat piling up, she urged them to hack it into cook-ready chunks and then freeze the lot with a potion. Kieran even started dreaming up a wheelbarrow plus a refrigerator just to keep the food safe. After a short grind, the boys slammed together exactly what he'd imagined, a fridge and a wheelbarrow packed to the brim with supplies. The young man leaned in and asked his wife about the freezing potion. She threw her arms across her chest, proud as can be, and basically said, "Don't doubt me." The girl had a whole stash of them. With tears streaking down his face, Keaton whispers, "I mean it," and believes she's thriving because their everyday life keeps getting better and better. And for her, that's the whole world. She perks up, clocks that this will sharpen his skills and make his dishes better, then demands he cooks faster only for the boy to burst out laughing at his wife's reaction. Wild boar is still pork, plain and simple, so if a young man wants to whip up something truly mouthwatering, he's going straight for the tonkatsu. He wipes the drool off his imagination and can only think about that crispy tonkatsu crust. Meanwhile, the girl is fuming because her husband daydreamed, yet she's still enjoying every second of it. But his dreams got crushed and replaced with dread because they'll have only a few ingredients again, especially when bread making hits the wall, and the real nightmare is the eggs. Even Plenty is fuming about it. Then he leaned in and asked the girl if this world had eggs just like the ones from another world. She snapped back. Furious, she'd heard landlubbers here try something similar, but in the mermaid realm, you'd never find anything like that. That crow dropped into their field like it owned the place. Just look at all the plenty it's brought with it. And Kitten mutters that this one won't cut it for cooking. Then the girl drops a radical idea, head back to the mountains and hunt the monster bird again, but the young man refuses because he's not about to go back. While he steels himself for the monsters he'll have to kill, a massive creature swoops through the sky behind him, and every second it closes the distance faster. Pressure slammed into him from behind, and he froze confused, then spun around to figure out why. The girl, locked on the creature, stared in shock and suddenly opened her mouth like she couldn't believe what she was seeing. Platy figured it was a bird or a plane, but Kidam swore it was a meteor hurtling straight at them at breakneck speed. The moment the creature surged right up to them and spun up a vortex of air, they finally clocked it. This wasn't some random monster. The girl didn't even look half as rattled as Kid N, and then it hit them. The winged terror was a real dragon. They invaded the dungeon, he rules. Now rage churns for their souls. She jerks a hand toward the mountain they came from. Plotty snaps to it. That's the dragon's dungeon. Cadence can't even speak. She just stands there, terrified, mouth hanging open. While the dragon's thunderous wings battered her with a roaring whirlwind, the girl quickly realized the truth. This dragon isn't just a monster, it's the ruler of this dungeon. With tears nearly spilling, the boy blurts to the mermaid, scrambling to repeat what she told him, that the dungeon had no ruler, and that's what he believed pulled the young man in. Grinsel Dragon Shroud, yeah, that's her name, keeps pressing the same question: who stormed her royal mountain dungeon without permission and slaughtered her minions? And the dragon knows it was that young man. He clutches his face with his hands, squirming to escape, and blurts out that they never knew. The mountain even had an owner. That winged powerhouse still hangs over them like a nightmare. Keaton blurts out an apology and swears he'll never go back there again, but the dragon won't even flinch, because the Grinsel Dragon Trout treats that as unforgivable. Those vile creatures smashed into her home and did whatever they pleased. Then the humans trampled her honor, so now she's coming to wipe out every last trace of them. Grinsel swears he'll wipe away the damage of their sins, and with raw, raging fury, he unleashes his fiery breath, trying to reduce them to burning ashes. Her fire surges like a blast wave, ripping across the entire land. Platy and Kaden are left utterly clueless about what to do next. The girl panics, convinced death is closing in for good. Then the boy snaps back into himself and remembers his holy sword. Like a real hero, he hurled his weapon into the fight, then threw himself in front of Platy to shield him from the flames, bracing to strike back at the dragon's blow. He sliced through the flames, chasing them. One more second of hesitation and it would have been game over. Grinsel Dragon Shroud is left staring in shock at what just happened. In her eyes, humans are nothing but lesser life forms, yet they still manage to protect themselves. Tearing through sheer exhaustion, the boy did it, saving them both from a death that was closing in fast. The girl finally accepted what happened, and then panic ripped through her as she realized what was really going on. Up in the air, Dragon Shroud can't believe it. There's no way a tiny human could swat away her death breath. Yet, it's happening. Meanwhile, Kiran isn't panicking for himself at all. He's only thinking about his wife, who's beaming because her beloved did it just like everyone expected. No. He didn't just taste the breath of death, its fire was utterly gone. At that moment, the boy thanked the gods that every single seedling had survived. Kidin whipped his gaze to the dragon with a grim stare, and the Grinsel dragon shroud immediately began to shudder. With the grace of a true gentleman from another world, he bowed deeply and begged for forgiveness for barging into the dungeon without permission, then dropped his one tiny condition. Sword held up in front of him, blade tip aimed at the dragon. He declares that if anyone here truly has a claim on this, then he's ready. He'll clash with the ruler to safeguard everything he holds dear. With his holy sword blazing out toward the dungeon dragon, he dares the monster to fight the boy in a deadly showdown, then holds his breath, praying the creature will just back off and vanish. Grinsel Dragon Shroud spotted the blade in that selfless kid's grip, then snapped her gaze to him. The dragon tried to blurt out something about the sword clenched in his hand, but the only thing the guy could come up with was blurting out, "Speak out." Keaton thrust his sword out in front of him and declared it was the very same holy blade that Grinsel Dragon Shroud had been eyeing an immortal king's sword he'd passed down to him. And yeah, the message was clear, this guy was insanely powerful. The dragon slams down on the ground and growls that it's the wrong answer, then the impact hits the young man so hard he freezes into a total stupor. That holy sword didn't just seem special, it truly belonged to Grinsel Dragon Vale. And when the monster lunged for its treasure, the youth nearly fell apart with fear, then the lifeless king finally spoke up, straight to the dragon. Grinsel Vale, and yeah, every word he said hit the mark. The young man, like Grinsel the dragon himself, never saw the master's sudden arrival coming, because the man had thrown himself in front of Kidan, shielding him with his own body. He unleashed his brutal power, blasting everyone back like a hurricane in human form. Then Sensei shoved the other lord out of the way. As the winged creature crumpled lifeless on the ground, its master snapped around and admitted, "This all happened because of me," then apologized with real regret, though the young man didn't fully get what that meant. That's when Plato stepped in, cutting through the confusion to lay out what was really going on. The immortal king told him, "Since I'm hunting whoever slipped into my mountain, I sent for you first." And the dragon snapped back, "You're a worthless corpse invading my territory." Then the sensei brought up Kidan's brand new neighbor. With a brutal, "Damn, neighbor," the dragon shot into the sky, chasing that cheeky little creature messing with his turf. The lifeless king caught his error, awkwardly chuckled, and wrapped up the whole misunderstanding. Yet, even after all that, the young man still didn't feel any better. He admitted the guilt because they really did sneak into Dragon Mountain without permission. And the young man swore that if anyone's at fault, it's them. Sensei doesn't push back. Because he's a human too, and he gets exactly why his friend feels that way. For people, dungeons aren't exactly treasure troves for raw stuff, forget ingredients and building materials, because these places are all about grinding nonstop for money and grabbing the essentials you can't afford to miss. Even the lifeless king spits the truth. That's exactly why people band together to storm dungeons and take them down. The immortal king turns to Grinsel Vale and says the dungeon master has invaders coming all the time, so the dragon just swallowed hard. Pointing a finger at his winged powerhouse neighbor, he growls that getting furious over just a slice of the dungeon being taken and then marching out to punish the invaders while leaving his own territory alone is absolutely shameless. While Grinsel Vale got scolded, beads of sweat poured down his face, and his power still reeks of narrow, childish thinking. Because after all that, he actually believes he's still worthy of being called the heir of the Geyser Dragon. Staring straight into the dragon's eyes, the sensei declares that Keaton isn't even his equal and orders him to get back to his mountain at once. From behind the master's shoulder, the boy pauses, like those words suddenly pinned him in place. Grinsel Vale threw back the immortal king's demands, refusing them flat. He couldn't wrap his head around it. Why would some nobody even have that sword? His father had told him to snatch the blade from a dead man, but now this creature was stuck on the same horror. Why would a corpse hand over the sword to some other mortal? The lifeless king leans in and basically declares, "That sword has a mind of its own and it picked you." Kidan swells with pride at what the sensei just said. During the dragon's father's lifetime, he finally grasped what the immortal truly could do, and it terrified him. He feared her, unlike Grinsel Vale, who only knows how to mindlessly torch everything. So yeah, this sword was the only price that made sense. Fury rips through the dragon. He won't swallow that excuse for a second. He's gearing up to battle this mortal to the death, all for the chance to claim the Geyser Dragon's treasure. So the lifeless king of evil spirits threw the challenge down, offering that creature a fight right there, and the mighty beast answered with a vicious hiss. He spins around, ready to bolt and skip the fight, just this once, then roars that the young man must remember this day, and Kitten, with nothing smarter to do, starts by telling the stunned Grinsel Vale, "Wait a second." The desperate boy yanked the powerful creature by its tail, slamming it flat on the ground, and the young man couldn't believe what he'd just witnessed. Grinsel snapped into a furious scream at the boy, blasting him as worthless just for daring to touch her, and the poor kid jolted to the side, gasping out apologies while Sensei reminded everyone that this dragon still won't be able to defeat them. The kid turned to the dragon, and if he wasn't in a rush, he'd invite it to sit with them for dinner. Only Grinsel Dragon, Shroud, still didn't quite get what the boy was thinking. The guys presents a ready-made dish crafted from a dungeon dragon. Kudan's not convinced the beast's going to like the steak, but he still steps up and offers to taste it. After a moment of staring at that tiny chunk of meat, Grinzel snapped it up and tossed it right into her huge mouth. With his mouth still buzzing, the dragon shot to his full height and roared. That was delicious. Then the mighty beast erupted an explosion, blasting into the sky and flooding the whole area with a thunderous shockwave. With one brutal gust, the dragon blew the young crowd back, leaned in, and purred that it was downright delicious. Kitten could barely contain himself, because the dungeon lord was absolutely loving that steak. Grinzel demands even more meat plenty and grabs for a slice of steak out of pure jealousy, while the boy goes wild with excitement, because he has no idea how much more cooking still has to happen for everyone. A blinding light erupted behind the kids, and when they turned around, they saw Grinzel glowing like a freaking light bulb. Kidan and Plati were completely stunned. They spot the dragon glowing bright, and then it starts shrinking. Second by second, the young ones can't look away, watching that monstrous, powerful silhouette melt down into something smaller and smaller until it almost disappears. Behold Grinzel Dragon Shroud, a petite girl in a dress with a fluffy skirt, her two-tail-like adornments tied up with bows on her head, stepping into view like pure elegance. The newlyweds, still shaking, finally clocked it. This dragon had turned into a little girl. Kidan couldn't believe it, because he'd never once guessed the beast was female, and their sensei dropped the truth. Dragons have a special power that lets them shift into human form. Grinzel practically drools with hunger, blurts out that she's head over heels for the steak the boy cooked, and then confesses straight to his face that her love for him will never fade. The girl shot up at the table and ordered them to bring her meat like. Right now, Plotty was furious at the dragon's audacity because she was next in line, and this girl still didn't know how to wait. So Kitten jumped in, started frying up more meat, and made sure there was plenty to go around. That lifeless king finally took a bite of the cooked feast, and it wasn't a mistake. He absolutely loved the steak, and the boy practically beamed. As the sensei said, the meat was fried to perfection, but the real shocker was the seasoning that blew his mind. Keaton said it was all about garlic for the flavor, then a shake of salt and pepper, and in his mind, that's the easiest dish of all, but the immortal king won't buy it. Even in the royal palace, no one can cook something this delicious. Grinnicel, the dragon, lies sprawled on the ground, stuffed so hard she can barely move after devouring one too many steaks, and she growls at Keaton not to let his ego run wild. Meanwhile, just a little ways off, a mermaid with a belly just as massive is lounging around, completely relaxed. With full seriousness, the girl snaps at him to stop getting carried away. She's still not done chasing that holy sword. Her sensei shoots back that she's too inexperienced, and that this is impossible right now. The boy blurts out an apology, insisting it's not him. The weapon won't let him let go. She swallowed her fear, swore she'd quietly reduce this man to ashes with her breath of death, and then, like it was nothing, grabbed the sword for herself. Plotty plunks down beside her, and suddenly it hits. If she goes through with this, she's never getting to taste the best steaks of her life again. Greencell immediately clocked the real roadblock blocking her plan. Her body got swallowed by a violent whirlwind. Then she snapped into a dragon and roared at Kit. And to remember one day, she'll rip that sword straight out of his hands. Until then, she's coming to taste his food. The boy nodded, waved goodbye, and promised he'd be there anytime then. Grinzel Dragon, as Shroud started to lift off, Plotty grabbed her attention and begged, wait just a few seconds, because she had one question she couldn't hold back. She starts wondering if her dungeon has any monster birds, and she's probably asking her husband with nothing but good intentions. Then Grinzel thinks it over and says she can't say how many there are, but the monster birds are bony, so they're no good to eat. But that mermaid doesn't want their meat at all. She's hunting their eggs. Dragon Shroud can't even wrap his head around why they're going after the birds' eggs. Then Plenty blurts out, saying that if they've got eggs, Keaton can turn the meat even more mouthwatering than it is right now, while Grinzel gets pierced by lightning. She whipped around and shot back home, and again the mermaid pleaded with the terrifying beast, the one whose powerful wings churn up the wind, to finally stop. With her ears perked, Plady proudly brags that she knows the ecology of monsters and then begs to go with him. Kidan definitely didn't expect his wife would want to soar alongside the ruler. Grinzel Dragon roared, and Shroud agreed with zero doubt. Then, in the next heartbeat, she burst into the sky with Plati perched on her back, flying farther and farther away from the land where the boy and the lifeless king were left behind. Kid Anne froze in shock, staring as the girls vanished into the sky in silence, while Plati yelled that she would not come home with nothing. The dead-eyed king labels the whole disaster a pretty picture, and the boy nods along instantly. No second thoughts. Staring up at that endless sky, he flashes a grin and says, wouldn't it be better to be right here, living and breathing, instead of just sitting around bored out of your mind? Kidan proudly shows his creation to his wife, and she can barely get the words out. She can't believe what he's done. The boy then backs her up, saying he turned it from man to metal and forged the sword. With blazing eyes, Plotty stares at the weapon and declares that this mono-metal sword will become the strongest in the world except for the holy sword. She's already daydreaming about a payday, convinced he'll sell it for a fortune, then her dreams of wealth crash hard, because Kidan isn't selling a single thing. He upgraded Kakashi, turning him into a creepy scarecrow on their field that can actually move, and the boy was so over the moon with what he pulled off. She couldn't quite wrap her head around it, especially when it came to Kakashi. The mermaid snapped into a worried frown, looking totally lost, until Kidan leaned in and reassured her that they still had some mana metal left. Her frown shattered into a grin like she couldn't wait for that scarecrow to start slicing up those pesky birds that kept raiding their fields with those swords. The guy just stared, completely clueless about what she was talking about. The boy stared in shock at what their living dummy had unleashed. Then Kakashi flicked out a sword slash, and sliced the bird to pieces in an instant. Keaton blasts the scarecrow, yelling that killing is forbidden on his turf, and the mermaid can't help but bristle because she knows that rules won't work here while Kakashi and Kun are stuck below, unable to even reach the bird soaring overhead, like they're screaming, "Catch us," just to tease him. The boy looked totally relieved, like joy just hit him in the chest, and Plotty couldn't make sense of why her husband even handed the scarecrow swords in the first place. Right as everything turns dark, the boy lights up and shouts, "This is so cool!" his eyes blazing with pure joy. While Kidan is busy mulling over what gear to hand Kakashi-kun, the girl blurts that she just can't wrap her head around male romance. Staring out at the endless sea, Kitten grips a fishing rod in one hand and a sword rides his back, and he just soaks in the moment because it's been ages since he last cast his line. After that last fishing trip, he was so sure he hauled in a monster, then surprised he snagged a mermaid, got married on the spot, and before you could blink, he decided to move in with Pleti. A hired hand like him gets yanked into another world, thinking he'll finally coast, but nope. His life explodes into color because a mermaid claims him as her husband. Then comes an immortal king, a dragon, and he's been slammed non-stop ever since. To steal a little piece from the chaos, the boy grabbed his fishing gear and headed out to fish because this calm moment is exactly what he needed. Out of nowhere, a splash cracked the air, and from beneath the sea's horizon, a boy burst up, fins on his head, and all Keaton froze, terrified by that shadowy figure popping out like a nightmare. The boy got asked if he was Platty's friend, then he grinned, because the truth was, he was totally buddy-buddy with the mermaid man. But the creature wasn't fully buying this stranger. He crawled out of the filth in the deep water with one brutal threat: "You should die." When Kidan heard that, he went stone still, then tensed hard, and with a sudden lift of his hand, Platty's possible friend yelled at everyone, "Get ready." Out of the water surged warriors, mermaids in sharp uniforms, and the commander barked orders: everyone on land, kill the man standing there, and cut down anyone who dares resist their move. The mermaid warriors snapped to their commander's command, then surged like a single raging wave straight at the stunned kid on. They crept closer and closer. Tritons aimed straight at the boy, who froze in shock with his mouth hanging open. Kidan snapped back to reality, snatched his holy sword, and swung it down like a thunderclap. With a single flick of his hand, the boy summoned a full-blown tornado, and the warriors inside were whirling in circles, desperate to strike him. When Keaton finally understood what he'd done, his mind went blank. He just stood there, clueless about the next move, while the exhausted warriors' bodies bobbed in the sea, gurgling and fading. A frantic Playtie sprinted toward the noise, jolted by the loud commotion even though she was nowhere near her husband. And just as the boy started to explain, something cut him off mid-sentence. Just then, a familiar friend of the Playties burst out of the water and shouted her name, only for him to get slammed into a tornado created by the holy sword too. The girl froze in shock, thinking she was seeing someone she knew, but that friend turned out to be the brother of the mermaid's wife, not a helper at all. They're only a few meters apart. Pure, crushing silence hangs in the air. Everyone's frozen, except Kidan, because Plati never told him she even had a brother. All at once, the mermaid warriors charged straight at the girl, shouting that she was a princess, while Kidan stood there, completely stunned by the chaos unfolding in front of him. The upset girl stared out at the sea, where mermaids were splashing, and called for the Princess Highness, whispering, "Are you safe?" Then Plati stepped forward and decided it was time to introduce herself the right way. The guy who tried to kill her husband. That's actually her older brother, Prince Arawana, the next heir to the throne. The boy froze right in front of him, stood not just a princess, but the prince himself. His mouth fell open in pure shock. Plati plants her arms across her chest and fires off, "I told you I'm a princess." Then she whips around to her older brother and decides she'll introduce the boy to him while the prince stands there utterly baffled. Like, wait, what's happening? Then the princess erupts, shouting that this boy is her husband Kidan, and while the girl doesn't blink at the fallout, Kidan panics so hard he tries to silence his own wife before she can finish. Every last mermaid in the army, including the prince, heard it and froze in stunned silence. jaws dropping wide with pure shock. Platy digs in, saying she knows her older brother hauled himself here to drag her back, but she refuses to return to the Mermaid Kingdom, and she demands that he carry her message straight to her mom and dad. The prince snaps. This is unforgivable because the land dweller kidnapped his sister and violated her. Rage erupts as he barks at his army that the battle is on again. Platy's older brother blows up at her husband, calls him a scoundrel, and vows to erase him from the world so he can snatch his little sister back. The princess blurts, "Don't panic, don't be ashamed to fight back." But the boy gripping the holy sword freezes in fear because he knows her too well to pretend they're strangers. A savage gust from behind Platy and Kadan blasts the fish straight into the sea, and on their second try, nope, still not a success. From the dragon veil, the fiercest wind tore through the air and the dragon shot straight into the wild roar rising from the sea. The prince went wide-eyed because the dungeon master himself had finally shown up. A whole army of warrior mermaids trembles before this monster, convinced the dragon's coming to swallow them whole and that one single breath from it could wipe their world clean. Grinzel Dragon's shroud dropped beside the humans as he landed and demanded, "You all okay?" Kiran thanked him for the rescue and the prince just couldn't believe it, because even these earthly creatures had actually befriended a dragon. The beast barked with laughter, claiming the boy had to stay right there or he'd never get to chow down on that delicious meat. So Plenty snapped back that it wasn't something to brag about, just because they thanked him. The girl's older brother tried to speak to the three creatures, but the dragon caught it. He'd been stranded all by himself. The prince whipped around and found the sea gone behind him as a reward for not fleeing from the dragon. Grinzel, the geyser dragon's daughter, grabbed his fate and promised to instantly turn him into coal. Keaton slammed the mighty beast right in the knee to make it think twice, and the impact made them howl in pain. The boy blurts that the man in the sea is Pletty's brother, and Fail's jaw drops in shock. Then Keaton sweeps in, inviting the prince to dinner, but the girl's older brother can't make sense of why the boy would act like this. The boy shoots his hand out, offering a calm talk, explaining everything and giving them a chance to really get to know each other. The prince didn't buy a single bit of his kindness. He thought the generosity was a trap, and he refused to hear one word. Then Platy snapped into the conversation, slamming the message home. Make it back to his kingdom. ASAP. Her husband snaps at his wife, shouting that none of this is right, because her brother came all the way here only because he's scared for his sister. He thinks he has to hear every word the prince wants to say, and the girl is totally blindsided by how the young man reacts. The elder brother heard that and snapped, "I've changed my mind," and Keaton froze, eyes overwhelmed by the prince's blinding light. As a prince, he can't back out of this battle. His honor is on the line, so he straight up accepts the challenge, while the boy is left frozen, staring at how his brother crawls out of the sea without a stitch and not a trace of embarrassment. Kidding yells for him to cover up, and while his brother is already calling it rude, the girl just smiles. She saw it all coming and has a stash of clothes ready, even handing him a pair of underwear. The boy realized this exact nightmare already hit his wife once before, so he rushed to invite his brother over to join them. Vale, jittery with worry, rushes up to Platy and blurts that Keaton's about to feed him, like this is their shot at a whole new dish, but the girl just goes silent, eyes narrowed, not buying any of it. The older brother spotted the place where the newlyweds were staying and sneered, calling it pathetic, while his sister, a member of the mermaid's ruling family, was still being allowed to rot in that ruined Caden shack. Platy is furious, and the boy can't even meet anyone's eyes. In nothing but his underwear, the prince storms at the boy, screaming that he's a slave and claiming he's using his sister. Then Platy yanks his focus to a whole new building. This is the barn where they stashed the meat hauled down from the mountains and the veggies pulled from the fields. So when the older brother stares at it, he's blown away, not just by how huge it is, but by those strange, mysterious walls Kidnan tells him it's plaster he unearthed in the mountains. And then the sister yells, "Brother!" She jabs a finger at the next building, a brewery where they handle the fermentation. Kidan drifts off, saying they were just waiting on the miso and soy sauce to be ready, but the older brother just frowns, clueless about what foreign words the kid is even saying. Platy clocked it right away. Her husband holds secrets they don't have, and it shows he can cook circles around anyone, and he's lethal in a fight. And Kidan, that guy can do literally anything. The warehouse the girl showed you before, that's her magic room, and her husband Kidan dotes on her like a promise kept. While Platy brags about her husband, the boy pulls the prince over and invites him to sit in a chair. That young guy cooked up a brand new dish and just finished a garden table. Then he pulled people over for tea and good conversation, only to find a girl already sitting there. Her older brother was baffled about where she came from, but Kitten shot back that the kid was Grinzel Vale in human form. Then the girl shoved him along, demanding he deliver a brand new dish. The princess froze when a dragon sat right in front of him. Platy snapped, offended, saying she's always just like that whenever she asks for food. Kidan unveils his wild new dish. Zenzai then reveals how when he cultivated soybeans for it, the adzuki beans somehow sprouted right alongside them. They grabbed the utensils and dove into the dish, and the brother moved extra carefully because this food was totally new to him. Everyone dug into the traditional dessert soup at once, and the room lit up. It's amazing. Then the brother and sister savored every spoonful, but Vale leaned in and begged for more, and there was nothing left. The beans sprouted by pure accident, nowhere near enough to fill anyone's cravings, and the moment they ran out, everyone blew up with rage because the tasty things were gone for good. The girls snapped their heads toward the prince, blaming him for showing up at the wrong moment and for draining the soup dry. The elder brother dropped to his knees and blurted out an apology to the boy like Kidan was a saint, like his skills were beyond anything anyone could touch. The young man begged him to stop, but the prince wouldn't budge, dead sure his sister was in love with him. Then he declared that he was handing his sister over to her right in her care. Platy lit up with joy, but Kiran hesitated, not convinced it was safe. He can't even wrap his head around why she's fighting him, especially after he heard the mermaid is a real princess from the kingdom of mermaids. So if she's got a title that big, there's no way she'd be able to pick a husband for herself that easily. He couldn't believe everyone had piled their hopes on her, and then she snapped, screaming that none of it was true because she was married to only him, not their opinions. She'd decide how to live on her own, and she ended it by calling him a fool. Her brother tries to soothe her, insisting that Mr. Saint has no clue what's really going on with his wife. The prince tried to spill the truth, but Vale snapped in. There was a feud over who ruled the surface, humans or demonic creatures, and now it had even reached the mermaids, who stayed neutral, so they forced a political marriage to lock it down. The brother's jaw drops. She knows. She reminds him exactly who she is, and those words have echoed in her ears for hundreds of years, whether she wants them or not. In this world, humans are at war with magical creatures, and Kidan gets ripped into it as a hero, summoned to fight back with everything he's got. Brother says the interference is about to skyrocket from both directions, and the rulers have no choice but to pick their side. If the mermaids won't pick a side, both kingdoms will turn on them marked targets, easy prey to both attacks. And rumor says the kingdom's top brass is already arguing over who Platy has to marry. For Kidan, this isn't just politics, it's a spark waiting to explode. The brother is convinced the only shot for Platy to save the kingdom is to run, because after he finds her here in peace, he steps up as the older brother and vows to make his sister's wish come true. The prince swings his gaze to the girl and tells her he's thrilled she's found a real good man. Then you can practically see her beam with pure, undeniable happiness. Dropping to his knees, the brother begs to shield his sister and to make her his wife for real. Keaton tells him to back off, but deep down, he's totally ready to seal the marriage officially. Right as the young men were talking, Vale crashed the moment and blurted out a question about marriage. Then the embarrassed guy quickly nodded, saying yes. Grinsel Dragon's shroud is set to marry too, and Keaton freezes in shock while Platy glares with jealous rage at her rival. Vale was already plotting how to snag the holy sword. Then she realized the catch. If they're married, the property gets split. For a dragon, a human life flickers by like a single blink, and if she's his wife, she'll feast on exquisite dishes every single day. She blurted out that she wanted him to marry her, and Kidian shut it down cold, leaving her stunned, even though he'd been rich enough to spoil her dreams all along. It's clueless about the Vale's rules. If a man is strong, it's considered normal for him to have multiple women, and she called that guy master. Kidon shot back that he wasn't her master, and even if he was strong, he still wouldn't back polygamy. Then Dragon's Shroud just burst into tears. She can't figure out why it's happening. She's convinced it's because she's not as strong as the Immortal King, or because that guy simply hates her. She kept sobbing and begged the boy to marry her. Then Keaton finally nodded. On one condition, she had to stop crying. Bailey screamed in pure joy. Platy froze in shock, and the young man rushed to apologize to his brother. Then the prince declared that fathers who have daughters scattered across the world share one big thing in common. And still on the surface, those women are brutally annoying. Platy seethes, steaming over how her brother and this new guy are acting. The newlyweds stroll along the shoreline, but the brother darts back home to tell his mom and dad because they're sitting on the edge of their hope, waiting for their parents to approve the marriage in full. The girl couldn't stop worrying about Keaton, convinced something was terribly wrong, and she'd already fled home when the royal pressure crushed her, only to end up meeting him. And when they finally caught her, she was shoved into becoming his bride. She's having the time of her life here because her darling's cooking tastes heavenly. She aches to stay with him forever, but she keeps getting in his way, and no matter what she wishes, she can't go back to the kingdom of mermaids. Keaton just grinned. He knew exactly what she was up against, and he had zero plans to flip their life upside down. A boy gets his strength from God, but everyone clocks him as useless in battle, so he's come here, not calling himself a strong man, just believing they can chase the life they want, the happy one. And ever since that day, he can't hide his embarrassment, so he begs the girl to stay right by his side while Plati stares at him with eyes blazing like fire. Overwhelmed with joy, she leaps straight into the arms of her future official husband, and yeah, they're still madly happy together. Vale suddenly yanked the hugging boy's attention and snapped that he'd kept her waiting too long, and the girl just kept calling him Master. No. Right by their feet, she rages across the floor, yelling that she's starving. Kidan and Plati lock eyes, and the boy decides to take action. He's going to hand her a wedding day treat, and the mermaid can't help but beam while the girl waves it off like, anything's fine, just make sure you do it fast. After Kidan decided to build a house, they realized they needed real help, so Plati gladly thrust a starfish out like, is this it? But Keaton shook their head saying, no, I'm talking about the workers. Then the boy clarified everything, and Plati asked again. Keaton snapped back that they had to act on the field right now, because he was itching to sort the harvest and grab what was already theirs to collect, and then he threw in, I'm already slammed, since he'd started brewing miso and soy sauce, and because, yeah, he had a wife to keep up with too. So Keaton blurted that he wanted to build a house. Plati practically exploded with joy, and the undead king declared it so exciting that he sent chills through the heroes, because none of them saw him coming. They didn't expect him to show up at all. The boy blurted out whether something terrible had happened, but the king shot back that nothing was wrong. He was finally free, so the boy watched him step in to visit, looking completely okay. Kidan finally exhaled in relief, and the guest grinned and handed over another gift man a medal, plus a piece for the guy's hand. The boy stared in awe at how massive it was and blurted, this is a huge help. Then the undead leaned in and demanded, do you really need that stone? The boy nodded hard and said, yeah, because I can craft a ton of household items with it. Then he said, I got these tools right on time because we're starving for workers. And the king snapped, fine, what do you mean by hands? Keaton broke it down. Plati's brother had clocked that their house was a total disaster, and now the young man swore he'd tear it down and build something completely new, using every ounce of strength he had. Plenty was totally stunned, then blurted that they should go straight to the undead king for help. Kida even imagined the moment the undead king starts making miso, everything would speed up like crazy, but he shut that idea down fast. The undead king demanded to know how many workers he needed and whether he could haul them all here. Kidan froze, sure he'd misheard, so he asked again only to have the undead king shoot back, asking whether 10 would actually be enough for him. The young man blurted, I'm confused, why would I be grateful? But he couldn't figure out where all that was supposed to come from, and then the undead king vanished without a word, telling him to wait just a little. After a while, Kidan and Plati blinked in disbelief. Right before them stood the king of the undead himself, unveiling humanoid monsters he'd dragged from his dungeon, 5 orcs and 5 goblins. He told everyone these monsters were hatched in his dungeon and bound to follow his every command, so he commanded them to obey the saint, letting the young man use them however he pleased, and Keaton was absolutely blown away. Then he faced the monsters, introduced himself as Shyly, and nothing. They just stood there, silent and frozen in place. Keaton couldn't wrap his head around it until the undead king revealed the truth. They couldn't speak. He said they only had the smarts to obey, but no self-awareness and no instinct to protect themselves. Keaton understood. The king said he didn't have to reward them at all because they feast on mana from the air, so they don't need feeding. And that's when Plati practically burst with joy at the news. She blurted out, all fired up, that Kidan would fix every problem he had once he got them. Then Plati clocked the guy's silence and shot back. So, that's the plan. The young man nodded and said, you're right. Then he bowed to the king with deep gratitude, thanking him from the bottom of his heart. The undead shrugged, claiming there was nothing wrong with it, then vanished as if that was all they needed to do right as the guy clenched his fist, and he practically burst with joy, shouting that they should team up and build an awesome house. Only the monsters just stood there, stone still, no reaction at all, and the poor kid felt like he was yelling straight into the void. Then Kidan barked orders like a war drum. Orcs hauled in logs, goblins sawed boards, and he personally showed them how to run the machines. After a while, the foundation was finally laid, and Plati couldn't stop raving. These monsters are incredible. While Kidan admitted he'd been doubtful at first, but now the house was exploding into something way bigger than they ever expected. He swore the orcs' raw brute strength was perfect for tough work, and that the goblins had nimble, skillful hands. The young man said goblins botch hard jobs, but if you train them day after day, they improve step by step until they're even cutting grass and weaving it like pros. He flashed a smile and said, even with monsters watching them slave away, he still couldn't stop himself from being kinder, and when her beloved husband said that, Plenty beamed right along with him. She insisted there was no reason to baby them with sympathy because they were born from mana, so they weren't truly living beings. Kitten scratched the back of his head and admitted she was right, but said everyone still deserved a real chance to live well. Plati went on to explain that magical creatures usually use tactics like these to wipe out humans, so they unleash huge armies, betting the monsters will get slaughtered anyway, and if they fall, they can always spawn replacements from the dungeon. Kanan's jaw dropped, but he still clung to the idea that every bit of it, from food to waste recycling, was all powered by monsters. Then he let out a heavy sigh and finally gave in, because yeah, this was the world, plain and simple. Right after that, the goblin stumbled and face planted, clattering everything it was hauling. Keaton snapped around. He sprinted right up to him, frantic, asking if he was all right, and the young man hauled the goblin to its feet, pressing on to make sure it wasn't hurt. The goblin stayed stone cold silent. Keaton remembered, they weren't even responding, but now he couldn't shake the thought. Did he really want to talk to them at all? Right then, the goblin snapped back to life, yanking the boy out of his daze. He shot back, "I'm fine," then spun toward Kadan and said it again, "I'm fine," and the boy and Plati were left staring in pure shock at his words. Then the guy dropped to one knee again and asked if he was okay right on the spot, and the goblin just nodded, saying, "Yes." And then he called Kitten, "My lord," saying he wanted to work even more, while the goblin beside him chimed in, "Yeah, me too." Keaton gaped when the other one started talking too, and then goblins and orcs poured in from every direction, shouting that they wanted to work for them. All of them. Plotty couldn't believe it, but she insisted. The monsters suddenly felt self-aware, like something woke up inside them, and the boy snapped back, swearing. Self-awareness couldn't just pop into existence that fast. Then he stared at his own hands and suddenly got it. Maybe all this was happening because of the power he was holding. His skill was unreal, the kind that puts him above everyone else. So he swallowed the shock and promised himself this gift was too dangerous to mess with, and he had to handle it with care. The young man clenched his fist, swore that with all his strength he'd finally be able to talk, then charged straight at the goblins, hugged them, and thanked them with all his heart. Plenty swore they'd never get to use those again and refused them later, and the goblins went wild cheering as they launched the hero into the air. After what felt like forever, that massive house finally stood finished and solid. Everyone cheered, but Grinzel was blown away. While she was gone, she grilled everyone on what went down here, then Platy, snapping at her like a stupid dragon, told them to shut up, listen, and laugh, and with a smug victory grin, declared this was her and her husband's love nest. Rinsel burst inside, insisting she had to look around, and Platy tried to yank her back, but the dragon in human skin couldn't stop staring, gushing that she'd never seen a building like this. Keaton leaned in, talked to her, and ordered her to take off her shoes and stash them in a special spot. Then Vale blinked in confusion, so the young man quickly explained this way. She wouldn't wreck the tatami. The girl thought it over, slipped off her shoes, and started rolling around on the tatami, asking what kind of bed this was and why it felt so amazing. Plotty then demanded, "So, are you staying?" The young man snapped back that nothing was wrong at all, because that massive house was built for exactly that purpose. Plotty's stomach dropped, and he demanded to know if humanoid monsters would end up living there too. Kidan nodded and said, "Yeah. That's the whole plan." When he told them, they laughed it off as total nonsense, swearing there was no way anything that incredible could be real. Then they confessed their home used to be a dungeon, and Keaton instantly realized this could spell trouble for the undead king. Then he snapped, "We're building them a house big, with tons of rooms," and he called it an apartment building. The goblins tried to object, but he cut in fast. He wanted even more, like a bathroom and a kitchen, because extra help can't hurt. He stared down the monsters and asked if they'd help him out, so the goblins practically exploded with excitement and blurted out a unanimous yes. Plotty couldn't wrap her head around this invasion, because in her mind, only she and Kidan were supposed to be trapped in that love nest. Then one goblin bolted forward. The kid Kidan called Gobukichi. Plotty squinted and asked, "That's your best guess for a name?" And Kidan just shrugged and said, "Gobukichi is the top sewer in all the goblins." Gobukichi said the boy's order was ready, and Kidan's face lit up. Then he bolted into one of the rooms and exclaimed with pure joy that it was, in fact, a futon. Plotty blurted out what a futon even was, and Kidan leaned in to explain this one was his gift to his wife. Then he explained that he'd grown cotton beside the grass so they could make tatami, because he needed a real futon for their new home, so he pointed her to the spot and said, "Lie here." She didn't get it at first, but she rolled with it, laid down on him, and asked, "Is this right?" After she lay there for a second, she suddenly screamed, "That's so comfortable." She couldn't even find words, and the guy practically burst with relief that she loved it. Keaton slid in beside her and apologized for how she still had to sleep on the bare floor, and Plati thanked him from the bottom of her heart. Then she spun toward Gobukichi and thanked him too, totally catching him off guard. And the poor goblin blushed in pure embarrassment. From that moment on, the heroes shouted they'd push themselves even harder, because they weren't just farming anymore, they were going to make their life truly amazing. Right then, a massive sailing ship shoved through the sea toward the shore, and the wind screamed like a whistle as it tore across the waves. One goblin was hauling water into a bucket on the shore, stomping with heavy breaths, when bam, he spotted a sailing ship on the horizon, stared at it in disbelief, and thought, "What is that?" because he'd never seen anything like it before. Later on, Inside the house, Caden shoved a glass of water into Platy's brother's hands and shot him a worried look. Did something happen? The man spun around in pure awe, blurting that this house was absolutely incredible, then insisting God must have blessed the kid with special powers. Kidna nodded, laughing awkwardly. They faced each other across the table, and Keaton asked what today really meant. Arowana nodded, jumped in, and said it was all about the wedding between the young man and Platy. He then promised the word would hit the streets fast and admitted he'd already talked it over with his father. The boy pressed for what they told him, and Arowana said first the father was totally thrown off. Then the man laid out everything about the boy and his incredible power, and the father finally nodded in agreement. Then Arowana added the real twist. This kid doesn't belong to any race at all. Kida nodded, said he was relieved, then warned Platy was on edge because of that political marriage, so he leaned in and asked what everyone was really like. Arowana snapped back that the people and magical creatures were furious, and Kidan figured, yeah, that checks out. Brother Platy told him their father had promised that his daughter would marry a great saint, and Brother Platy watched him freeze, asking in disbelief if they'd already surrendered. He snapped back that they were furious they'd been robbed of the chance to marry Platy, but with the enemies zeroing in on her too, leaving things as they were was the smarter move. Keaton said he understood and was relieved things were finally settled for now. Then, right at that moment, Arowana smashed his forehead to the floor and crumpled to his knees. Keaton blinked in surprise and demanded, what happened? Arowana said they'd do everything they could to keep the boy out of trouble, so if that's the case, he asked them to look after Platy. Kaiden calmly told them to stop, then pushed himself up. He said he was thrilled to be with Platy and absolutely grateful for it. Then he leaned in and told me he'd come here solo, and if it weren't for Platy, he'd still be out there living alone like the king of the undead. He didn't even realize it. But he was one step away from forgetting his own name. Arowana went wide-eyed when Undead King was mentioned. Keaton quickly explained it wasn't some myth. It was their immortal neighbor, an undead monarch with that very name. The shock hit him hard, and right then, a goblin bolted up to them out of breath, panicking and terrified. He dropped the bad news and said the enemy was striking from the coast, with monsters already crashing onto the shore, magical creatures. No less, the goblins swore that orcs and their own were battling them right this second, and Kide and Arowana were left staring in total shock. Keaton blurted out, asking if magical creatures had made it here. Then Arowana snapped back that it was impossible, because this place was a top-level secret, and that answer left Keaton absolutely stunned. Then they spotted a ship far off, and Platy swore it was packed with magical creatures, no doubt about it. Kidding leaned toward Orkin and asked, straight up, if Orkibo, who was right there at the scene, was alright. The orc shoved to the side, and Keneon's eyes landed on a demonic woman kneeling there. Orkabo told her she was Astros the Milky, but he didn't sound too confident about that. Keaton stared at the girl, and she snapped, furious, telling him to stop gawking and quit filling his head with his own thoughts. Then she threw her name at him. Astras the Heartless, a demon lord, one of the 4 heavenly kings. The orcs caught the girl when she told them she'd come to cut down their lord, and Keaton practically froze. Then he stared at the pile of bones and demanded what they were, only for the goblin to snap back that those were skeleton warriors controlled by magical creatures. He also said there were around 100 of them, and still they wiped them all out. Kitten's jaw dropped, because 100 against 10 should have crushed them. Then the young man stepped right up to the monsters and told them he understood how dangerous they were, begging them to stop taking reckless chances because if they died, it would crush him with sadness. The monsters answered with one vow. They'd die for him. Kitten was furious because just moments ago he'd said it was impossible. Astra hissed with rage at being ignored. Then Arowana stepped in and demanded how she even knew about this place, only for the demon lord to freeze when he finally saw the prince from the mermaid kingdom. She snapped at him that a comfy life had made them dull, then warned him not to underestimate what demons could figure out because she raked the rope to pieces with her nails and swore that even if eternity dragged on, they'd still never understand, so she could finally break free. Astray rose to her full height, yanked her sword free, and declared she was going to snatch Princess Platy and cut down that thief, the great saint. Then she swung the blade toward Kidan and said she meant him, and the whole crowd went instantly on edge. Arowana claimed there's a demon lord commanding the top ranks of the demons, and it doesn't just want blood, it craves it. Out on the battlefield, it becomes a monster so terrifying that even its own allies shake in their boots. The man bolted ahead, swearing he'd figure it out. Then Keaton snapped at him to stop, and the undead king demanded the same thing. Keaton spun back with a grin, but Arowana went stiff. The undead leaned in, asking what the commotion was. Then the man spun around and blurted out in shock the moment he spotted the king. Keaton grinned and quickly introduced them to each other. Astra and Arowana shrieked in terror, blurting that he was the world's scourge, then froze when the boy casually named him. The dead-eyed king dropped the news that the demon was about to slaughter Kidan, and the boy snapped his head and confirmed it. Astras froze with a knot of dread, then felt something shift in the air, and she jerked her head up. She spotted a massive dragon soaring overhead, and it demanded to know what was happening. Keaton strode up to Grisel and greeted her, while Astra froze in shock at his terrifying arrival. Then Plady hopped off the dragon and sprinted straight for the hero. She shot him a concerned look and asked, "Are you okay?" And the boy just nodded. "Yeah." Arowana then pressed, "So where were you?" And Grisel admitted they'd been hunting tonkatsu eggs up in the mountains. Strays crashed to the ground, and the dragon admitted that after that, they somehow spotted a demon ship out on the ocean, got curious, and sailed back. Then it demanded, "So, is this lower demon actually going to kill Kaden?" She warned that hurting her master would turn her into an enemy, and then she spat that demons were just worms, so their whole race would be wiped out. Keaton lunged between Vale and the dragon, shook, and apologized. The boy then stepped toward the demon crumpled on the ground. Then he threw out a deal: if she swore she wouldn't be their enemy, they'd let her go home, and everyone stood right behind the hero. Estra snapped the moment he tried to insult her, warning him not to dare because she was one of the 4 heavenly kings, yet her entire body still trembled with terror as she forced herself to steady her nerves, knowing letting that fear show was an insult to the demon lord's power. Clutching her fist tight, she shot up and screamed that she had a counter-offer. Then she thrust her sword at Kadan and demanded a one-on-one duel, promising that if he won, she'd finally listen to him. Grinzel seethed at the demon's cheek and promised she'd roast her right then, but Kidden cut in, declaring that nobody was going to stop him from living in this world, and Plotty blushed hard, stunned, and totally flattered. The boy thrust up his sword and declared he was taking the Demon Lord's challenge head-on, while the woman watched him like a storm brewing, then snapped into a fighting stance, ready to stop his recklessness. She stared at the guy and figured, even with his strong allies, he was still just a simple man, so she moved in to grab him. Then she stared closer at the blade, and the truth hit like a punch. It was the legendary Dark Sword, Dr. Schwartz himself. Her grip vanished, the sword clattered to the ground, and darkness swallowed her as she blacked out. Everyone gasped, then Keaton snapped, "Why did you faint?" Grinzel smirked and said they should bury her and let her feed their fields, and Keaton cut him off, stopping the dragon. After a while, Grinzel was soaring through the sky, gripping Astra, who was trembling with terror in her paw from up high, way above the ground. Keaton begged her to go back home, and she didn't like it one bit. Then the sailors saw Vale and froze in pure shock, so they ditched Astra's and scrambled away. She snapped back to her senses, whipped around to face the dragon, and demanded to know why it served that man. Grinzel let out a contemptuous sigh, shot him an ominous stare, and made it clear she wasn't about to explain a single thing. Then she flashed a smile and thought, nobody must ever find out how exquisite the master's dishes are. Meanwhile, Astro kept flinging stars in her paw, stunned by this mystery guy who just knocked down 2 disasters. Time passed after everything went down, and Keaton, Plady, and Grisel could only stare in stunned disbelief. Right in front of them loomed Astra's, the Heartless, flanked by 2 demons. The boy snapped a question. "Why are you here?" The goblin who brought them just said they wanted to talk to him. Plady barreled toward Astra, screaming at her to run away, and Kadan snapped at her to calm down and explain what happened. 2 demon girls standing beside her bowed politely, then begged, "Let us explain," because they'd been kicked out of the Demon King's army. The heroes shot her a shocked look and demanded the truth. She insisted it wasn't real, claiming she was the only one kicked out of the army, then told the demons to back off and return. They demanded to know how she could say something like that after all. They'd sworn to serve her for the rest of their lives. Then Grinzel, wearing a human face, wasn't just annoyed, he was furious. So she morphed into a dragon and hissed for silence, mess up, and she torched them to ash until Keaton stepped in, grabbing control and threatening to cut her off from dinner. The dragon snapped around, and the stunned demon scrambled behind Astra as the boy demanded, "So why am I being left out of the Demon King's army?" The woman bowed her head and admitted she botched the mission to capture the princess, then confessed her monster squad got wiped out, and she still had more bad news. She snapped that letting a dragon wreak havoc on the battlefield was a grave crime. Then Kaden demanded to know what kind of dragon was fighting out there between humans and demons. Then Astra stared at Vale. She leaned back with her hands behind her head, and she shot back that someone had ordered her to take her back. And Astra's basically said, "That's exactly why they ripped you of the Sky King title and kicked you out of this country." The demon girl beside her snapped that this war meeting felt totally wrong because the call was made in a brutal hurry, like everyone was scrambling to push her out while the demon lord was gone. And another girl swore it's all Mr. Reverion's doing, he's always scheming, and now it's finally showing. Astris cut them off and snapped, "Don't point fingers, there's no need for that." In the demon army, strength was everything, so it was on her alone that the mission failed, because her helplessness left her with nothing but blame. Keaton finally got it. Her exile wasn't random. It was the fresh unrest. The demons were wailing because Astray had thrown herself into the army, and it tore everything apart. Vale snapped that she wanted to know what they were talking about, and Plathy swallowed her fear and said it was about owning up to what she'd done, but Astra shook her head, jaw tight, and said she had to begin a whole new life, then demanded to know what she needed to hear. Then she launched into it how the local orcs and goblins were tougher than her, how they even had self-awareness and could talk, something that was almost unheard of. Plus, she threw in the real shocker: Kidan was worshipped by two world plagues, the dragon and the king of the undead. She clenched her fist and demanded answers, then dropped to her knees and begged to be allowed to work for the boy. Vale and Plati were totally stunned, and the guy just calmly said yes. The girls shot back that they were against it, and he mumbled shyly that he didn't even know if working here would help her at all. Then he said that since she'd chosen to dump her old life, chase new lands, and start over, he wanted to help, only for Vale to cackle darkly and promise they'd come for him again later. Kitten met her gaze with total confidence and said he'd take on the challenge, no excuses, and the girl just smiled, thinking everyone would walk away better for it. The demons hanging around Astros also begged to stay. Kitten snapped back, "Sure, I'd be thrilled," then immediately warned them, "But listen while you're here. No bloodshed at all, that's my rule." Vale fumed at how clueless the owner was. Then Plotty let out a heavy sigh and said it was basically the same deal as Kidan. Astros dropped her gaze and agreed, swearing that as long as she was there, she'd obey without question and take on any job. That's why she pushed her for an order, because Kidan's eyes lit up, and he bragged that if she was asking, then he wanted to request something of his own, and the demon girls right beside them stepped forward and introduced themselves. Batami and Balena. Time dragged on, and the demons were stuck out in the fields working with hoses, yet none of them could wrap their heads around why they'd been forced to do it in the first place. Kidding wasn't sure they could pull it off, so he figured he'd hand them chores around the house. Then Astro snapped back that she could handle it, saying it wasn't any more complicated than a weapon, even if it sounded like he'd still been pushing back. She noticed Astrus kept digging the exact same spot again and again, and she just couldn't figure out why until Tammy cut in and said it was a hoe, meant to break up the soil and build proper beds, and then Astrus finally caught her mistake. Even Kidding looked shocked that she knew it, but Tammy only said it was experience. Since Astros and Belena were aristocrats, their skin had never known a single callus, so she begged to hand over everything to her. Astra laid out her goal and swore she'd serve the great saint no matter what, because she could handle it. Keaton was thrilled these demons were so diligent. Then the guy straight up told them, "Fine, Batami, we'll bunk with the goblins and make beds." And everyone nodded like, "Got it." After that, he turned to Astros and Baleen and said, "We'll plant seeds in those beds every 30 centimeters. And the girls answered, "Understood." After a while, they got back to it. Astra and Balena sank the plants into the ground while Bitemi dug in and loosened the soil. Esther winced hard as a brutal pain clenched her lower back, and she couldn't rise to her full height. She never thought the job would be this brutal, and Balena snapped into a sharp scream. Astros demanded what was wrong, and she blurted that something was in the ground, wriggling around. Astros lurched and her lower back snapped, then screams erupted, sometimes from pure pain, other times from the brutal, filthy ground beneath them. Keaton stared at it and knew this was more than they could handle. After a bit, Astros marched right beside the orcs and the goblins, smirked, and told them that since the hunt was stretching farther, she'd finally get to reveal herself. Then she turned to Platy and demanded what they were hunting, so the girl raised a square boar, because Keaton was desperate to restock his meat. Astros told her she'd hand over the job so she could finally make up for all the fieldwork she missed. Then footsteps loud, pounding ones rising from the darkest depths of the forest, and every single person went dead still, holding their breath like something was about to burst out. A whole pack of square boars thundered ahead, sprinting straight toward them. Astros shrieked at Belena and Batami, "Get ready!" Then bam, something zipped past Astros' head, orcs and goblins, lashing out with lightning-fast axe swings as they tore into the boars. In the blink of an eye, the whole flock got wiped out. And those humanoid monsters didn't even make a peep, like this was just the usual routine for them. Astra's eyes went wide at how powerful they were. Then Belena snapped, "Look at your tools." The axes and sickles were forged from mana metal. Plotty let out a heavy sigh and admitted their tools and weapons were forged entirely from mana metal, yeah. The extravagant kind, and the demons froze in disbelief, insisting that kind of ultra-pure metal is almost never seen. Then Patemi finally spilled the truth. Now she understood why they were so damn powerful, and Astra's cut in, snapping, "No, it's not like that." She told them, "Back when we first met, these guys were already monsters, no weapons, nothing." And Belena and Batami just couldn't wrap their heads around it. Platy told them that if Astras was interested, her hoe was forged from mana metal too, and the girl shuddered, realizing the real trouble wasn't the weapon at all. It was that they didn't have a clue how to use it. Then she erupted into a scream and shouted that they couldn't just stand there anymore. She was going to hunt too. After a while, the boar pack was wiped out, dead on the ground. Platy called out, "Thanks for everyone's hard work." Astras, shaking and breathing hard after stacking wins over and over, snapped that they hadn't even begun. And the orcs and goblins just stood there like none of it ever touched them. With those boars built like tanks and the hunt roaring through the mountains, the girl couldn't believe how brutal it turned out to be. Platy licked her lips, rolled up her sleeve, and declared, "All right, it's time to butcher them." Then she stormed to the dead bodies and got to work, snapping at them that they couldn't be kept like that, so she'd have to slice them up and freeze them solid. Later that day, back at home, Caden cooked up soup in the kitchen, filling a saucepan with the ingredients, stirring like a pro, and tasting it as he went. Then I heard Platy shout that they were back right on time. The dude spun around with a grin and practically celebrated, saying they'd arrived just when they were needed. He leaned out of the kitchen and shouted that dinner was ready, then froze when he spotted the dark demon, so he demanded what happened. And Pletty admitted the whole day had gone totally sideways from what they expected. Astrus kept her head down and admitted she was once one of the 4 heavenly kings terrifying both humans and mermaids until she got stripped of that title and came here, and now the locals hit like monsters and their weapons are on a whole different level. And in that moment, she finally understood she was helpless. Kitten shot back with full confidence that she wasn't. The woman blinked, stunned, and the young man spelled it out. This wasn't about her power or influence at all. It was about the people who swore they'd stand by her, staring straight at Patami and Balena. So that's what it all means. She's got a power called charisma, and it's time she trusts herself. Because once she does, brand new paths will open up. The girls lit up, locked eyes, clenched their fists tight, and grinned like they were ready to strike. Then Kidan snapped that it was time to dig in, and Vale lit up with pure joy. The guy grinned and pushed the idea of eating outside because the weather was perfect, so they set the dishes on the yard table. Everything looked insanely appetizing and sat down together, ready to chow. Estrez blurted, "What is this?" She'd never seen food like it. Vale was on her heels, asking the same thing. Then Keaton grinned and said, "It's grilled bourmite, dressed with ginger and served with that tangiru soup." The girls didn't buy it for a second, but they still gulped their courage and took the plates. Then Astris tasted it and immediately terrified Keaton by erupting in tears because it was just that insanely delicious. Plotty and Vale were absolutely glowing, devouring their food as fast as they could. Kaiden watched them and burst with joy, telling him to stuff himself as much as he wanted, enjoy every bite, and come back tomorrow to do it all again. After a while, Astras came trudging over with a basket of food and went, "I can't find Keaton or Plati anywhere." Balena snapped back, "They've got business out at sea." Astros nodded, told her she was done picking vegetables, and asked what else had to be done next. Balena snapped back that she still needed to weed the garden and clean the house. Vale snapped at Astra to plow and get to work. Then she sprawled on the porch and warned that anyone who refused to plow would starve to death. But Temmie snapped, "What about me then?" And Vale's temper flared as she demanded what the lesser demon was mumbling. Then she let out a heavy sigh and said she was staying to watch the house. Yet Tammy and Balena didn't argue, even though it made them miserable, and they finally shouted they'd guard it until Keaton came back. Out on the coast, Plotty was waist deep in the water as her legs slid back into a tail, and she leaned over to tell Kadan, who was perched beside her, that sometimes you have to return to this form. He leaned in and asked her, "Is it easier to live in the sea than on land?" And she stared back at him, speechless for a beat. Then she shot back with total confidence it was just the same everywhere, because her way of turning into a human was top tier, no doubt. That's why she finds living on land so convenient. Keto grinned. He knew she wasn't telling the truth, but he loved how smoothly his wife could dodge the truth. Then he leaned in and asked what she actually wanted to talk about. She whispered that sea monsters would crawl onto land right here. She told Kitten that the mountains are packed with dungeons and caves, and the ocean's got them too because monsters crawl out of all of it, even there. Then Kitten blurted, "So are fish fertilizer, herring, and starfish monsters too." Platy nodded and said, "Yeah, some are genuinely useful and some not really." Then he added that there was another monster, ranked among the strongest 5 in the ocean. Kidan's face fell dark. Platy said that this kind of opponent was a cakewalk, but he shot back no way he'd leave her alone, because how was he supposed to breathe underwater? She just grinned and said, "I'm ready," then pulled out the plexus and told him it was built to let her breathe underwater. She handed it to the boy and ordered him to pop it in and chew, making sure he could still breathe while it worked. Then Platy snapped, "Don't swallow, it's not ready," because if he stopped chewing, he wouldn't be able to breathe. Keaton gulped hard and said he got it all. Then the girl froze, stared at him like he'd lost it, and asked why he swallowed so fast before he could answer. She shoved another one in his hands and told him to swim after her. He dove straight under the water, fought for air, and actually managed to breathe, and that shock hit him like a wave. Then Platy popped into view, waving like crazy and grinning, urging him to follow because wow, she was absolutely stunning. Since she never left the shore, Keaton started to forget she was a real mermaid, so when he dove in after her, he couldn't help but beam that his wife was this stunning princess. Then Kitten's cheeks flared when the girl noticed him, and she started grilling him. "Are you breathing right? Are you chewing?" Kitten panicked, waving his hands like crazy, insisting, "I'm fine, everything's fine." That's when Pleiade felt it hit. She snapped around and said she could taste salt minerals and other elements in the air. all of them pouring out a savage, unstoppable malice. Keaton snapped his gaze the same way as the others, trying to figure out what waited there. Then a massive fish with glowing eyes burst into view right in front of the heroes. Plotty shrieked, "It's me, the spotted moray eel!" The fish blasted out a terrifying roar and shot straight at the heroes, sending Kadan's nerves into a full-on panic. The girl yelled that she wouldn't let him move, then snapped at the guy to handle the rest. Right before she hurled the potion flask, they slammed into a spotted moray eel's body, and it erupted into a burning, shrieking frenzy fire flaring under the water as the guy stared in shock at how incredible his wife was. He snatched his sword, stared at the blade for a breath, then slashed with everything he had, and right in front of them, the spotted moray eel tore clean in two. Platy practically beamed, proving her husband was the strongest of the lot, while the guy behind the blade couldn't believe how powerful he was. The fish's body thudded down and sank to the bottom. Then Keaton clocked it and started frantically waving his hands, and Platy said, "It's fixed, let's go home." But the guy still caught everyone's eye in motion, like, "No, this isn't it." Then he plunged straight down toward the bottom. Then he swung his sword and started slicing seaweed from the ocean floor, and everyone around him just stared, since they swore these seaweeds were useless, even in magic, yet those fast-growing weeds kept turning into a real problem. She shot him a question, what did he want to do with them, and the guy grinned, then they drifted up to the surface. And once they hit land, he started slicing them up, humming like he was already tasting the flavor. They were cooking straight on the rocks, boiling everything in a pot, so Kitten leaned in and said the seaweed was basically like wakame, and insisted it should go in with that moray eel. Then Platy shot back, "You really want to make a dish with moray eel and seaweed?" Keenan said, "I'm gonna try it," then snatched up the plate. All that's left is a shake of salt and pepper, and it's ready, and suddenly it's wakame and moray eel soup straight from another world. Platy eyed the plate like it might betray him, then took one bite. Boom, his face lit up with pure joy. She couldn't believe something so useless could taste this delicious and snap so perfectly. Kitten just grinned and said he was glad she loved it, because even if it looked pointless, it sure turned out to be useful. He even warned it would take a mountain of salt to drive every bit of slime out, so he'd leave the moray eel right there and head home. Then Platy said she'd help. She promised that flavor would blow everyone's minds, and the respect she felt for her husband just skyrocketed, and then they finished the dish. He got flustered and asked again, and Platy told him, "Don't you dare doubt that." Then Kiran said it wasn't just his doing, so many people had helped him. Platy blinked in shock, and the young man reminded her this wasn't just any stay. They'd started living together here, and with the neighbors and fresh faces moving in, the whole place got way too loud and wild. So he finally got how vital support really is. Platy was blown away by the speech, but the guy didn't stop there. He revealed he'd uncovered something else too. Turns out the two of them needed more time together, and when the girl froze at that, Kidan smirked and said, "We're newlyweds." Platy's cheeks flared with a bright blush, and the hero leaned in, inviting her back here to swim again, just the two of them. This time she nodded and agreed. She told him she'd have to invent a whole new way to breathe underwater so he could talk too, and the guy just nodded like he understood. Right then, Demon Castle, that's when he spelled it out. Astros, the Heartless, one of the four kings, didn't just get cut from the army, he got banished. And right in front of him, they kicked off the conversation about the meeting where they'd pick the next king. But then the man snapped in and demanded who had ever given them permission to banish Astros, and one of them fired back that, like they'd already said, she'd made a deadly mistake. The gloomy-faced man snapped at the speaker, calling him Riverian, then lashed out, "Don't pretend you're broke, this mess is on me." Then the man surged to his feet, yanked his sword from its sheath, and pressed the blade to Riverian's neck, declaring it was treachery. Riverian crumpled to his knees, begging for mercy as fear shook him to the bone, and he pleaded with the sword-wielding demon lord Zaydan. Zidane snapped at Riverian to clean up this disaster before he came back, at least until the mess was handled enough for him to own the consequences. Riverian dipped his head, and the man next to him snapped his attention to the side, thrusting a note forward and telling him those were the coordinates. Zidane nodded and said, "Got it." But right after, his mind snapped to Kidan like, even a demon lord can't stay still when rage is boiling. A little way back in time, other summoned heroes appeared like this girl, Momoko Akisaka, totally ordinary on the outside. She's ripping through a whole horde of monsters, unleashing a second-tier divine scythe spell like it's made for war. With a single swing, the path of the earth shattered from the girl straight into the horde, and every monster crumpled dead, collapsing onto the broken ground. Momoko gets yanked into another world, and right away, she's handed the skill Divine Side level 2. Now she's battling demons for humans, one brutal fight at a time. She struggled to adjust to this world. No comforts, no gadgets, just awful food and rough clothes that made her skin crawl. Bread so dangerous it could get you killed. Fleece that told her to jump on the bed, and every day felt like one itchy mistake after another. Most of the summon just couldn't adjust and got wiped out when Momoko was called. There were only about 10 people left, and she can't stop wondering how many are still standing. She couldn't shake the feeling he was gone after all, the guy who turned out to be totally useless. In this brutal world, you don't survive on luck, you survive on skills, full stop. But Momoko Akasaka is different. She's got real talent, so the king keeps her close, and she'd better never forget how lucky she is. That's why she fights alone, but armed with one of the deadliest skills in this whole world, she slices straight through every monster in her path. The demon army never runs out, it's endless. Wherever you turn, monsters are everywhere, choking the world in their swarm. She locks eyes with them and thinks, this is the front line, and I'm not losing. Not ever. I'll protect this world with everything I've got. At that exact moment, a massive dragon thundered overhead as the girl fought the Demon King's army, and every single person beneath it froze in terror. Momoko Akisaka couldn't even keep track with her eyes and blurted out that it was a dragon. One of the world's living plagues. People couldn't look away, because staring at him meant death. Even they called him a monster. And still, everyone had to wonder why he was here. Even Momoko, this summoned hero with a one-hit skill, couldn't bring the monster down. And everyone else was screaming that they had to retreat, because one breath from him would wipe them all out. Everyone held their breath, terrified this dragon had come to wipe them all out. Then it swooped down to the ground. And then he spoke, commanding them to listen while calling everyone else like they were beneath him. And the crowd went wild, shocked that the dragon could talk at all. The dragon stepped forward and declared she was Grinselvale, the great king of dragons, Gracer's daughter, and then she said the master had ordered her to go fetch the poor slob he'd just kicked out of his paw. Astra Heartless crumpled right in front of everyone, and the demons instantly clocked her and screamed for them to grab her fast. Vale told Astras's fate like a nightmare. He was meant to die, but the master slammed the brakes on destiny and chose something else, then barked at everyone to listen up and not miss a single word. She said it didn't matter, demons or humans, if they dared insult her master, she'd torch every city to the ground with this flame, blasting fiery breath into the sky, and everyone nearby saw that flash of fire light up the world. Both humans and demons could barely stay upright. Magic surge slammed half of them to the ground, and Momoka couldn't believe the sheer terror of that power. Then Vale blared that everyone needed to remember her master Saint Kidan, and she commanded them to never ever forget his name, because if you dared cross the saint, you'd have her to deal with too. Then she shot into the sky and vanished. Crowds, most of them squatting right on the ground, shouted, "Saint Kidhan!" at the top of their lungs, stunned that even a dragon listened to him, yet nobody had the slightest idea who he even was. Right now, Kidan and the Platies are settled at home, stacking up buildings like they mean it and plowing a huge stretch of fields right out front. Kidan's got a glass in hand, chopsticks moving as he eats and drinks, and with a satisfied grin, he savors every bite. Then he pushed himself up, muttered that he'd be back in the fields again today, staring at the mountains and the long road ahead as he stretched out his aching body right when he heard footsteps coming closer, and he snapped around. A deep male voice demanded, "Are you Saint Kidden?" The kid blinked in shock, nodded, and shot back. "Who are you?" The man grinned and declared, "I'm the Demon Lord Zayden." Kidan just stood there, utterly thrown off. Temi and Belena burst out in joyful screams, calling Kidan because they'd finally done it. They hoisted the animal's body on a stick and cheered. Mrs. Astros had finally nailed her prey, and she'd fought tooth and nail to get it. But the moment the woman heard her name from Zayden, her face snapped to shock. She whipped her head up, stunned to find him standing there. The Demon Lord gasped in shock. "You're really here?" And the woman stared back, completely baffled. Then she demanded how he tracked her down. He grinned and said, "Your subordinates left a code behind." Mahatami and Belena beamed at the scene, and Astros couldn't stop wondering why he'd shown up, so the Demon Lord said he came to visit her. Her subordinates leaned forward with eager anticipation, but Kaden just couldn't read the strange mood. Astra admitted she'd botched the mission, so she was stripped as one of the four kings, and now she was nothing but dead weight to him. She said Zayden had always cared for her, but she feared he'd be hit with criticism later, so she wasn't taking chances. Then the Demon Lord lit up, saying he didn't care a bit because she mattered to him more than anything. That woman burned with embarrassment, Platy went rigid with shock, and Vale snapped that all this drama was just irritating her. After a while, they finally slipped into the house, and Kidan immediately brewed hot tea for everyone, while Zidane bowed and apologized for showing up and turning their lives into a mess. Then he slammed his name down and claimed he was the supreme ruler of all demons. Zaydan, Keaton shot back, "So you're the leader of the demon country?" And Zaydan just nodded. Keaton pressed again, worried. "If you're in charge, was there going to be trouble because I left?" Zaydan grinned and said, "No." Then he broke it down. The Demon Lord's job is simple: protect the country from humans. The previous Lord handed him that mission, and ever since, he's been grinding on the battlefield day after day to make sure it gets done. Keaton shot back that he got it, and Plates basically said, "With how much you fight, who's even still waiting for you at home?" Zaydan then grinned and answered, "That's exactly why I'm happy I've got Aster. She always shows up, she handles everything, and she's absolutely irreplaceable." She turned bright red, stammering that she didn't deserve praise like that, while her subordinates practically beamed with joy at finally seeing it. Kitten swore he'd never throw Astros out, and Zadana nodded along. Then they hit him with the cold truth. Astros got hauled before a military court and sentenced to banishment exactly when he was leading from the front lines. No questions asked, no permission from the overlord, just their own plan, their own way. Said Astros took the blame for that brutal accident, a dragon suddenly crashing onto the battlefield and throwing everything into chaos. Vale just hummed on like it didn't matter, while Caden stood there, completely wrecked, listening in silence. The man told him that when he finally made it back, Astros was already gone, so Kadan instantly figured he'd come here chasing her. Zidane grabbed Astros' hand and blurted out how thrilled he was that she was there, because he had no clue what he'd do without her, and then he admitted he truly thought he'd lost her forever. Plotty said it was crystal clear between them and that their love was obvious as day. The woman blushed hard and hurriedly insisted they were only childhood friends, and she snapped back that honestly, it wouldn't matter, nothing would ever turn out for them, because the ruler had to guard the whole country, and their fate wasn't something he should have to shoulder. Rinselvale was boiling the whole time, so furious she snapped at them to shut up. Then she screamed that it didn't matter if he was the master or whatever title he had, he could grab Astros and get out. Zidane demanded to know who she was, and Astros was terrified out of her mind. She snapped that it was Grinzel Vale, the dragon that swooped onto the battlefield, then stared down the demons with pure disdain. Zidane snapped, confused, because there was no way he could be staring at the girl right in front of him, while Vale raged that she'd been told to bring Astros back, and she hated having to strain her wings just to deal with a rude girl who barged onto her master's doorstep. Kedian barked at Vale with pure irritation, and Vale nodded like she got it, then clamped down and stayed silent. Zadan stared at them, totally baffled. Then he snapped around to Ketadan and claimed that Astros was living with a deadly crew, her life was theirs to take, no questions asked, while the demon lord clenched his fist and swore he would get her back at any cost. Right after that, he sprang to his feet and boldly demanded the chance to fight him. Ketadan was stunned. The man shot back that he took his title seriously, so he had to prove his fighting spirit. The hero tried to brush it off, but Plady snapped it into focus. He might not even be able to dream it, because her husband was the master of Vale, one of the world's disasters, and right here, an undead king was lurking too. She leaned in and asked if he'd ever heard of a thing like that, then snapped that he couldn't win. Zidane didn't back down and demanded if it was really true, and Astra confirmed it, so he didn't argue because that woman wasn't anyone's to claim. And with that, she gave Zidane the go-ahead to take her. The hero told him she found him when she was chasing a purpose and trying to figure out what she could really do, but if someone's desperate to have her back, then she better listen to him. The guy pressed her for her decision, told her Zidane had spilled his feelings, and urged her to open up too, so the woman blushed at the praise. Her subordinates cheered, and Vale's heart lifted when she realized she could finally leave. Astra squeezed his hand and vowed she'd stay at his side forever on the battlefield or even in the afterlife, begging him to let her stay close. Zidane nodded and insisted she go back home, never to leave him again, and the moment he said it, the woman lit up with pure joy. Her subordinates finally exhaled, thrilled their mistress wasn't a titled loser anymore, while Vale beamed, and Kada and Shed couldn't stop the tears from spilling. Then Plady snapped, anger blazing as she stood up from the couch and told them to stop, only for everyone to stare at her like they had no clue what was happening. Kin blurted, "What's wrong?" and the girl shot back, "With all respect to the demon lord, he's painfully naive." Woodlouse was way smarter than anyone expected. She flirted hard and called the man her future husband like it was destiny. Zeden snapped, "Who are you?" and Plati grinned, introducing herself as the princess of the mermaids. Then she blurted out that the demon nobles were pushing a political marriage right between her and Zayden, and the demon lord went completely still. Shocked into silence, he sprang to his feet and demanded, "Who said that I've never heard a thing about it until now?" The man slid into the seat beside Astros and swore that nothing stood between him and Plati. Kadad only nodded like he finally got it. And then he declared this, "Whoever marries the mermaid princess won't just win her heart. They'll also get the mermaid's resources too." Plotty nodded like, "Yep, that made perfect sense." Then she repeated the demon noble's words, "Mermaids, unite with us, we'll wed the princess to our king," and Astra's men were stunned by the whole shocking plan. Plotty says, "Think about it when the demon lord doesn't even know about his own marriage or the expulsion of his most loyal supporter. You don't get coincidences, you get a betrayal." Every demon instantly knew it had to be Riverian Plati, even admitted it herself. When she became Keaton's wife, he sent Astros after her, and when she broke the mission, Riverian wiped out Astros and bolted his own power even higher. Zidane mulled it over and realized the truth until he faced him. Bringing Astros back would be pointless because everyone would keep shoving her failure in his face. Plenty warned him at best he'd lose his supporters, and at worst, they'd shove him off the throne. Keaton was stunned, but it didn't faze him. Then the hero choked out a sincere apology because that man's honesty hit him hard, and the thought of some filthy scoundrel taking control of the demon lands filled him with pure rage and disgust. Zedian and Astras froze at the hero's words, and Platy stepped in, saying every problem could be cracked all at once. Then she turned, shouted for the demon lord, and told Astras they should come back not as a boss and servant, but as husband and wife. The girl blurted out, "Let's get married right now," and the demons froze totally stunned, completely baffled. Timmy and Belina couldn't believe their luck. Demon Lord and Lady Astras were really getting married, and they were through the roof. Zidane looked just as shocked, admitting he never expected it either. And Plutty leaned in like, "So what's wrong? Are you dissatisfied?" Astra blushed so hard with embarrassment that she blurted out, "No way." Plutty snapped that there was no need to react like that, and then she warned her if a woman became queen, it would be the worst nightmare for the conspirators trying to ruin her. Then she said that if any demon wanted to claw their way as close to power as possible, the fastest route was marrying off their daughter or sister to the Lord, and Kidding just nodded like, "Yeah, got it." And he said, straight up, if Sedan and Astras tied the knot, the conspirators would get wiped clean. Platy confirmed it with zero hesitation. Then Astras just stared, mortified, because Platy backed it up, saying that's exactly what they'd already decided, and the poor, speechless Astras finally tried to muster up an objection. The lady stared at her with furious eyes, and the woman snapped that if they ever got married, what would she actually have to do then? The girl grinned and said, "That's a great question." She said, "You can't marry without swapping vows before God." Zidane and Astros instantly clasped hands, locked eyes, and weighed every word before God as well, while the demon's subordinates erupted in joy, and Caden pressed her for every detail. Plotty promised she'd explain right now, then burst into excited words. "You've got to take your vows in the presence of God. Once that's done, nobody can come for your marriage." He didn't even think twice. Then he remembered how, in his old world, registering a marriage meant you had to march to the district office and fill out a form. He still pressed, demanding to know exactly what this oath would require, and Platy lit up at the question because now they were about to find out. After a while, the undead king finally lumbered in and demanded, "Why did you summon me?" And Zidane froze in shock, realizing an immortal monarch had truly arrived. He even admitted the rumors about the saint having 2 world disasters under his thumb were real, and Vale exploded in indignation because they'd been feeding her this same lie over and over. Zayden stared into the yawning Vale and snapped that the child was a dragon. Astras nodded in agreement. Then Keren turned to Platy and demanded why she'd summoned the undead king. The girl beamed and promised him he'd get to see their wedding. Zayden and Astra went totally silent, stunned out of their minds. Platy told him the undead king used to be a high priest, and through their vows, the god would watch them. Then Kedon snapped back to the marriage ceremony from his own world. Platy blurted out to the undead king, "What do you think about this?" And the king answered, "Zaydan and Astras come from the demon race, even though I'm undead now. I used to serve the humans." She flinched hard, crumpled to her knees, and blurted that she'd made a mistake. Keaton froze, totally baffled, and demanded to know what was wrong. Plenty lays it out, every race bows to different gods. Humans swear by Zeus, mermaids pray to Poseidon, and demons worship Hades. Bottom line, they all believe their own god. He didn't get what the girl was hinting at and thought she was basically asking for a monk to be dragged to church. Then she screamed at him for what she'd done, yet the undead king only said he'd try. And everyone else burst out in stunned, "Can you really?" The immortal king admitted that after more than 1,000 years, he'd hoarded a mountain of knowledge, and even with religions changing, he could still pray then. Platy practically burst with joy. Then she swung around to Zaydan and Astras and demanded, "Are you two really good with this?" The woman snapped back, "No way," and threw her gratitude at her right after. The undead king thrust out his hand and declared it was time. Then he started chanting a spell for prosperity that would actually bear fruit, but Temi and Balena whipped their heads around in dread while Kadhan and Vale watched with sharp, wary eyes. The king kept chanting his spell, promising them a descent into his own depths and the mother goddess's blessing, so this would become a sanctuary, and he demanded the place be purified however they wanted. The roar kept swelling until the undead king bellowed and shot his hand into the air. Boom, an enormous magical seal blazed across the sky, and lightning crashed down. Estrez and Zidane scanned their surroundings, and Caden blurted, "What's happening?" Platy snapped back that this was the undead king's prayer, and the air itself felt like it was crushing down on them. Then they spot something forming beyond those massive air currents and snapped their eyes toward one direction. Right in the heart of the magic seal, a giant man burst into the sky. Staff clutched in his hands, wrapped in a cloak, and crowned like a walking disaster. Astro snapped to it instantly. That cold underground presence was Hades, the god of the underworld, and Keaton's scream ripped out of his chest in pure shock. The undead king never saw it coming. Then he just stayed cool and admitted he'd gone too far by summoning the god himself, and Platy was left staring, totally stunned that anyone could pull off something like that. He said he was building a holy ground for a ceremony, so it felt weird that a god popped up out of nowhere. Then Platy snapped, "Forget it. What do we do now? Hades snapped up and demanded answers nobody had called him in years, so what was he doing here? And the second the Temi and Belena realized the kids of Zeus might have kicked off the last war again, terror hit them hard. Zidane dropped to one knee and snapped, "That's not true." He said the war was grinding on with mixed results, yet the demons must stay sharp, and told Hades not to worry. Then the god of the underworld demanded, "So why did you call me here?" Zidane threw in a quick apology, introduced himself as a demon lord, and watched Kidan's face light up with shock because he was suddenly talking to a god. Then Zidane straightened, bowed his head, and declared he wanted to marry the lady who owned his heart. So they threw together a wedding ceremony and begged for a blessing from the god of the underworld. Then they messed up and called him out personally. And even the king of the undead had to step in and apologize. Zidane demanded they swallow their sincere apologies for shattering his peace. And when Hades found out he'd been summoned by the immortal king, he shrugged because honestly, what else could it be? Then he agreed and said, "To earn my blessing, Zidane can't take another wife." He turned to the Lord, kneeling before him, and demanded, "Tell me, will you love just one woman for the rest of your life?" Zidane nodded and swore it was his wish then. With the Lord of Demons himself promising it, he declared he'd marry only Astros and stay with her for the rest of his life. Hades clapped back, calling it well-spoken, then shot his hand out and promised to place his blessing on them. After a while, the storm finally calmed and the underworld god vanished. Then Zidane shot up from his knee and grabbed Astros' hand. Keaton figured God Hades wasn't so terrible, but Vale snapped that he was so loud, her ears were ringing, and the king of the undead nodded along, swearing he'd be smarter with his prayers next time. Joyful Pleiades sprinted straight up to the demons and blurted, "This is amazing, you've been given a direct blessing from God," because she knew that kind of favor was heaven's strongest backing. The undead king demanded good health, painless childbirth, and unstoppable fertility, then swore that divine punishment would slam down on anyone who dared try to split them apart. Temi and Belena couldn't stop smiling because they'd pulled it off, and Zidane said this was the perfect proof of his love for Astros. At least to the demons, Keaton just kept thinking an oath sworn before God was way cooler than any marriage registration. The demon lord snapped his gaze to Kidan and Pleiades and said they'd rescued him because thanks to them, his dream of marrying Astras, the one he'd nearly surrendered, finally came true. Astra, tears of joy streaking down her face, swore she'd never forget their kindness while Kidan flailed his hands, insisting he hadn't done anything, even though the truth was he was absolutely thrilled for her. Astras felt her heart soar at those words. Then Zidane leaned in and demanded to know if they'd head back right then and there to tell everyone at home that she was their queen now. The woman flat out refused Zidane, insisting she'd linger here a bit longer, and Zidane and Keaton were stunned by the move. Grinzelvale was seething with rage and ordered her to get out, but she fired back that they were already married, so they should return to their own country. Then Kidan shouted at the girl to stop. Then he pressed Astros, asking why she was so desperate to stay, and Zidane stared at her too, totally baffled. She told Zidane she'd changed for real, that Caden's guidance had taught her so much, and she wanted to keep going because she was chasing the goal of becoming a truly worthy wife. The man froze in shock, then admitted it looked like the woman had a reason turned to Keaton, said he needed a favor too, and asked him to watch Astra a little longer, but Temi and Belena stared at them, terrified and worried. Keaton shot back that he didn't mind, then the veil shocked everyone by wanting to shove them out ASAP, just so they wouldn't have to share food, and when the hero finally spoke, he admitted he didn't even know how he could help, especially since they'd just gotten married, and the thought of separating them made him feel totally awkward. Zidane even asked, "Mind if I stay here for a while too?" And that line totally caught Astra off guard, while Keaton just stood there, utterly confused. He asked if doing it would bring any harm, and Plotty and Vile looked totally lost too. Then Keaton leaned in and asked whether it would be troublesome for demon people, only for the demon lord to smirk and say that if it was just for a short time, then it wouldn't be. And he broke it down like this: ever since the dragon struck, both sides have tumbled into chaos, so while they're still scrambling for intel, the troops can't move. Keaton barked that he got it, while Vale's fury flared because she was the one taking the blame. Zidane asked if Keaton would mind, and Keaton snapped back, "Of course not, we'll just make ourselves at home." Then his mind raced to the real problem. They'd have to build a whole house together, too. She snapped that they better not be losing their minds because if there was a conspirator hiding in their ranks, she'd have them drop him and move on. Velament told them that if they weren't around, he could keep cooking up his plans, and he asked straight up if they really wanted to let him do it, while Astros' subordinates, Plati and Kidan, hesitated and weighed their options. Zidane smirked like he owned the night and told everyone not to worry because he'd already handled it. Then he cackled, wicked and sharp. Kadonic couldn't help but gasp, amazed that this was just how a demon lord should act, and Vale definitely wasn't buying it. She jabbed at Zidane and snapped, "So where's your ship? How did you even get here if you're so strange?" And right beside her, Plati and Kidan leaned in, dying to know. The man told him teleportation magic could do it if you had coordinates. You vanished and reappeared in the blink of an eye. Kidan grinned, saying it was ridiculously convenient. Zidane snapped his attention to Astros' subordinate, Belina, and her whole body flinched as she blurted that she wasn't just anyone, she was one of the rare spatial demons. Right before she came here, she slipped a note with coordinates into the world, and the demon lord used them to pinpoint the port. Temmie threw her arms around Belina, chirping that she was fine, totally mortifying the poor girl. Belina shot back that something felt off, like they were being forced to split up because of some nasty conspiracy. The demon lord thanked Belina for saving them, and Vale fumed, furious that she'd never be able to forgive her. Plati cut into the talk and admitted she didn't want to question anything, but there were other spatial magics too. The girl demanded to know if they'd really come here. Zidane told her not to worry, because these coordinates are locked behind encryption. If the person who set them up won't hand over the decryption key, then they're basically worthless. The demon lord even warned them that this place slipped past everyone else's eyes. Keaton and Whale stared at him, stunned. Zidane explained that once the demon race unleashes the magic of space and clairvoyance, the magicians can team both powers and instantly see a place miles away. But the whole place is sealed behind protection that shuts down any magic like it's nothing. So the heroes froze, shocked to learn it. Zidane admitted he'd taken a huge risk by teleporting, but Balin's help let him land here. Then Temmie shot a gesture back like, "See? I'm doing great." The demon lord decided they'd never make it here, and even worse, they wouldn't have a clue where this place even was. He didn't answer with anything like, "I understand." The boy demanded to know who forged that crazy useful spell, and Vale puffed her cheeks like she was about to argue. The undead king said that kind of magic was straight out of a dragon's reach. If he wasn't mistaken, then all eyes snapped back to Vale. The human-shaped dragon leaned in and said she'd finally been hit with the truth, then admitted her role. She ditched Astros on the battlefield, came back afterward, and trapped the whole area behind an unbreakable barrier. Vale was still seething. If Astros hadn't stopped her, she would have kept on eating. Belena went pale at that. Then Kitten stared at Vale, dropped to one knee, and told her she'd been terrified for him, adding, with total sincerity, that she was grateful he was okay. The dragon snapped that it was obvious because she alone had to gulp down every single one of the master's dishes, but the freeloaders kept pouring in over and over, and if this didn't stop, she'd have nothing left. Plotty and Astros' subordinates stared at her in stunned disbelief. Balan snapped that she hated them only because of the food. Then Timmy and Astros nodded along as if it all made perfect sense. Caden slid his hand into her hair, gently stroking, and told her she was good and that she always protected him. She melted into it and flashed a smile, confirming everything. Keaton burst out with excitement, announcing that today they'd throw a huge celebration for Astros and Zidane's wedding and to honor Vale for everything she's done. The undead king leaned in, practically vibrating with excitement, asking if he could jump in. Kidan nodded with a grin, and Zayden and Astros shot him their thanks. After a while, they dragged a table outside and piled it with enough food to make anyone's stomach drop. And Kedin told them he'd already congratulated the Demon Lord and Astra on their wedding. Zidane dove into the dishes for the very first time, and Astros lit up with excitement, while Batami and Belena cheered right along. The Demon Lord nearly choked as the flavor hit, swearing it was the first time he'd ever tasted something this delicious, and when Kidan said he was just glad he enjoyed it, the guy immediately shoved a massive meat platter at Vale, who lit up instantly, clutching not one, but 2 spoons. After one bite, she snapped her eyes open, transformed into a dragon, and screamed with blazing fire about how unbelievably delicious the food was, so Kidan immediately ripped into her, "Don't turn at the table, and don't breathe fire." She snapped back into her human body and basically bragged, "I've never tasted meat this good before." Zidane's jaw dropped because, yep, she really was a dragon, and Kidan just grinned, like that was exactly what he expected. Then he told her the truth. Asteri had snagged a Kurosaki deer for them, and that whole twist left the woman completely stunned. He then explained how he'd hacked the meat into perfect pieces and soaked it in magical spices, and Kidan realized this wasn't just his work. Because others had pitched in, too, Vale was blown away. Then she broke into a wicked laugh, smugly insisting there was no other outcome those lower creatures had to serve her and her master. Plati snapped that she'd knock her down right now, and Astras grinned, saying she couldn't wait to try. Kidding let out a chuckle and told them that even with that attitude, Vale had done a ton for them, while Plati pointed out she still had a mountain of work left to shape her character. Then the girl took a bite, lit up, and declared it was perfect because her husband's dishes were staying a secret, no matter what. Zayden nodded along, swearing that kind of delicacy doesn't even show up in palaces. Then he nodded and said, "Now I get it. This is why the dragon hid this place." Astras clenched up, worrying hard. Pleti leaned in and asked Kadan how he cooked like that. Kadan froze, shocked, then admitted he lived alone and had to figure things out somehow, but there was nothing special about it at all. He also said that with the skill he got, he could remake ingredients and cook dishes from worlds no one here had ever even seen. Then he swore that same power lets him cook even better. He thrust the plate into the undead king's hands and told him whatever it was, he was just relieved they actually liked it. Right then, Astra stormed up to him and demanded to know if his dishes were classified as state secrets. Vale shot back that it was a state secret, and Kiran refused to call it anything but the secret it was. Then the woman dropped to her knees and faced the boy. His eyes went wide as he blurted out, "What happened?" Astra said she wanted to try again, then straight up asked him to take her into service and teach her what a real wife should know how to do, and Kedan and the others were absolutely floored by it. Plenty snapped in rage and demanded through clenched teeth why Astros was grilling another woman's husband about it. Then the woman sputtered an apology, gave a veiled chuckle, and admitted she couldn't do that. Plotty snapped with anger, then frowned and said she only knew how to swing her hand chops, but Kidan quickly reassured her, telling her she was awesome at plenty of other things too. He told her that it was all her fault she'd made him grow crops and whip up the most delicious food. And when Plotty heard that, her eyes filled with love as she stared at him, thrilled beyond words. Kidan spun around and faced the Demon Queen Astros, then told her straight up that Coco should be the one watching over her. She flat out refused, insisting she had to crush every hardship on her own, an obedient wife to the Demon Lord. No exceptions, and Batami and Balina beamed with pride in their mistress. Caden flashed a grin and praised her sincerity, but Zayden's mind raced. Then he snapped his gaze back to Caden and asked if he could join the training too. Caden froze in shock and fired back, "What do you mean?" He asked if he wanted to join the wedding training too, and Zadana lit up, saying it was a seriously fascinating place. Not just the kitchen, right down to the harvest they gathered for their own buildings. Everything here blows him away. So he tells Astro that he finally gets why they'd want to study here. He wants to give her the same kind of support she's begging for, just like her husband does. He also dives into his take on how married couples should back each other exactly like Keaton does. He practically glowed hearing those words aimed at him, and Plati even said it was no surprise because he wasn't like the other kings who just sat pretty in their castles. Seddon swore again that he was betting everything on St. Kidan. Then the Astros backed up every word. Time dragged by as orcs and goblins hauled lumber and built a brand new building, and Zeden teamed up with them, then turned to Keaton and asked, "How's it going?" Keaton grinned and said he was doing great. Then he blurted that he was crazy good with his hands and that's why he appreciated it, and right then, Astro shouted at the man. She bustled in wearing an apron and mittens, lifting out the food and announcing it was ready. Then Zedan's face went beet red so fast it was hard to miss. Astro stared, shocked, and asked why he was acting like that, and Zedan stammered that it was nothing even though his mind was already soaring in heaven. The hero slid back into the outdoor table again, piled high with food. Keaton raved about how insanely tasty it was. Vale shoved food down without slowing, and Plati praised Astros. Then she noticed the Demon King was actually crying from the flavor. He demanded the dish's name, and Astra shot back, "It's Nikujaba." Kedan stared, realizing Astra had whipped most of it up by herself. Then Zayden straight up couldn't believe his eyes. He told her, "Since you're already a swordsman, you can handle a kitchen knife like it's nothing. Now you just have to learn the steps, read the ingredients and seasonings, and if you don't, you're out." Butemi and Belena stepped in to support her, and the woman thanked them. Then her mind immediately raced to everything else she still needed for the engagement. Amy shot back, "Of course it's clothes," and then hit him with the real lesson they had to learn how to sew. She turned to the Demon King and blinked. "Wait, he's wearing a totally normal shirt." Zidane nodded and said he'd gotten it from St. Kidan. Betemio was shocked. Kidan did something like that, but Kidan just shrugged and said, "I'm a guy, so I can make clothes for other guys too." And Betemio went along. But he already promised Plati some clothes, he just can't lock in a single design idea. He also told them he had already brought some fabric, snatched it from the table, and asked everyone to hold on just a little while. Kidan hauled out 3 rolls and blurted that it was all he had left. And Batami froze, then lit up, saying she'd never laid eyes on fabric that beautiful before. He told me he'd already cleared a mountain dungeon once, and there he found a caterpillar that blasted out twisting threads. So he decided to test the idea. He hauled some of them back home and built special enclosures for them. And Plotty couldn't believe what she was seeing. Then Keaton blurted out how he finally got the chance to turn caterpillars into this fabric, and everyone went completely silent, stunned by the revelation. But Temi clutched the fabric roll in her hands, still shocked that you could spin thread from caterpillar excrement. Balina just shrugged, saying his ideas were way too wild for this world, like anyone would have guessed. And right after that, Batemi's eyes flared with excitement. "So you're saying it's really fine to make clothes for girls using fabric spun from caterpillars?" Keating leaned in and asked if she could do it, and Astro's subordinate nodded right away, saying her parents actually owned a fabric store, so she'd been doing this stuff forever. Astro's eyes widened because she had no idea, and Belina beamed like, "This is amazing." Then Temi leaned in, begging, "Can I give it to her?" Kadan answered fast, "She's my savior." And Astra stepped up too, ready to help because this wasn't just kindness, it was part of her training. Badami said, "All right then, let's start by making clothes for Miss Plady." And when the girl grinned and nodded, she couldn't hide her excitement. because she was dying to see what they'd whip up. Batami yanked out a rope and smirked, telling her to wait until everything was settled, then start by measuring its parameters. With an evil grin, she dragged the rope through the air, and Platy couldn't read the look on Batami's face, while Kitten swore he already knew it couldn't possibly work. She told them she knew the plan was to outfit Platy first, but once that was done, she'd sew for everyone, so she politely asked to measure each person. Then Platy demanded to know how she wanted them all to strip. Then she flicked her hand with just enough swagger to make Patami gasp, eyes wide, cheeks burning red. Then she leaned in and asked if Platy had always gone commando, and the girl hit her with, "What does commando even mean?" And then it hit her back when she first met her husband. He'd reacted the exact same way Astros made it brutally clear she really was a mermaid, and she had absolutely no clue she needed to cover her lower half. Platy shot a quick question asking if anything was wrong, and Bedema snapped back wide-eyed, like the question itself caught them off guard. Astros said that for them, demons and the surface dwellers showing their lower half to the public is treated like a straight-up crime. Plenty blurted out that she couldn't believe it and demanded to know why nobody had warned her, and Astros just shrugged that nobody ever imagined she'd move like that. Then the mermaid princess snapped back to it. She'd seen her brother slathering something onto his body. Sometimes Temi finally broke it down. That's what they called underwear. Platy suddenly snapped to it. She realized lingerie wasn't just sexy stuff at all. It was formal wear for diplomatic meetings, while Tammy just sat there, still insisting she thought it was formal. After that, she lit up and begged for everything, swearing she'd prove just you wait why those clothes were so amazing, and Plenty admitted she didn't fully get it, but she was trusting her anyway. The girl began taking measurements, and Patami leaned in to ask Pletty if she could suck in her stomach, making Pletty instantly blush. Pletty snapped back that she'd never been this upset over her husband's food before, and Patami shrugged it off like it was completely normal. The girl kept measuring the others, blurted that Miss Astros's belly was way fuller than she'd expected, and Belina shrugged it off as the power of love, while Astros blushed and begged her to shut up Vela, then stared, baffled, wondering what these pests were up to. After a while, the work was finally done, and Butemi burst out with happy cheers, saying the ruffles on her dress were inspired by the sea waves and their blue glow, fitting Platy, the mermaid princess, perfectly. Keaton and Zedin couldn't get enough of it either, and then Batami leaned in and asked the girl if she liked it. Platy lit up and said it was totally unusual and that she was genuinely thrilled Kidan thanked her too, admitting he was insanely happy, but Batami immediately froze, cheeks burning with embarrassment. Then Platy stepped up to him and he shot back that it fit her perfectly. She even added that Bitemi had made her underwear too. Keaton froze, mortified by the words, and Platy pressed, asking if that counted as unacceptable. The guy nodded in agreement. The mermaid princess shrugged and said it didn't matter, because when her brother did it, it was amazing. Keaton just thought, next time I'm doing it too, and I'm definitely giving my wife's brother the same close call. Vale kept staring at Platy's clothes the whole time, and then lit a fireball in her hand straight up and hurled it at Platy. The girl let out a loud scream, demanding to know what he thought he was doing while staring at the ball. Then Kidan went, "Wait, what's her problem?" Because he assumed she was just jealous, and Vale shot back, "Just shut up and watch." The flames finally died out, and the dress sat there untouched, totally unscathed, and the mermaid princess stared at it, utterly baffled. She started poking it, demanding to know why it wasn't even singed, no scorch marks, nothing. Then Vale leaned in and told her, because this fabric is packed with anti-magic. In human form, the dragon swore this would pack insane defense, and then she smirked, saying this dress was way better than plain old armor. Platy demanded to know what Patami had done to him, but Patami, totally baffled, swore she hadn't done a single thing, and Belina leaned in, saying, if that's true, then why? Platy shot back that maybe the caterpillar had some kind of special power. They're gonna grill Kid, ask him if he messed with that caterpillar, and Kid just shrugs and says he handled them with kid gloves, all while praying he can turn them into some sick clothes for that Platy. Vale shot back that she was sure of it, then leaned in and said the orcs and goblins change after they cross paths with Keaton, and maybe the same thing hit this caterpillar too. The boy nodded that he got it, and Vale practically gasped because this was the birth of yet another legendary armor until Batami cut in, saying it wasn't armor at all, it was fashion. Vale spun toward Batami and barked at her to hurry up and forge the exact same armor for her, but the girl kept pushing back, insisting it wasn't armor at all. Still, Kidan couldn't help being thankful for how tough and durable it was. He realized the Demon King's clothes started out as plain cotton futon bedding, so he figured they'd probably corner Batami and demand she remake them. Zidane realized, yep, another day, another surprise hitting him out of nowhere. Then Aster's eyes snapped to his, and that caught his full attention. She said his clothes were torn up, like he'd snagged them on something while he was working. He spotted a tiny cut on the side and couldn't stop himself. He just stared like, no way I actually tore the shirt Kidan gave me. Astra promised she'd fix it, then her cheeks flared as she admitted she'd just learned it and wasn't great yet. But the Demon Lord watched closely. thanked her, and told her he'd leave it all in her hands. Everyone stared as Zayden ripped off his shirt and stitched up the torn hole right in front of them. And Keaton actually convinced himself it was fine, because maybe the Demon King could keep wearing it a little longer. It all goes down in the human kingdom, then the king's voice blasts in, snarling that he hates the dragon. While he lounges there, sipping from his glass, he mutters that ever since this dragon stepped in, the war has hit a dead end. The advisor tells them the frontline generals still don't know why the dragon showed up, so the army is ordered to stay put, but the king rages at the army and those generals for chickening out. Then he presses for answers about the master the dragon bows to, and he insists that name is Saint Kidon, only for the advisor to slam the brakes and say there's nothing on it at all. With a smug sips and smirks, His Majesty tosses out that every last one of these people is useless, and then the advisor drops to the ground with sincere apologies. Then His Majesty slams the glass down onto the floor and the advisor watches it all go down. Right there, furious orders come next. Bring another glass of freshly squeezed fish juice. The advisor wastes no time and agrees on the spot. The advisor can't wrap his head around it. How in the world is His Majesty forcing down that vile stuff? His Majesty snaps back that this whole situation is straight up awful. He lets out a heavy sigh, staring ahead like, if we'd played this right, we could have ended that war that's been raging for centuries. His Majesty, Junxus the 18th, has to stop this human versus demon war, no delays, no mercy, and to secure victory, he rips open the Mana Country's full power to summon heroes from a parallel world. His Majesty believes that if they smash the demon race, they'll seize that power for themselves and for the country too. That's all he needs to hear. Right then, the advisor rushes in and serves him fish juice. Magdadi first decides they've got to survive the dragon because that's the only way forward in his mind. So he turns to the advisor and fires off the question. Does he truly believe the dragon's master is real? The advisor doesn't sugarcoat it. Tons of people question the same thing. The advisor warns, make one wrong move and you'll just set him off, so if that dragon ever shows up again, total destruction is guaranteed. With juice sliding down his throat, the king ignored the advisor's words until the thought of destruction hit him like a thunderclap, and he snapped back to his senses right away. His Majesty slams the glass onto his throne, and the juice rockets across everything as he rips the advisor into action. Go find Saint Coden. If Saint Coden bends to their side and becomes one of their subjects, then they'll beat them for sure. The advisor admits it might be true, but then asks, how do you even track down a person like that? And the king snaps back, ordering him to form a search party made of proven, capable heroes. The advisor warns that the demon capital is teetering in a full civil war, and that only lights His Majesty's rage even hotter. He snaps that he doesn't care, and then orders the army to be temporarily disbanded. He demands every scrap of the country's resources gets poured into finding Saint Coden, and his advisor snaps to it instantly. Then His Majesty declares, I'll find Saint Coden for sure, and once I do, humanity will finally claim victory. Somewhere else, in a whole different moment in time, a traditional Japanese house stood quietly, while inside, a man and a woman sat down to a cozy, pleasant night, pouring drinks into cups like they had all the time in the world. The guy says, 2 months have already gone by since we landed here, and the girl grins, good, because we're about to learn a ton. He takes a couple of sips, then lets out a heavy, sorrowful sigh. After that, he leans toward the girl and urges her to feel that blade's power again next. He yanks out the sword and stares at it with pure, bouncing excitement. The girl presses the Demon King about what's troubling him, and the moment he turns, he tells her Astros that the holy sword, Ainlof, is in an uproar. And the Demon King claims that the sword resonates with someone, and Astros freezes in silence for a bit until, all of a sudden, she remembers. After a while, they finally push toward the spot where they're hunting for the Holy Lord Kadan, and right as they arrive, he roars, I'm here. Then he turns to the Demon King and fires off his question about the thing that's been worrying him. The Demon King steps up to the Holy Lord's sword raised in his hands and demands to know what on earth Kitten is holding. Keaton says this blade is ridiculously useful, then he proves it, slicing straight through mana metal with ease. Platy claims they grabbed a sacred sword straight from the Undead King's dungeon, and the sword is getting mishandled right in front of everyone. The Demon King never saw it coming. The Holy Lord of the Swindler actually had the legendary Devil Sword. Dr. Schwarz Norio swore he'd return it to his teacher, but that blade refused to leave his side. The Flesh Princess whirls to Norio and credits him for saving her from the Undead King, and Norio just grimly admits that back then he had no choice because he didn't even understand the God-given power coursing through him. The Demon King and the girl standing beside him freeze in shock when Norio speaks, and the Demon King murmurs that in the legend he knows, a saint's power blessed by the gods can even rival a hero's strength. Norio remembers back when the Undead King's teacher warned him about the same thing, and now the Demon King swivels toward Lord Saint Norio, thinking, wait, are you one of the heroes humanity dragged here from that parallel world? Norio thinks it through and tells the Demon King, there's truth to what you're saying, but the Demon King can't bring himself to believe him. Norio's voice crackles with excitement as he reveals just like the whole team already guessed that he's from a parallel world, and when he admits he's got zero fighting skills, the Demon King instantly boots him out of the war. stunned by everything Norio just confessed. So that's why Norio struck out into a nomadic life here, miles away from everyone, cut off from the human race, and the Demon King can't wrap his head around it. The girl spins to face him and asks, "Wasn't it supposed to be hard?" Norio grins, says, "Nope," then drops to his knees and scoops up a handful of earth. He curls his fist tight and demonstrates his power on the spot. He makes a tiny flower bloom from just an ordinary handful of dirt. The Demon King's eyes widen when that tiny bud suddenly sprouts. Then Noria steps in and tells him it's a gift from the gods, the perfect sign for a calm, peaceful life. The Demon King clocked everything in an instant, called it a miracle, and then shut it down for combat, because if Noria wants to outmuscle the undead king, she's got to do more. Suddenly, Noria snaps. He says he can use the power they gave him for more than one thing, like unlocking the true potential of anything his hands touch. The Demon King and Astro stare in shock as Dr. Shorts unleashes the Devil Ball's full power, and Norio snaps that it changes nothing just because he's the strongest. The Demon King trembles as he declares, one breath at a time, that not a single soul in this world could ever wield Norio's power. The Demon King keeps brooding over the power the gods of the human race handed to Norio, then turns to him and demands does he want to prove he's stronger than humanity and march back to his kingdom. Nor shrugs it off and says he won't touch it because yeah, that'd feel rude to the Demon King who's grinding the human race down, but Norio isn't tied to any of that chaos. Noria snaps that he belongs to no one so he can marry Princess Plotty, then Princess Plotty turns to Shyly and the Demon King whips his gaze to the Holy Lord, Norio. He insists the Light Lord is right because if he weren't here, things would spiral harder and harder against the mermaid race who are fighting right alongside them in this war. The Demon King whips around to Sansedan Norio and declares that his very existence matters to this world. Then he raises a toast to hope, demanding that everything goes perfectly from here on out. Saint Lord Kitan Norio stares at the Demon King, stunned and buzzing with excitement, then grips his hand and immediately nods, confirming every word the Demon King just said. After a while, the Demon King and the girl Astros finally rolled back to the Lord Saint. Then the Demon King proudly declared, "We clamped down on anyone who was enjoying themselves while we were gone." The Demon King orders them to purge the traitors a bit more and win hearts across the whole nation, and Norio can't stop smiling at how it's going. Norio can't help but gush in awe. He thought they were just savoring their honeymoon. But no, they actually planned every detail perfectly. Then Vale turns to the two girls standing behind her and fires off a question. Why don't those two ever climb aboard and ride with the Demon King? The girls shuffle, squirming through his worried question, then shrug and tell him, "Since we're here, the Demon King can come back anytime he wants." Vale snaps into a dragon in an instant, roars that the Miyagam will whisk these girls straight to the land of demons, and Norio scrambles to calm her down. The sea practically beckons the Demon King to come and restock his supplies, and one of the girls steps forward, "I'm Balena," promising she'll handle her part by linking the king to this land. The Demon King in Astras shoots Balena a grateful nod for saving the day, then admits he's got his sights on another girl, Patami, but Patami shuts it down fast. She's staying right here because she's Balena's friend. Patama marches up to the Demon King, asks for permission, and declares she wants to stay right here, keeping the sewing going and making clothes from scratch. For Norio, it's a perfect setup. Then Patama strides up to Miss Astras, cheeks warm with embarrassment but eyes sharp with thought. Yet Astras is completely clueless. Suddenly, she's staring at herself in a gorgeous, breathtaking dress, and Emma swears it was her who stitched that very gown for the one and only Miss Astras, the woman who stole the Demon King's heart. That girl couldn't help feeling a little sad through all the joy. Then she thanked Patami right as the Demon King offered her the asterisk to move on, and she agreed on the spot. A blazing magic circle snaps into existence behind the Demon King and Aster, and they turn back to their friends, then shout their goodbyes and swear they'll meet again. The whole company huddles in, sending them off with full-on wishes of luck, and after a bit, a portal rips open, swallowing the Demon King and Asterisk in a blink. The Demon King whips around to Astras and admits, "Back then, I always believed I'd never be able to settle this demon versus human war peacefully." Astras is completely thrown off by what the Demon King says, and he keeps pressing on because the Lord Saint's very existence hits him hard, proving that everything he sacrificed wasn't some dream after all. Astro strides straight toward the Demon King. Then he rushes up to her, pleading for her power to fuel his dream, and Astros agrees on the spot, no hesitation at all. Long before the Demon King ever marched back home, Noria tracked someone down and challenged him to a competition only to realize she'd just offered that deal to the Demon King himself, and he sat with the idea for a long, long time. The Demon King is dying to get that kind of win. He wants to see just how strong Saint Kitten really is. But the truth is, Noria can't handle the ball worth a damn, so they're going with something simple. Out of nowhere, the arena blinks right into the ground. Norio throws out the idea of sumo, and the Demon King pushes him to say it again. Norio grins and explains that sumo is a game where two people stand face to face. He keeps laying out the rules if they want to win, Both people have to stay inside the circle. Then the Demon King's eyes light up and he declares they'll battle until one of them can't keep going. Noria shuts him down and rejects his claim. Noria lunges closer to the Demon King, grabs him, and snaps that he should keep his opponent pinned the same way. Norio says the Demon King can't land a single hit, so he has to drag him outside the circle and every strike is off limits. The king nodded like he'd seen it all and he said it looked easy. Noria immediately backed him up. Then the Demon King snapped into position and challenged Norio to fight. Norio agreed, but only once, and the king gave the nod right away. They face off across the circle and launch their clash at once, no hesitation, just impact. Norio strains to shove the Demon King out of that ring, but the Demon King won't budge. Suddenly, Norio snaps back. He remembers he's loaded with sumo techniques, so he hammers the Demon King with one right away, and the Demon King totally didn't see it coming as he crumples to the ground. The Demon King was left utterly stunned, like he couldn't even process what just happened, while Norio blurted out an apology, shouting that none of it was supposed to happen. The Demon King orders the Saint to back out of this fight again, and the Lord Saint nods right then. She calls Okubo, and a voice cries out, begging for help. It was the Mermaid Prince. He spun around towards Sankidan, completely stunned, and the Demon King was even more rattled, staring in shock at the sheer presence of the Mermaid Prince. The Mermaid Princess freezes because the Demon King is standing right here. Norio steps in fast, tells her to breathe, and asks her for an idea. The Demon King clashes head-on with the Mermaid Prince in a brutal sumo showdown, while Norio steps in as the referee, blowing the whistle and yelling, "You're still in the ring," and both monsters immediately keep smashing forward. Just like that, an ogre called Okubo barks for Nori. Norio turns and orders the district to flood in with more guys. Then one by one, beast people pile into the ring to brawl, and none of them can shove each other out of the bounds. All the guys at the company watched that fight like it was entertainment, and they got what they came for, pure satisfaction. Then, after that day, sumo blew up and became a hit with every last one of them. After brutal, long wars, Prince Arwana finally seized the title and became the champion, while Norio stood there in shock, realizing mermaids could actually hold their own on dry land. After a little while, a voice crackles from inside Norio's house. The bread's ready, and a girl tears into it with a satisfying crunch, swooning at how soft that beautiful bread is. Just like the princess, she can't stop admiring, and Vale can't get enough of it either. The girls also can't get over the bread because they swear the food is the same in every world, yet the taste and texture always twist into something different. The princess leans in and demands to know what in the world this bread is, and Norio straight up confirms every word. Then he explains it's a staple back home, made with wheat flour that can be whipped into all sorts of other food too. Norio smirks and says this is just another notch in his belt. Then Vale shows up, snaps, "Move, and make me more of these, Aiki." But before everything kicks off, the Lord Saint drops a bombshell. He wants to bring out one last thing from his world, a real food product, the next harvest he plans to grow. It's rice straight up. All the girls freeze in shock, totally lost, like, wait, what kind of rice is this supposed to be? Then Vale can't help it. She starts wondering what this rice even tastes like. The Lord Saint says those are sweet, white grains, kind of like wheat, but nothing like it. The princess is left stunned by her husband's words. Norio fires back that rice is grown the same way wheat is. The flesh princess is utterly stunned by her husband's words. She whips around and tells him they have to make some changes. The princess snarls that ever since the Oregon team took over the construction sites, these orcs have been out there doing the grunt work in the fields. After the demon race slipped out, their new crew's in charge of sewing. Belena charts the routes, and whenever anyone runs short on hands, they jump in to help. Plus, they've even got a downright stupid dragon tagging along. Vale claims she keeps this place safe from invasions, carves secret paths through the fields, and even shifts buildings wherever she wants. So the princess nods along, saying everyone's too caught up in their own duties to question it. The princess storms in, furious that it didn't work, then demands they burn through every bit of power to get the wheat ready, harvesting it, grinding it, threshing it because it's a brutal, labor-filled grind, and the girls nod along, fully backing her. The princess starts shrieking that she's the only one doing the work, brewing medicine and fermenting the food. Then everyone freezes at what she just claimed, and they finally realize they've messed up somewhere. The princess starts spilling everything. She runs, she handles the field's fertilizer, brews the meat and soy sauce, makes yeast for the next batch, and keeps the cold storage room perfectly under control. The princess rises again and snaps that she can't shoulder all these duties alone. Then her husband drops to his knees, bows his head, and begs her for forgiveness. Tears spring to his eyes because he wanted to do everything, but he didn't stop to think about the mountain of work they still had to handle. Then he snaps that he's a terrible husband. The princess steadies him and tells him it's okay because he finally understood everything. The wolf swears it's all for the sake of good food, tells the princess to just be patient for a bit. Then the princess snaps, "Shut up, Vale." Right in the middle of the princess and Vale's conversation, a voice cuts in. "It's us, brother-in-law, the prince of the mermaids, Noria blurts out that she's sorry and calls herself a terrible wife. But brother-in-law is completely lost, and he demands the princess explain everything. He tells them that once he sat down with the saint to negotiate, they finally agreed pickled radishes for sale, so he showed up to grab his order. The princess snaps into pure fury because her brother-in-law is the one who ordered all those radishes, and right then he scrambles to calm his sister down. The princess says the neighbor immortal king has a soft spot for this radish, then turns to you and the whole team and goes, "Why do you all love fermented food so much?" And her brother-in-law blurts out that it's not just tasty, it's straight up healthy. Vel declares the bread is insanely tasty, and the girls jump in right away, agreeing with a grin because wow, there are so many kinds of fermented food here. Then they admit one more thing. Even though they're from the demon tribe, they're not exactly great at pharmaceutical magic. Her fury ignites, she snaps that her work is ruining people, and right then, her husband collapses in tears, begging her for forgiveness. And then, boom, the princess hit on a brilliant idea. She said her brother-in-law showed up at the perfect moment, and she pitched the plan hire people who can take the weight off her shoulders and bring in specialists in pharmaceutical magic. The princess grabs her brother and demands he fetch people from the mermaid kingdom. Then he's totally confused, and she just grins and says she'll jack up the price of pickled radishes until he gets it. Then the procession turns to her beloved husband, and he shoots back that if something like this is even possible, he's all in, way more than willing. After that, the Holy Lord pivots to his brother-in-law, and the brother-in-law starts thinking. The princess starts pleading with her brother, insisting yes, even she has to taste the rice her beloved husband made, while Norio blushes hard at every sweet word from his wife. Norio's brother-in-law pauses, weighs everything, then admits that getting the sea inhabitants on the move is going to be a real headache, so Norio presses him again. Shirena whirls to the Holy Lord and asks, "Do the mermaids fear the shore?" Norio first assumes they despise him, then, out of nowhere, the dress starts to warm up to the idea. Shirena struggles to get the words out, but still, he makes his decision. He calls the princess of the Pei a total weirdo, and right then, the brother-in-law's sister's patience snaps as anger surges. She's stunned. She has no clue why her brother-in-law would say something like that out of nowhere. He listens to her words, then drops the truth. Every normal mermaid thinks land is a living nightmare. The girls got it instantly after all. Every mermaid is basically a fish, right? Her brother-in-law swears most sea folk can live just fine on land. So Pleti, choosing to stay there for her whole life, is a wild, rare exception. Her brother-in-law brags that the flesh medicine lets him roam freely between land and water, and Princess Plati's spirits soar from hearing it. Before any of it, everything was just fiction strict limits on side effects for land dwellers, like losing your voice, turning into bubbles, or dissolving away. Vela shows up and commands, "Every mermaid stays in the water," right as her brother-in-law snaps that it's impossible, because the supplies they've got are the key resource for the next round of diplomacy. Brother-in-law declares it plain until a powerful cure shows up, most sea creatures won't dare crawl onto land on their own. Sharanj keeps pushing the idea that as medicine grows stronger, a brand new system has to rise too, one that sweeps criminals out for good, yet the sea and everyone else still can't believe the words coming from his brother-in-law. Shorn adds that if the harshest punishment isn't enough, they'll toss exile on top, because without an antidote, they're left with nothing but a lifetime surviving the wild world out on land. Lord Saint and everyone else freeze in shock at the brother-in-law's words. He claims that for the sea dwellers, the shore will always be hell, and the princess can act more easily than her brother since he's the prince of the mermaids. A lawmaker is scratching his head over the brutal truth if they want the flesh help they need. It's going to take serious brewing potion skill yet, even when they follow the royal orders to cooperate with people, being stuck out there on the ground for so long. The princess fully backs up her brother-in-law and pitches the wild idea of sending those exiled criminals here, so Shorin and the whole company are left completely stunned by what she just said. Surex bursts into screams and furious tears because he can't do it. Mermaid Kingdom owes the Holy Lord, so they can't even turn his lands into a prison, and the lore flower just insists nothing's wrong. Norio refuses to risk the board, but Shorn shrugs and says the Holy Lord, like always, fears nothing, so the ones who will really end up in trouble are the criminals. Out of nowhere, Vale morphs into a dragon and snarls that everything sets her off, then vows they'll burn anyone who dares step in here. Platy snaps to her brother that if he still wants those pickled radishes, he'll need to bring 3 assistants. The Princess of Flesh doesn't care a single bit whether those helpers are criminals or not. If they're talented, she's always thrilled to have them. The Princess of Flesh declares that her moves will haul them straight to heaven, and right when she says it, her husband starts sputtering out apologies for backing her into a corner. After what felt like forever, Sharon finally dragged help back right in front of Norio, stood 3 half-naked girls, and Vale couldn't even wrap his head around why criminals were under his command. While Norio snapped back that this was absolutely, unmistakably not normal. He clears his throat, blurts out an apology for bothering the Lord Saint, then reintroduces every girl like it's urgent. No, don't you dare call the one on the right a pufferfish. The center girl is an anglerfish, and the right one is Garufa. Norio can't figure out why his brother-in-law dragged these girls here until the brother-in-law snaps that they're criminals and tells Norio to keep his eyes on them nonstop. Lord Saint Norio thanks these girls for showing up, introduces himself as Kidan, and then flashes a huge smile. He's genuinely thrilled to meet them. Pufferfish clings to the prince's words about this man, but the angler still doubts the landowner's skills and then can't believe she's the one stuck working for him. Meanwhile, Gararufa just refuses to lift a finger. Right in the middle of everything, a voice snaps through the air. Princess Plotty, she orders these girls to get ready, and the moment she appears, every single one of them freezes, stunned beyond belief. It was the icy cold witch, Rafa, then the Hellfire Witch, Runpai, and the epidemic witch Garufa stared at the whole group in stunned disbelief. The brother-in-law slams down, these girls are criminals starting today, and they'll be forced to labor in a penal colony. All while his sister, Princess Plotty, keeps watch over them. Ronpi stammers, desperate to get her words out, then snaps into a satisfied grin and lunges for Princess Lady's arms while her bewildered brother-in-law, Norial, just stares in shock. Rump immediately drops to one knee. He can't believe it. She hasn't seen Princess Plotty in ages, and her brother-in-law and Norio stare in shock at what's unfolding right in front of them. Ronpai can't believe she's about to serve the princess a genpei, of all things, and hot tears start flooding her eyes as she desperately tries to stop them. But for Ronpai, this is pure bliss and she utterly fails, bursting into tears right there in front of her. The girl points at Ronpai and demands the company treat him like the criminal, then her brother-in-law backs her up on the spot. And everyone knows this trio is infamous back in their country. Rafa flashes a smug smirk and snaps that Ronpai is only famous for clinging to the royal family. Then Rufa cuts in fast, saying Rafa's in love with Prince Arawana too, so she showed up without missing a beat. Rafa's indignation spikes, she snaps, shouting that she's just showing life beyond the sea, not trapping herself in a cage forever. After a beat, she fires back with a sarcastic reply, and right then, Norial realizes these girls can't stand each other. Rufa's clueless about what's next, while Ronpai swears he'll serve the princess until her body turns to dust, and Pei, without a shred of doubt, promises to wipe out humanity with every ounce of power, even as Pei still can't explain who or when she's talking about. Rafa pushes back and demands they answer again. She's already gearing up to help wipe out humanity. Plotty snaps that their plan is shut down, and now they're only here to rein in their art. Norio fires a question at Sharon. What crimes did the three of them pull off? And even with a face full of confusion, Sharon still starts telling the whole story. He tells them that in Mermaid Land, 6 wild magicians brewed beastly potions, and that's how they earned the name Crazy Six Witches. Sharon only brings 3 of them here. Then Norio and the girl beside him fire back, asking him to say it again. He says he'll start with Rafa, the girl who can feel the flow of mana down at the bottom of the world's oceans, and who even tried to manufacture a way to control it artificially. So yeah, to her, there's nothing wrong with it at all. Shireen rants that if Rafa can control mana, she'll drain every water source and wipe out every person and demon in sight, and Norio trembles at those words. Brother-in-law claims Rafa isn't just an extreme radical, she's a terrifying master at her craft, which is exactly why they threw her into prison, and Norial can see every bit of what's going on. Then he blurts out about that girl with glasses. His brother-in-law snaps that her name is Gara Rufa, and that she's a ruthless criminal, and Norio can't hide his surprise. Rufa started out with serious clout in the mermaid medical community, and Norio can't help but admire her. He's thrilled she's stepping up and doing work like that. Brother-in-law still goes, and Rufa once pitched this wild theory, then Rufa herself slams the moment to a halt and interrupts him, sounding a little let down as she admits nobody gets the magic behind her experiments. Rufa gets insanely excited and insists his theory is real, that certain diseases are unleashed by tiny, invisible creatures no one can see. Rufa's brother-in-law just couldn't get it. He'd never get it while Norio tried to piece together her invisible creatures and realized she was talking about microbes. Noriel paused for a beat, then remembered the Princess Plotty, and he was shocked all over again when he told her about yeast and fermentation. Rufa snaps into panic and screams at everyone to listen carefully this time because her body remembers those tiny creatures, and that's why it can fight back. Noryun catches on instantly and blurts out that Rufa means an immune reaction. Rufa keeps rambling about his wild theory: steal blood from someone who already beat the disease, inject it into someone who hasn't, and suddenly their body will fight back. Then Noriel finally clicks, he's talking about a blood transfusion. Shurin leans into it, joking that if someone's blood gets injected into another person, they might as well just end their own life. Then Rufa shows up and completely misses the contradiction. But for Norio, her explanation makes perfect sense, because he's from another world too. Then Norio leans in and asks, what about that girl kneeling right in front of the princess? Pay up. And brother, Law snaps back that she's another major problem brewing. Shurin tells everyone that this girl used to be part of the king's personal guard. Then Norio shows up and demands to know why someone like her ended up locked behind bars. Her brother-in-law swears it all comes down to his sister, mostly the fact that she's still unmarried, and when those marriage proposals started flooding in from demons and humans, the mermaid's feelings were split clean in two. Shuren tells him that back then, one mermaid's aristocrat from the neutral opposition tried to crush the whole idea of marriage, and with that bombshell, he went straight to Shuren's father, the king. The brother-in-law shrugs off the whole thing and says there's zero risk if the engagement suddenly crumbles, then adds that once time drags on, they'll back out too, calm as anything. The law forced that aristocrat to say something he absolutely shouldn't, and he kept quoting him like it was gospel. Meanwhile, the princess only knows her medicine, period, and no matter who she marries, she'll still struggle to play the role of a wife. Hearing all that, Ronpai's rage detonated. He stormed forward, smashed that aristocrat right there on the spot, and left him with not a drop of life left. Right when Shuring was about to finish her story, Ronpai suddenly cut in, appearing out of nowhere and sending Shuring into a full-on fright. She insists the incident wasn't her fault. She swore it all came down to that aristocrat who insulted Platia, so when her brother-in-law tells Norio that Ronpai refuses to confess, they slam her into a cell just to get her in order. The brother-in-law begs for forgiveness for bringing those weird girls, but Plotty shuts him down cold because what's done is done and nothing can be fixed anymore. Norio whips around to play D and asks, "Are you gonna be okay?" And she can't help it. She's blushing hard, smiling like crazy, thrilled that Norio actually worries. Then her brother-in-law just shrugs with a totally calm face and tells her, "You'll be fine." Platy storms up to Shuren, sparks flying as she rages that he never should have been the one dealing with her, and Shuren immediately blurts out that there's something Mr. Norio has to hear. The princess, and that means Platy, is one of the crazy 6 witches. Norio starts spiraling with worry, but she can't even remember her own crimes. Her brother-in-law snaps that Platy is the worst witch there is. She triggered the emergency using forbidden medicines, and no one dares challenge her, because her attitude toward the royal family makes everyone shut their mouths. With all of this piling up, Platy gets slammed with the nickname Crown Witch, and when Norio finally puts it together, his wife is actually a witch. His mind won't calm down at all. Her brother-in-law shrugs off every problem and hands it all to Platy, insisting only she can calm one of the 6, so Platy steps up and begs to be trusted. Platy was thrilled, because this meant she'd finally be stuck with way less work, and while she basked, her brother-in-law, Norio, and the girl stared at her with pure confusion, admiration, and shock. Ronpai gushes, full-on amazed that she'll finally serve the princess again. She bursts out, "This place is literally heaven on earth." Rafa reels it over in his head and fires back, "So what kind of place is this?" Norio says the owner here is this guy named Kitten, and Rafa and Rufa start mulling it over because this place feels human even though they just saw a girl sporting a piece of fabric that looks straight up demonic. Then a goblin and an ogre rush up to Norio and shout that the pizza oven is finally built, and Norio immediately thanks Okubo and Gubunshan for every bit of the work they've done. The witch girls stagger in, eyes wide with shock because they can't process what they're seeing. An ogre and a goblin are actually talking with Mr. Norio. And in that moment, they jump to the wrong conclusion and swear they must have landed in the land of demons. Then Vale cuts in and snaps that for girls like them, every thought they have means nothing because their only job is to quietly help the mermaid whip up even more delicious food. The girls stare at Vale, baffled that such a tiny kid is defending them so fiercely. Then Vale doesn't like what they're saying and she starts glowing, blasting light everywhere until the whole space is swallowed by it, and the girls can't even begin to understand what's happening. Vale's shape shifts into a dragon and towers over them, claiming she's a head taller than the girls. Then the witch team freezes in pure terror at her massive transformation. No one can explain why that dragon from the 2 world disasters ended up here. Then Garurufa suddenly drops, knocked out by pure shock. Norio tries to soothe Vale by warning her she won't get a bite unless she stays quiet, and Vale instantly shuts up, no hesitation. Then Norio grins and declares that they're having a pizza party today to celebrate the arrival of the 3 witches. Vale has no clue pizza even exists, so Norio leans in and tells her she'll finally understand what it is the moment she takes a bite, while Rafa just stares, totally lost, wondering who in the world this guy even is. Platy drops the bomb. This guy is her husband, and when Runpai and Rafa hear it, they just freeze in shock, eyes wide, hearts pounding. Then Rampai's grip on reality snaps. He slumps, loses consciousness, and crashes to the ground. Rafa suddenly heard a voice, spun around in a flash, and there, like a nightmare that learned manners, stood a living skeleton in a robe and hat, thanking everyone for inviting them to the newcomers' party. Rafa spits it out with a shaking voice. This is the Immortal King, and she's completely stunned because somehow 2 world disasters have landed in the same place. And right after that, Rafa's eyes roll back. He crumples to the ground unconscious. Platy snaps that as long as those girls stay asleep, the party won't even start. After what feels like forever, the ramp snaps her eyes open. She's sprawled on a cozy bed. Then she bolts upright, heart racing, because her friends are already there, waiting in a tense hush while the whole building glows with beautiful wooden decor. Ranpai has no clue where she's ended up, then Rafa steps in and swears they're inside a weirdly built house, smelling amazing, with a bed so soft it feels unreal. Ranpai jolts as the truth clicks. Prince Sarawana hauled them up to slave away in brutal penal servitude, and then, out of nowhere, the maid Belena barges into their room. The girls stare at her in stunned silence, realizing she's from the demon race. Belena then snaps that Saint Kodan has handed them a covenant and demands they all meet at one place. But the others are completely lost on what holy throwing is supposed to mean. Suddenly, Ranpai's mind snapped. She remembered exactly who she was talking to. Then, after a beat, she called Princess Plati, and the princess answered just in time as Ranpai rushed toward her, panicking the whole way. She drops to her knees before the princess and spits out bitter words saying she's poor and miserable because they dragged her to this hellish land and forced her to marry a demon. The princess has no clue what hellish land they're even talking about. She insists that man is her husband, so the mermaid girl pushes her again. Ranpai finally snaps and swears he'll never forgive Kadan and that he'll send him to the next world. The rest of the mermaids trailed Ranpai and started grilling the princess so a man can run land the demon's own right. And Belena snapped back. Nope, that's not demon territory. It's going to be tough for all of them to put words to what this place really is, so the princess backs her claim, and Rufa leans in to ask what it is, only for the princess to declare that it's a totally independent territory. She blurts out that this is the village of Saint Kodan, and the girls stare at her like she's crazy because the word village somehow feels insulting to them. They don't buy it, not for a second, and they're on edge, terrified that humans and demons might spark a war right here. Who says this war can be shut down fast, especially when some ramp gets spooked by her sudden arrival? Ranpai remembers her. She steps forward and introduces herself. The dragon, Grinzel Vale. Then the ramp jolts with recognition. She swears she just saw the Immortal King, right as the Immortal King himself materializes out of nowhere beside her. The mermaid girls froze when the Immortal King suddenly appeared, and they couldn't wrap their heads around it because if he's really here, then maybe, just maybe, it means they're being dragged toward the next world. Beline admits that, at first, she was shocked too, then she straight up says the truth. These two aren't just here. They're guarding this place. The Immortal King and the Dragon Veils. Ranpai can't believe what he's hearing, but deep down, he gets it. This land isn't some lesser place at all. The princess tells the mermaid girls, come live here and don't be scared, and Vale pushes it even further. Not only live, you should work here too. Vale sneers that today, these pathetic fishtails will team up with the mermaid to feed her, and the princess snaps back that it's not just for her sake. Rafa reckons they drag them in as cooks, but Ranpai sobs and rolls away in tears, glaring back at the princess like, you really knocked me down so low, and the princess demands she repeats it. Then the princess tells them, before dinner, I'll bring you to where you'll work. She turns to Henbane and orders her to tell her husband. Henbane nods and promises she'll make sure the message gets through. Rafa can't believe it now. They're actually going to cook. Rufo's already hunting for answers. And Ranpai is pushing for a real escape plan because he's determined to get the princess out of here. After a while, they finally reach the spot. Then the princess swings the doors open and tells the girls, this is your workplace. The mermaid girls gasp at what they're seeing. They caught a super weird smell, but somehow it didn't make them gag, more like it teased the senses. The princess explains it's exactly where she cooks up the spices and ingredients for their food. The mermaid girl spotted a mysterious liquid, and the princess snapped that it was dark soy sauce. She scooped it into a cup, then leaned in and told the other mermaid girls to taste it. The girls are totally stunned by where this soy sauce comes from, and the princess admits it's kind of like that medicine people used to sprinkle into food to boost the flavor. The girls take turns dipping their fingers into the soy sauce, slowly raise them to their lips, taste it, then instantly pass it around like they're trying to blow everyone's mind. The girls are absolutely buzzing over the soy sauce. This stuff hits with a perfectly chosen blend and even brings extra flavors to the party, and the princess confirms every word. Ranpai blurts out that the princess made an incredible medicine, and the princess, completely stunned, snaps back. I didn't invent it. The princess spills it. Her husband told her that some of these ingredients are packed with tiny living organisms and microbes that fuel what this product does. Rufa perked up at once. Hooked by the princess's words, she claims she can't make sense of what I'm saying, but somehow you can already feel it. This is something truly incredible. The princess insists they were only running the same kind of research, and Rufa shoots back, confirming every word. Rufa grips a bowl of soy sauce, staring at it like it's a whole secret world of tiny creatures she'd only dared to imagine then. The princess fully backs her up with a sure, solid confirmation. Rufa bursts into happy tears because every single one of her research guesses hit the nail on the head, and she couldn't stop smiling, knowing this sauce really is made through microorganism fermentation. Overwhelmed with joy, Rufa lunges to chug the soy sauce in one gulp, only for the princess to snatch the cup away and warn her, if you swallow it all at once, you'll be sent straight to the next world. She launches into the tale of the very first time she tried to taste soy sauce, right up until her husband snaps it out of her hands and stops her. Rafa bristles at the thought that someone else will grab her research first, but her smile wins through because she's still excited to dig deeper into those microorganisms. And the princess is counting on Rufa. The other girls all freeze. Something feels off about this holy man, and they can't shake the fear that he's hiding more than he shows. The princess then drops the bomb. Her husband is a hero, and the mermaid girls, they're stunned, speechless. Ronpais tells him straight up. Rafa doesn't even glance at anything. He only has eyes for his research. Then she breaks it down. Summoned heroes are the ones dragged from another world to battle demons and rescue people. Rafa shoots Ronpai a stunned look, shocked that even people in their world can run their own little affairs, only for Ronpai to smirk and say the baseness of mankind is hardly news anymore. The princess swears she heard the human king ripped her husband into their world, then kicked him out because he wasn't fit for battle. And that's how her husband started surviving, by leaning on everything he knew and could do from his old world. Right in the middle of their conversation, a voice cuts in. It's the Dragon Veil. She's brutally starving, and now she's roaring that you and Mister are all furious with these girls. After a bit of waiting, the pizza finally hit the table. 4 different pizzas on 4 trays, and the mermaid girls stared, stunned by these dishes from another world. The Holy Lord declared, "All right, now I'm going to slice this pizza into pieces." He sliced the pizza into pieces, then handed out plates of cheesy slices to everyone, starting with the Dragon Veil, who lit up with pure, unstoppable happiness. Ronpai tells everyone that Princess's husband, Lord Sankidan, is insanely resourceful, and right then, the whole company lord and all the princess's closest friends packs into the dining room where the table groans under a feast, and they all clink smiles and say, "Bon appétit." The mermaid girls snatched up the pizza slices and went piece by piece, tasting like they were discovering a whole new world. Then bam, shock hit, because they'd never tasted food like this in their lives. Bonpix can't stop staring. This food is so insanely delicious. There's no way it's real, and it's from another world too. Then Rufa goes even further. The sheer overload of flavor hits so hard, her soul feels like it's lifting straight to heaven. The Lord Saint beams because the girls actually love the food, while Ron Pai just stares in silence. Then the Lord Saint hands the teacher and his brother-in-law their absolute favorite dishes, and they can't stop admiring all that food piling up. Suddenly, the princess snaps back to remembering her older brother, and she tells him, "I'll be making a ton of pickled radishes soon, so don't be shy. Come buy some." Her brother-in-law lights up, calls it great news, and promises he'll swing by again next week. Rafa's jaw drops. Prince Erwana is set to show up next week, and she can't wrap her head around it, because this man is barely seen even by the merfolk, so how is he supposed to arrive in just a week? Rufa can't help but smile at what's unfolding, then swings her gaze to Rafa and snaps that she didn't say a word. Norio leans in and asks his wife if they've got more, and the girl grins, saying, "Yeah, we do." The princess beams because her husband's dish is once again so flawless it's practically unbelievable, and the saint leans in to tease her about the tomatoes since she absolutely loves them, before they burst into laughter and share the moment together. Ronpai shot the princess a look, stuck on why she was so dazzled by this guy, yet one thing was clear: she looked absolutely thrilled. Night finally drops, and the mermaid girls slip into their room, then flop into a cozy, cloud-soft bed. Rafa grins and goes, "The food was crazy tasty." Rufus claims it's all because of those tiny little creatures, and Ranpai fires back that the man named Kidan turned out to be a real workhorse. The girls start chatting about yesterday, the moment Batumi sets them up with a silky bed, soft as a dream under their fingers, because that futon is made from rare threads, the kind of expensive fabric people would kill to touch, and this whole house feels so warm and cozy, it's unreal. The girls kept spiraling over what might be out there, convinced this couldn't be a hellscape, more like Earth's own paradise, and then, beyond the building's walls, a deep, moonless night stretched out like a dark promise. After a while, Rafa finally wraps up her work, then Rufa bursts in and yanks the moment away, asking Rafa to help as soon as she's done, and thrusting a weird arched tool into her hand. She tells her to soak the dried radish in wheat miso, and Rafa immediately pushes back, asking her again. Then he lets out a small laugh and says that wheat miso is loaded with mold organisms. And the whole thing makes Rafa feel utterly disgusted. So yeah, this is how pickled radishes get made. Rafa's convinced the prince will bite into something prepared by her hands, and Rufa's totally into that idea until she laughs and tells her she's never actually said anything like that. Rafa grills Rufa about Ronpai's disappearance, and Rufa snaps back that she went hunting with the orcs because she loves getting her body moving, and after a while, Ronpai comes walking down a path with 2 orcs at her side. Ronpai caught movement in her peripheral vision then. Like a cue, a wild boar lunged out at the command. Ronpai snapped into action and swung to strike. The boar barreled nearer and nearer, and with one sharp, lightning-fast blow, she split it clean into 2 parts. The orcs throw a wild celebration, and joy lights up their faces. Rampai scoffs that, for her, the royal knight, it's nothing at all. Then night finally drops, and in his room, the Lord Saint weighs up these three mermaids, while the princess insists they've been genuinely saving her life. She says they didn't just help her husband, they worked in sync with the juices and even the goblins. And that teamwork let them tear through the radish field at lightning speed. The husband grins and says, "We finally got seedlings that just need planting. Then once they sprout, we'll be able to grow rice from my world." The Holy Lord says, cooking rice hits him with a deep meaning. But when the princess turns to her husband, he won't give her a straight answer, so she sinks into her thoughts, then breaks into joy. She snaps that they've got to cook the rice as fast as humanly possible, and her husband immediately backs her up. After a while, the rice planting field finally got ready, rice sprouts lined up, and those special boxes sat waiting. But the mermaid girls just stared at it all, completely lost on what they were supposed to do. They heard they'd be planting sprouts today, so Rafa leaned in and asked, "Wait, is it rice? Because it has to go straight into the water," and the princess nodded and confirmed it without hesitation. Rafa begs for mercy because she'll ruin the clothes Batemi made for her, and Batemi calmly reassures her these outfits were made for fieldwork. Rufa says that after exiling the saint, this rice became one of the key things used to ferment sake, and she's absolutely sure it'll taste incredible. Like Prince Erohana is going to love every sip. Rafa says this is exactly why they're here, and she's practically buzzing for that rice because Rufa's smiling ear to ear, ready to team up with the product of defeat. Ronpai whips around to the princess and snaps that she won't let anyone soil the princess, then offers to take every job herself, because for Ronpai's sake, she'd charge through water and fire. Vale has to do it anyway, even though she hates every second, so the princess swings toward her husband and pleads, "Show us how to plant rice the right way." He tells them to grab 3 or 4 seedlings and clamp each one between their thumb and forefinger. Then he orders them to plant the seedlings in the water. Right, like this. Everyone else nods and jumps in without hesitation, and the princess declares a rice planting tournament for every villager. One by one, they step right into the water. Rufa's stomach flips as cold chills slap her skin and goosebumps pop up, while Ronpai can't believe it, because Rafa is handling her job with razor-sharp care. The maid girls swooped in with fresh seedlings and boosted the whole team, and the villagers started planting them little by little right in the water, while the mermaid girls and the dragon veil joined the rice planting too. And Ranpai couldn't stop grinning, totally fired up about something. The mermaid girls snap that this mission is way tougher than they ever imagined, and the pressure shows Rufus can't stand the strain in his legs, while Rampai's lower back starts aching like it's about to give out. The servant girls are furious too. This work is brutal compared to toiling in the fields. One of them snaps, drops face first into the water, and then, out of sheer resolve, she decides she wants to make a couple more dresses. A saint rushes up to Batemi, swoops in to help, and immediately asks how she's doing. Then Vale watches the whole thing and spits that they're just weaklings after all, and the princess turns to her and asks if she's tired. Vale challenges back, saying she's a dragon and even in human form her strength doesn't fade. Then she clocks that the princess isn't worn out either, and the princess fires off that unlike everyone else. She's got powerful legs because she's been doing this kind of work for ages. They all push the princess to throw a speed competition, and she grins, swearing she'll never lose to a girl who only sleeps and eats. Both girls lock in, determined to take the win. Then the rice planting competition kicks off, and one of them explodes forward at once, slamming seed into the ground as fast as she can. Lord St. Kedin has no clue what's happening, while the mermaid girls stare in shock at what they're seeing. These two handled one strip in a jiffy, and the rice placement is absolutely flawless. They're stunned by the sheer talent, calling it the highest skill of all, while the princess is already first at the landing and the dragon isn't far behind. The princess suddenly hits a seedling shortage, snaps that she needs more, and Ronpai instantly snatches the seedlings and bolts to deliver them to her in time. Out of nowhere, Vela shoves Ronpai Bam and she stumbles, right as the other mermaid girls stare in shock at what's happening, while Ronpai is still way off from the princess. The princess can't believe it. Her field looks battered and bruised, and Rampai brushes it off, insisting she's totally fine, but then Vale shocks her all over again, even in human form. He's got dragon-level strength. Rampai admits she totally underestimated the field work, and then she turns to Princess Platy, practically marveling, "Your human legs are unreal." Rampai insists hard work is the real backbone of training, but the princess cuts in. She's not doing this to train at all. Then Vale pops up with a grin and declares, "Nope, this is all for one thing, stuffing ourselves with delicious food." Vale and the princess are daydreaming about the taste of rice. Rampai gets it right away. It's all about food. So the princess rallies everyone with a promise of action, pushing them to fully cultivate the whole field today. So yeah, everyone threw themselves into the work, and they wrapped it all up in one crazy day. And with the princess's magical products, the seedlings shot up to full growth in just 1 month. After what felt like forever, the rice finally steamed up and turned ready. And the whole company of the Lord Saint's closest friends stared in total shock at that hot, perfect bowl, because the saint swears rice can be eaten anytime, day or night. Vale can't wait another second to taste that rice. She pleads with her master to let her try it right now. Then the princess steps in and snaps that the arrest should be tasted first by the husband. The maids swear the princess threw everything she had into making the rice shoot up faster. And then the saint presses the girls again, only for them to nod and confirm every word. They say the princess didn't just tend the rice, so it grew fast. She sat right behind the rice fields, rolling up her sleeves, and begged everyone to help with the work needed for a huge harvest. Lena lets out a small laugh, and the princess snaps that Lena better stop mid-story. Kidan's cheeks flush with embarrassment as he's hit by surprise at what his wife just did, and then the princess finally urges him to taste the rice himself. Kidan nods along with his wife, then he tips rice into a full cup, cradling it in his hands as he nibbles just a little at a time, tasting carefully while the girls behind him lean in, watching with bated breath. The Lord Saint pinches a tiny piece of rice, lifts it to his mouth, and slowly savors every bite while the princess leans in, desperate for her husband's verdict. He breaks into a grin and declares it incredibly delicious, then even tears up a little from pure pleasure. The princess stares at her husband, totally stunned, and then Vale slips in, asking the saint, "What is this? Because it smells so heavenly, tears spring to her eyes," and she begs him, "Let me try it right now." Saint tells Vale to hold up while he whips up a side dish, and then she'll get to dive into the full, mouth-watering spectrum of flavor. Ranpi says the princess fought tooth and nail just to catch this man smiling, and she's thrilled she didn't give up Rafa. Meanwhile, understands her friend to the bone. Rafa fires back, saying, "I never said anything like that." The princess leans in and asks her husband why this rice means so much to him, maybe because it's the national food of his world. He nods and agrees with her, but then he hits her with one catch. He also wants to thank everyone who helped him, so he whips around, looks at his wife, and earnestly tells her, "Thank you for helping me." Norio whirls to Hephaestus and asks how she's holding up, because it's her work that keeps him living here and enjoying every bite of life. He throws out a quick apology for the delay, then hands her the onigiri with pure gratitude, urging her to drop the shyness and take a bite to savor the fruits of everything they've built together. The princess whips around to her husband and warns him that this food can be seriously dangerous at first. She can't figure out why anyone would crave it, since it tastes dull, but then the rice hits, and once it's mixed with the other dishes, it turns unbelievably delicious. The girls back up their princess, saying they're done too. No way. They're going back to a place where they won't get that kind of food anymore, and Fail practically begs her master for more. The saint swears the girls must have loved the rice, and Rafa blows it off, saying rice is a truly terrifying thing, while Vanity, now that they've got rice, is already itching to cook up more dishes. Plotty and Vale are reeling from what they just heard, totally stunned because they didn't realize they're about to get even more dishes, and they had no idea rice could be leveled up with the right mix. Suddenly, Vale shoots up and declares she's heading back to her dungeon to crank up the difficulty. Saint nearly freezes from the shock, but Princess cheers it on, saying it's a great idea. Keaton just can't wrap his head around why rice even matters, and the princess says it straight. If they raise the dungeon passage, new monsters will crawl out that weren't there before. Vale nods along, fully buying the princess's claim because this doesn't just level up the taste of rice, it boosts other dishes too, and Kitten can't believe something like that can even be pulled off inside a dungeon. Rafa tells everyone that in this world, only top-ranked special beasts like dragons can shift a dungeon itself, and the dungeon has its own strict rules with mana overflowing non-stop. The whole space warps and twists. The princess declares that only one of the two world disasters can shift the dungeon's fate, and Vale backs her instantly, while Kitten just can't help but stay on guard. Rafa can't believe miracles like this can even happen. She's just stunned by how unreal this place feels. Rufa remembers Rafa was studying the flow of mana and what it does to people. Then Rampai grabs her confidence and tells her, "Don't you dare quit." The princess tells Ron to stop stalling and prep the meal ingredients, then Rampai smirks and dares her to prove her strength in Lady Vale's upgraded dungeon, but the dragon sneers that a weakling like her has no shot at it. Everyone's on edge and dying to know what happens next because on this occasion she's about to build multiple levels and test how well Ron can handle it. And it feels like the princess already knows this stunt is going to stir up serious trouble. A few days later, the Dragon Veil finally unseals her upgraded dungeon and she orders the whole team to strike as one. Right away, Saint snaps, because Vale's voice booms from the top of that mountain and it's getting on his nerves. The princess claims she's just here to study new creatures, but her gut screams that the final bosses are already lurking, and the moment the team gathers, they set out to explore the Veiled Engine. Ronpai's sure the Saint tagged along because the King of People yanked him from another world and then tossed him aside the moment he proved powerless. She's not sure the Saint can survive a dungeon this brutal, packed with levels after levels, but either way, she'll guard that princess with every ounce of strength she's got. Right then, the team spots movement up ahead. Boom, a whole herd of wild boars charges at them, and Ronpai blurts out that she wants them handed over to her. Suddenly, the girl freezes in shock, then the Immortal King steps right in front of her, flicks his hand, and a beat later, the entire herd is wiped out. The Immortal King admits the adventure hooked him, so he throws himself in with them. Right then, Vale speaks up. She tells him, loud and clear, not to mess with her dungeon on his own terms, so she slams down a firm ban. Then snap, the dragon's claws seize the immortal king by the collar. Vale declares the immortal king is out for cheating, then the team turns around and thanks him, because thanks to him they got saved, and without that help they would have been crushed fighting all those monsters. Ron Pease admits that being besties with two world disasters wrecks her royal knight pride. Then the whole team finally lets out a huge, relieved breath. She snaps back, denying everything she had just said, and declares she exists only to protect the princess, while the husband and wife toy with the idea of changing the dungeon. But all they've run into so far are the same familiar monsters. Vale tells them to stop panicking, says they're in the old zone now, and warns that if those old monsters vanish, it's going to cause a huge problem because the new zone is already waiting for them just ahead. After a while, they finally stumbled into a clearing, and the princess leaned in and warned her dear husband to stay sharp because something's lurking close by. Ranpai then claimed he could feel it in his bones. Strong monsters were near. Right behind Ranpai, something lunges out of the tall grass, no warning at all, and before they can even process what's happening, it's already attacking, spinning those deadly pucks. Ketten spots those pucks and swears they look like UFOs, and sure enough, the flying ones come streaking straight for them, spinning so fast they're razor sharp, slicing the tops clean off the trees, but the team just barely dodges in time. Keaton blurts that it's a UFO, then spells it out as an unidentified flying object, and Ranpai snaps back that she can handle it all on her own. The princess warns them not to underestimate her. She's got the power of a crowned witch, and Ranpai promises he'll do everything in his power to help her. Keaton felt his nerves shaking, but he still charged forward to help them, grabbing the sword and snapping into a fighting stance. Ranpai clocked it instantly and told him he should hold the blade on the other side. Ranpai yanks the bag into her hands and snaps that first. They've got to shut down the breakthrough. Then she bites the clasp open, whips the bag up, and flings it into the air. As the bag slowly starts to glow around any flying object, it suddenly detonates with an explosion of jaw-dropping power. The princess recalls how the Ranpai rely on potions that can blow up on contact, and once the saint hears the truth, he finally understands why she's branded the Witch of Hellfire. She's proud she managed to beat them until her voice vanishes. She realizes clear as day those flying things took 0 damage, and Vale starts bragging about just how strong they really are. Vale swears these are turtle-shaped monsters, and their shells are the toughest in all of monsterkind. Then Ranpai steps in and says, "You don't even need to fight them hard. Just flip them over and they'll be knocked out cold." Suddenly, something bursts out of the turtle's head and wraps the girl's hand tight. Then those ropes start creeping across her body, swallowing her whole piece by piece. The princess has no clue who these tentacled turtles are. Then Gobukichi rushes in to free the girl, but he can't pull it off. Next thing you know, the orc winds up for a brutal swing, aiming to smash the turtle's body straight on. He swings his axe at the turtle's shell, but it's so rock hard that the blade snaps clean in half, and Ranpai can't believe what he just saw. The turtles, one after another, burst out with dozens of tentacles from their heads, and they slither toward the team, inch by inch. Then the princess turns to her husband and demands he handle it, and he nods like he's been waiting to act. The turtle's tentacles slowly cinched the girl's neck, and the saint snapped into action. He swung hard and smashed those tentacles to pieces. They shot off in every direction, and for a split second, the saint couldn't believe what he'd just done. Just then, the Holy Lord asks about Ranpai's health, and she insists she's fine. Then smoke bursts from the turtle's head. The princess snatches one turtle in her hand and instantly realizes the sharp tentacles are their weak spot. They're totally baffled. How did the team beat these turtles so easily? But then the truth hits. The monsters she made are barely the weakest of the weak, and the team is about to crash into something way stronger. Next, Anna leans in and demands they push straight on to the next level. The orc declares that these skulls can forge armor and shields for goblins and orcs. Saint backs him up on the spot, and Vale snaps that the team can't keep her waiting. The princess shows up and declares, "We just came to study brand new monsters." Then Ranpai smirks and warns them that stronger and stronger monsters are waiting just ahead until the princess reassures everyone, "Don't worry, everything's fine." She swears her husband is tougher than every calamity the world can throw, claiming he's the strongest alive. Ranpai is left completely baffled. She scoffs at the princess's words, refusing to believe her husband is the strongest man in the world, so she grits her teeth, won't fall apart, and hunts for a fresh goal that fits her perfectly. Then the whole team votes to take a short, well-earned break. In the forest, the team pulled off a daring break at one spot. Then Ranpai's eyes went wide as she blurted that she never thought the Holy Lord could outmatch the Immortal King and even the dragon in raw power. There's still one piece she can't wrap her head around, so the human kingdom throws the Holy Lord into exile even though he's insanely powerful. The Holy Lord admits he's got 0 fighting skills, then drops the real twist at some point. A god gifted him power so wild that anything he touches can fully bloom with its true potential. Plus, this lord carries a sacred ball. Ranpai's jaw drops at the saint's words, but Keaton shuts it down fast, saying that means he's not that special anyway. And Ranpai fires back that the saint's power would be incredibly useful. Princess Platy just married a breathtaking man, and no matter who dares to attack her, demons or regular people, the whole mermaid kingdom will have her back and stay safe. Sunlight blazed overhead, flaring into their eyes, and the princess said the scenery hadn't shifted much. Then she snapped that somehow it had gotten even hotter. Right in the middle of the princess's thoughts, the dragon's voice crashes in. Vale snaps that the next scene is called Scorching Hell, and the monsters perfectly suited for it are about to come for them. Right in front of the team, a pack of wolves burst into view, minds blazing like fire. The whole crew tense instantly, snapping into ready fighting stances. Vale warns that among the four-legged monsters here, the hyena lichens are the deadliest fast, powerful, and ferocious as they come, and the hotter they get, the more they grow. Vale insists they're the ones who will win through sheer endurance because they can't run from this. Then she whips around to Lord Saint and demands, "How are you supposed to fight back against those wolves?" Right then, bam, the wolves lunge and attack Lord Saint. The princess and Ron Pyre got pulled into the mystery too, then boom! Their faces snapped into total shock, and the wolves toppled and rolled on the ground like they'd been trained. They're totally clueless about what's happening. Then boom! The immortal king's voice cuts through the air and warns that the hyena lichens have detected the Holy Lord's power. Those wolves stare at the Holy Lord with total adoration, and they don't even lift a finger to attack. Lord Saint starts stroking these regiments like they're his own pets, a little peeved on the side, but joy bubbles right alongside it. After what felt like forever, the squad finally tears through that scorching hell while the wolves keep pace behind them, calm as ever, not even once trying to stop them. The immortal king's voice booms that wolf-like monsters band together, forge a ruthless pack hierarchy, and then because of that, they kneel and recognize the Lord Saint as their leader. The wolves stare right at Lord Saint sweetly, and Lord Saint looks back confused, then smiling like he can't believe it. "I never thought you'd like me this much," Saint says, stunned, "and I didn't even use my own gift." Ron Pai locks in on what's happening and realizes they're standing inside a high-level dungeon. Princess immediately worries this could blow up in their faces, and Vale pushes her to praise him, warning that even worse monsters are stalking them just ahead. With the wolves at their heels, the team pushes deeper into the Vale dungeon until they reach a stretch of ground swallowed by snow. The princess stares around, totally baffled, because she can't figure out why it's this freezing here. Vale snaps that this is the final stop of her dungeon, freezing hell. Then the princess blurts she wants to go home, and right then, the Lord Saint whirls around. The whole party follows his turn, and there right behind them stands a monster. A monster-sized bear reared up on all fours and stared down the whole team, radiating pure fury, and that terrifying presence sent the Holy Lord into instant dread. The girls gasp that it's the exact same massive power they felt the moment they first stepped in here, and right in front of them, this monster towers a whole head taller than the ones they faced earlier. The princess demands her husband leave this place, and the crumpled one fires back that this monster is too powerful, he wants to steer clear of pointless destruction. The Lord knows there is no escaping him, so he whips his head to his teacher and the immortal king's voice cuts in. This bear gets the Holy Lord's full power too. This isn't a thinker, it's a warrior who only knows one thing. Fight. The immortal king's voice rings out, declaring that the bear's destiny is to clash with the strongest, and right on cue, the bear roars and charges into his attack. The bear charges like a berserker on the Lord Saint then. Out of nowhere, from behind the Lord's back, wolves spring up and smash into it, swarming from every side, certain they're proving their devotion the only way they know. The Saint snaps that he can't help them like that, then tells Rampai to handle it. She bolts out, rapier in hand, and doesn't let the bear anywhere near the team to strike. She whips in with razor-fast strikes and slices the bear's legs, snarling in pure agony as it crumples. Unable to stand, straight to the ground. Ranpai snaps that his paw tendon is wrecked, so he can't move at all. Then the Saint thanks Mrs. Ranpai and the whole team starts pushing to go home, but right in the middle of it, Vale's voice cuts in and interrupts them. She orders them to freeze in place and swears nothing like this will be the way it ends while the bear stays sprawled, unconscious, and Holy screams at the girls and the rest of the team to stop. He whips around to his wife and demands, "Did you bring the ointment I asked for?" Plati and Ranpai freeze because the Saint is about to smear it on that bear. Ranpai warns them, "Leave the bear alone and he'll vanish without a fight." But if his enemies push their luck and test his mercy, oh, that's when rage explodes in him. The immortal king's voice demands they turn the bear into mana, but the Veil snaps in and begs him to stop acting on a whim. Then the Saint spins around and asks the teacher what to do next. Caden fights off his own doubts because he's convinced this bear didn't stumble in to attack them. It has to be here for a reason, and he's determined to save it. The princess had no choice. She had to hand that ointment straight to the Holy Lord. And Kidan immediately begged Rampai for forgiveness because she'd been fighting tooth and nail to protect them all. Rampai snaps that Lord Saint is way too soft. She can't wrap her head around how that man could ever protect the country or the princess, so Lord Saint steels himself and gears up for what comes next. Keaton tells Mr. Bear to look after himself a bit more because then he'll stick around longer. Simple as that. yet the bear doesn't so much as flinch at the words of the Holy Lord. All those moves lit the dragon veil up with fury. She can't wrap her head around why the team keeps breaking her rules like they're daring her. Then she snaps and says she's got nothing left except the one final move. Right after that, Valsama storms onto the battlefield and declares that their opponents are none other than her. Rampai's eyes go wide at the idea the final boss is a dragon, and Vale can't stop grinning at how the team reacts. She told the whole team to stay calm. This clown only has 1/100th of her power, but even that tiny fraction is still enough to flatten a couple of cities. She tells the team to attack, then out of nowhere, Lord Saint Notice catches movement. A bear barrels in and smacks the dragon right on the head. The girls freeze in shock as the dragon's body starts to fade from the hit 1 second at a time until it's completely evaporated. Kanayan can't believe it. The bear just smashed the Veil clone. Kidan and the bear locked eyes, and Sviato had no clue why it did that. Then the bear snapped around on a dime, slid away step by step, and vanished over the horizon until it was gone for good. The Orking Doblins snarl that, as a monster, I couldn't possibly grasp what this bear feels because he's proud through and through, and now this clash, it's his way of paying their master's kindness back. Claw for claw. Okubo says the bear has been carving its own path to grow into a monster, strong enough that their master will finally take notice, and the saint fires back that if that's true, he'll cross paths with the bear again. Everything she's done so far is one thing, fighting with everything she's got to protect whoever she chooses. Her choices didn't make the world any better still. She proved something huge when you're the type who'll lend a hand to a friend or even an enemy. That's the real power. Later, in the village of the Holy Lord Kidan, the Dragon Veils grinned with a satisfied scowl while Rufa ranted that her brand new dungeon impressed absolutely no one. When the Holy Lord addresses the dragon, it immediately serves her fresh food and proudly reveals it's from their brand new menu, Katsudan. The saint says that as they finally came down from the mountain, they tracked down a bird monster and its eggs, then he rushed to cook the dish he'd been craving for ages. All because of the rebuilt dungeon of Vale. Saint says he can finally level up his cooking, and the moment he thinks of it, Vale's joy just floods in her face, lights up, her eyes sparkle with pure happiness, and she can't help but blush a little. Sviatoa waves everyone over to the table since the food's already served, and after a bit, someone blurts out a wildly strange exclamation. Then the whole company can't help but stare, stunned by this totally new, one-of-a-kind taste. The saint says that by doing it this way, while they were deep in that dungeon, they finally grabbed the eggs he'd been waiting for. Then once they stepped outside, the saint couldn't stop smiling. Their settlements were getting livelier by the day. The saintly lore is locked onto what comes next because he has no clue what's going to happen to their settlement down the road, and while he's left in the dark, out in the forest, things start happening. Two hooded strangers huddle together, whispering like they're hiding a secret, completely clueless about what's happening and shocked beyond belief that a whole village even exists out here. All of them were perched on tree branches, and one girl insisted she had to see everything with her own eyes, especially the head of this gang of thieves, Aileron. Pochi was the first wolf, Pez the second, Khan the third, and Taro the fourth. Then a holy lord hurled some kind of bandage and ordered the pack to go fetch it. The holy lord declares these wolf monsters are the ones he ran into inside the Veil dungeon and that they chose to stay with him. He scoops up one and pets it, and its sheer beauty hits him like a wave. Lord Saint claims Pochi and the others are wiping out pests and shooing stray monsters from the dungeon. But there's one tiny problem: those wolves are fighting again over a mouse they caught. Sviatoa panics. He's sure the pack won't get enough food. Then a wild idea hits, and after a while, he's busy cooking up meat when Vale finally walks over and demands, "What are you doing?" The saint swears he wants to cook dog food right for his wolves, but Vale can't stand it, because those wolves are eating their own share too. Vale snaps that there's nothing funny about this, then exhales a blast of flame from her mouth, saying she'll take care of those wolves herself. Saint shuts it down, saying they don't need her to handle it, because those wolves already belong to their family. Vale still can't shake that dissatisfaction, so Saint yanks his sword free, and now it's time to grind those ingredients. The saint stares in awe at his insane ball, bragging that it can slice food down to the microscopic level, while Vale seethes because the saint is getting screwed over with her unholy greatsword. She just can't stand to forgive Lord Saint, so her fury is about to snap into action, and she's gonna chow down that dog thing. And yeah, the dog food was already prepped in a little barrel. Lord Saint says he kept his dog in top shape, cutting away extra fat and fine-tuning the diet, because getting the nutrition balance right meant he also threw in plenty of veggies. Lord Saint had one last question: would the dogs even go for the food? Turned out his worries were nothing, because those pups devoured it. Just when he finally relaxed, a voice cut through the air. Vale was the one who turned into a dragon and demanded a bite of that food too. Svartis Veitu had no choice but to go along, so she ordered Vale to snap back into her real form and stretch out her hands. He scoops out some dog food for her, and Vale stares down at her own palms packed with treats, grinning so hard it's unreal. Then she lunges on the food instantly. She picked the dog food like a detective, claiming it might be nutritious, but saying it tastes more like straight up animal food. Then her face suddenly flips with shock, and she lets a small smile creep in, turns to one of the dogs, and even the dog flinches at her stare. Then she calmly says, "Go on, eat as much as you want." And from that moment on, Vale never touches dog food again because it tastes like nothing. Some people are buzzing about this settlement, but they can't wrap their heads around what grows on these bushes. Fruits, berries, and even vegetables. And they're shocked to hear it isn't something you'd even see in the estates of rich people or demons. They spot someone out there tending the fields, and one of the gang snatches a fruit, takes a bite, and then demands his boss try it because the second he does, numbness hits his cheeks like lightning. These fruits taste out of this world, so the boss is about to try them too. Right then, it hits her. She can't even figure out what secret aroma is hiding behind that amazing fruit. It's so good, it nearly throws her off. One of the boss's servants blurted out that the territory was being watched, and she had proof more strange houses with weird, elegant designs and secretive gardens popped up, turning the place from a village into straight-up farmland. And the final nail in the coffin was the mysterious harvest. The group suspects only aristocrats would live out here, and if that's true, it's no shock these fields are tucked in the middle of nowhere. The guy from the group is totally lost on what to do, and the boss cuts in, saying it's gotta be because treasure's hidden somewhere out here in this territory. If they blow this golden chance, they'll torch their own reputation as thieves, and the boss, who calls himself Thunder Freezers, will have them hit this mansion hard, strip it clean, and steal every single valuable. Then boom, the boss spots it, one of the Lord Saint's dogs staring at them from the bushes, while inside the building, the servant girl is rapidly drawing magic circles up in the sky. She wasn't just looking around, she was checking the waypoints, and trust me, they scream something is off, because Belena says her job is to keep the waypoint safe and functional for His Majesty, the Demon King, and the Demon Queen, and yes, the danger is written all over them. She says the job is totally worthless. She only managed to sing one song, and that's why she pitches in anyway, helping everyone and everything, even though she used to work under the Demon King before she moved here. Now, 3 mermaids take over the work in those areas where the workforce is running short. And because of that, her workload shrinks hard lately. The servants have been drowning in too much free time. She clenches her fist and snaps, "This is really, really bad." Then her mind races, "If this keeps going, I'll lose everything and I'll end up with no job." She snaps into action. She marches up to Lord Saint and begs for a job. Then she tears through the mansion, hunting him down, and when she finally catches sight of him, she sees he's busy at the pottery wheel. The servant blurts out mid-task, totally lost, asking what the Holy Lord is even doing. Then the Holy Lord snaps that he's crafting a pot, pounding clay into a bowl. He says that once he saw their dishes were made of mana metal, he decided it was time to trade up for real pottery, and the servants finally figured it out. Turns out they'd been eating off precious metal plates the whole time. The saint snaps that hand molding takes forever, so the pot must be rebuilt. Then he spins it around and the servant's eyes suddenly widen as it finally clicks. Balena can't wait to help the Light Lord, and she's clearly grateful for the Holy Lord's passion, but she warns that this work is brutally labor-intensive. Still, the servant insists the Holy Lord can make use of her anyway. Balena laughs and says, "Yeah, I've got psychokinesis too." Then she explains that once she pours her magic into a pebble, it instantly starts moving. At least, that's the only magic she's got on just one tiny pebble. She slaps it onto a spinning machine, locks it down with clay, and whispers a prayer like she's calling something powerful into the world. Arms wide, the forward rotating machine snaps into motion, then spins faster and faster until the Holy Lord watches the work of the henbane with satisfaction, and the clay that was riding that machine rockets straight into the Holy Lord's face. Lore of the Color tells henbane to ease up, and henbane immediately apologizes. Then Lord Saint says she's working hard, and henbane snaps back that she's not. She swears she busts her butt, but somehow she still can't match his girlfriend or the others. Then she admits she's always begging for help because she's terrified she'll end up without a job. Lord Flower tells her not to worry, then cheers her for helping with the pot right, as henbane snaps back that it's already turned into a pancake and she can't do a thing about it. Lord Saint steps in and asks henbane to team up and fix everything together. She beams at his words, and just a little later they smash a dent into a cup. Balena's ready to destroy it, but Lord Saint grabs her and stops her. Ina shrugs and says, "The first pancake always comes out lumpy," then tells Balena to stop stressing. He's convinced there's still something they can do, and henbane snaps back that he shouldn't back her so fiercely. Then a friend yells to distract them, and the wolves start barking like mad, so they bolt straight toward the cries. Lars storms over and grabs Okubo, demanding answers because those thieves got snared and tied up, and Okubo reveals it was a crew of elven bandits they caught right on their farm. Elves have always been like demons across history, different roots, same terrifying vibe, and they evolved on their own, but Lord Saint swore they were allies to his servants. Only for her to snap back, elves never mix with humans or demons. The servants finally heard the rumors Elysian bandits were tearing through the land, swiping whoever they pleased, and that chaos was branding them as nothing but trouble to both people and demons. They've probably got a shelter no one can break into, that's why catching them is so damn hard. Then the saint steps in and says, "Yeah, they most likely live up in the mountains." cut off from the rest of the world. He whips around to a gang of thieves and tells them they must have been shocked when they stumbled onto their farm. Then the boss pivots to the Lord Saint and demands their identities, only for the Saint to introduce himself as Saint Kitten, saying this is exactly where Saint Kitten first made his home. Some of you are huddling and whispering that this Kidan is human, staring at the fact he's traveling with a demon, like it makes no sense, and completely missing the truth that the whole village is crawling with monsters. Alright, Lord, please understand those thieves are still totally baffled. He whips around to the orc and demands, "What did they do?" The orc snaps back that they raided their farm and stole tomatoes. A different girl's voice cuts through the orc story, and the princess and the dragon storm in. Furious that they ate their tomatoes, Vale instantly morphs into a dragon and roars that they deserve to be destroyed. Sveta finally gets it. This Vale can't be stopped anymore. The princess snaps back, saying it's their mess if they don't let those responsible walk away unpunished. There's no chance this won't come crashing down again. Vale storms up to the thieves and declares they'll be executed right there, so everyone else learns exactly what happens when they trespass on their property, and the thieves can't even breathe as shock turns to crushing fear. They break down, weeping and begging for forgiveness, swearing they'll end their career right now. Then Belena's friend snaps to it. She remembers she spotted this group in the archives, and it's built only for rich celebrities and traders. The aristocrats they hunted were always filthy, stuffing their pockets with taxes and bribes, until the demon king Zidane tore the truth out, exposed the nobles' corrupt deeds, and crushed their honor in disgrace. Vale says anyone who invades their lands doesn't deserve execution, and she orders the thieves to brace themselves. Then the Lord of Color pauses, thinks it over, and finally backs the princess's words. Lord Saint is moments away from slamming down a sentence on a theft case. Then he whips around to the elven bandits who ripped 8 tomatoes from their farm and declares it a grave crime. So yeah, everything will be under their command. Belena hung on Lord Saint Keaton's every word, then her face instantly shifted, and confusion hit her like a wave.